My hot pot restaurant clearly has no customers, but the waiters are busy all day. That's because everyone who comes here to eat is a messenger from hell. Not only are ox-headed and horse-faced regulars, even black and white impermanents frequently visit. 10 kings of hell have eaten here, and knelt and begged me to open a branch in hell. The bitter chill of failure hung heavy in the air of my Night Fragrance Hotpot Restaurant, a place that had become more of a tomb for my dreams than a thriving business. And as I sat there amidst the suffocating gloom of our final, pathetic meal, I felt the weight of my impending bankruptcy pressing against my chest like a physical burden. My staff sat in miserable silence, their faces etched with the same defeat I felt, until the front door creaked open, breaking the stagnant atmosphere and forcing me to mask my inner turmoil with a professional, albeit weary, smile as I rose to greet the 2 late-night arrivals. Even with the closed sign mentally looming over my head, the instinct to serve, to provide, burned within me an odd, stubborn tenacity that refused to let me turn a soul away. So I ushered them to a table before retreating to the back to scramble my crew into one last, half-hearted service. I was busy checking the supplies when I noticed Li Duang, my chef, standing rigidly by the stove, his face drained of color and his hands trembling violently as he clutched a ladle like a lifeline, his eyes darting toward the dining area with a look of pure, unadulterated terror that made my stomach tighten. I hurried over, my own pulse quickening as I grabbed his arm, demanding to know if he had finally lost his mind or if he had truly seen a ghost. But when he whispered in a voice thick with dread that those 2 figures outside weren't human because they were walking on their tiptoes, I felt a wave of skeptical annoyance wash over me, dismissing his fear as the product of exhaustion and dark superstition. Yet, Lee's absolute conviction was infectious, his desperate plea for me to test them vibrating with such sincerity that my logical defenses began to crumble, and with a heart hammering against my ribs, I approached the table with a contrived, trembling apology about an empty gas cylinder, forcing them to move. When I watched them glide to the next table, their heels never once making contact with the floor, the cold realization struck me with the force of a physical blow, turning my blood to ice and sending me scurrying back to the kitchen to huddle with a pale, shaking Li Duang. We whispered in the shadows, frantic and disoriented, until Li, his voice cracking, suggested that these were likely starving spirits drawn by the scent of a meal, and that if I played the part of the perfect host, we might just survive the night. It was a desperate, insane gamble, but I chose to cling to it, serving the steaming hot pot with hands that shook despite my best efforts to project an air of calm. After they devoured the food, their unnerving satisfaction manifested in a question about my secret seasoning, and when I stammered a half-truth about saffron, mentally noting that I'd actually foraged the strange, fragrant herbs from my own neglected garden, they lingered, their eyes holding a depth that made my skin crawl. 660, I managed to choke out, the price barely leaving my lips, before I was struck by a wave of crushing regret and existential terror at the thought of accepting currency from the dead. But then, one of them pulled a small, ancient-looking pouch from his robes, offering an eerie, knowing smile that made me feel like a child caught in a dangerous game. "I suppose the boss has figured out that we brothers aren't human, right?" he murmured, and for a fleeting, terrifying second, I felt my bladder weaken, certain that my life was about to end. However, they claimed to be Underworld envoys in a bind, desperate to host a VIP in my humble, failing establishment, and as I struggled to process this supernatural request, I found myself torn between the primal urge to flee and a strange, burgeoning curiosity. They mocked my fears, suggesting that while my restaurant was a graveyard in the world of the living, it could be a gold mine in the underworld. And when one tossed me the pouch of heavy, antique copper coins and a tattered, mysterious tome, I felt the trajectory of my life irrevocably shift. They vanished like mist, leaving me with the Yin-Yang Anecdote Record, a manual of the occult that opened my eyes to the terrifying reality that my hot pot required specific rituals like century-old willow leaves and incense to feed the dead, and as I pored over its cryptic pages, I knew there was no going back to my simple, mundane life. The next morning, fueled by a cocktail of adrenaline and newfound purpose, I sought out my friend, the Maoshan Daoist Zhang Baofeng, and when he appraised the ghost money with a gleam of professional interest, offering to trade it for 7,000 yuan, the realization hit me. I was now an agent of the supernatural, a broker between realms. I didn't hesitate to spend a portion of that profit on his protective talismans, my fingers brushing the coarse paper of the protection and evil-breaking charms, fully aware that in my new reality, the line between a profitable night of business and a lethal encounter with the unknown was thinner than a sheet of rice paper, and I was ready to face it. "I'll give these 10 talismans to you, Boss Lin, absolutely free of charge. If you happen to come across more of that ghost money, don't hesitate to reach out, as the price is always negotiable between friends," Zhang Baofeng said with a knowing, somewhat solemn glint in his eyes as he pressed the stack of weathered, yellowed paper into my palms. Before he turned to depart, his expression hardened, and he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a somber, gravelly register that seemed to chill the very air between us. "Listen well, Lin Ye, you haven't truly crossed the threshold into our line of work yet, and in this current, treacherous Dharma-ending age, the unorthodox paths are running rampant like a plague. If you intend to survive in this business, you cannot remain a mere spectator. You must cultivate enough strength to stand on your own 2 feet, or the shadows will swallow you whole." I watched him leave, his Taoist robes billowing slightly in the wake of his stride, and as the echo of his footsteps faded, I felt the heavy mantle of responsibility pressing down on my shoulders, prompting me to return to the quiet, dusty sanctuary of my restaurant to prepare for the inevitable. I meticulously soaked my ingredients in a basin of water infused with the bitter, sharp essence of century-old willow leaves, a process that felt like brewing, a potion of survival, and added a delicate dusting of the peculiar red flowers I had been cultivating in the backyard, their scent strange and cloying. Just as I was caught in the rhythm of this arcane preparation, my phone shattered the silence, displaying Jiang Shulin's name, and his voice on the other end was a frantic, ragged mess. "Boss Lin, please, you have to come over. Something terrible has happened to my dad," he pleaded, the sheer desperation in his tone leaving me no room to refuse. I wasted no time, setting aside my work and hurrying through the city's darkening streets to the residential complex where he lived, finding him waiting for me by the entrance, his face a mask of grief and anxiety as he pulled me aside. "Boss Lin, I'm terrified. My dad is acting like he's being haunted by something truly unclean, and I don't know who else to turn to, but could you possibly lend me some money to pay the priest?" I frowned, the request catching me off guard, but my instincts, sharp as a razor, told me to hold judgment until I saw the situation for myself. "Take me to him. Let me see what's actually going on," I commanded, and as we entered the living room, a scene of opulent, stifling tension greeted me. A wealthy-looking woman was bowing low, serving tea with trembling hands to an old, arrogant-looking Taoist priest and his young, smug-faced disciple. My attention, however, snapped immediately to Jiang De, who lay curled in a fetal position on his bed, his skin a translucent, sickly shade of gray, his body racked by tremors, and cold sweat soaking through the sheets as he moaned in a delirious, rhythmic panic about things trying to haunt him. I recalled the entries in my Yin-Yang Anecdote Record, the classic triad of cold sweats, physical decay, and bedridden hysteria, and everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. "Did your family invite this specific priest?" I whispered to Shulin, who shook his head, explaining that his mother had accidentally run into the old man 3 days ago, right before the symptoms began. The pieces of a sinister puzzle began to assemble in my mind as Shulin revealed that this priest was demanding 100,000 yuan to perform an exorcism, a sum that felt less like a fee and more like a ransom. I felt a surge of cold, calculated anger. Pulling a small, corked vial of black cow's tears from my pocket, I applied 2 drops to my eyelids, the stinging sensation momentarily blurring my vision before the supernatural world snapped into vivid, jagged focus. I looked again at the bed and saw it, a grip of suffocating, swirling black energy locked tight around the yang flames on Jiang De's shoulders, the light of his life force flickering like a candle in a gale. It was a textbook haunting, executed with predatory precision, and my hand instinctively curled around the cool, protective surface of an evil-breaking talisman in my pocket. I moved toward the window to tear down the curtains and bathe the room in the cleansing, natural light of the afternoon, but the old priest's voice lashed out like a whip, freezing me in place. "Don't you dare move," he barked, his face twisting into a mask of cruel, gloomy malice, and as he stared me down with dark, hollow eyes, he snarled, "That unclean entity is feeding on him. It could take his life at any second, and if you touch those curtains, you'll be responsible for his soul." He made a show of gathering his disciple and storming out, leaving a trail of heavy, oppressive tension in his wake, and as the door clicked shut, Shulin turned to me, his eyes wet and pleading. "Boss Lin, please, can you lend me the 100,000? I know it's a fortune, but I'll pay you back. I swear you're the only one who can save him." A heavy, suffocating sigh escaped my lips as I looked at the desperate, grief-stricken face of Jiang Shulin, knowing all too well that my own coffers were as empty as the hollow promises of a failing business. Nonetheless, the weight of his father's suffering demanded action, so I turned to my only beacon of knowledge, the Yin-Yang Anecdote Record, and buried myself in its yellowed, cryptic pages until a solution crystallized in my mind. The text spoke of the duality of the willow tree, a conduit for spectral energy, yes, but also a weapon capable of punishing it, and detailed the construction of the ghost-striking whip, a device forged from willow branches soaked in black goji berries and coated in the sacred, pungent incense ash of an altar. It was a tool of profound consequence, each strike capable of forcibly shrinking a malevolent spirit by 3 inches until its very essence dissolved into nothingness. Yet I felt a gnawing, cautious doubt that necessitated a call to Jiang Baofeng, whose voice crackled with professional gravity from afar. He confirmed that while the whip was a potent instrument, he couldn't personally intervene, advising me that if I combined its rhythmic punishment with the residual power of his evil-breaking talisman, I should be able to excise the parasite, a reassurance that bolstered my resolve as I scoured the city for the materials, working with frantic, singular focus until the whip was ready by nightfall. The atmosphere inside the Shulin residence was thick with a cloying, unnatural chill. When I finally crossed the threshold, my grip tightening on the crude, potent weapon in one hand and the vibrant, shimmering yellow of the talisman in the other. As I neared the bedside, the room's ambient light abruptly died, plunging me into a velvety, suffocating darkness that was shattered by the visceral, lunging shadow of a creature fueled by malice. I didn't hesitate. A backhanded, whistling swing of the whip connected with a sickening thud, followed by a piercing, otherworldly shriek that rattled my teeth, and before the entity could reform, I struck again, forcing it to shrink in visible agony before I slapped the evil-breaking talisman directly onto the black mass, causing it to boil and scatter into harmless embers. My heart, which had been hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, slowly regained its composure as the room's temperature began to normalize and Zhang Days labored. Rattling breath smoothed into the gentle rhythm of natural sleep. The subsequent scene of the family's weeping gratitude was almost too much to bear, yet my sense of triumph was short-lived when the fraudulent Daoist and his disciple appeared, their faces twisting with venomous, impotent rage upon seeing their easy mark recovered before they retreated into the shadows. I departed shortly after, feeling a strange, prickling sensation at the nape of my neck, and as I navigated the quiet, moon-drenched courtyard of the complex, two heavy, cold hands suddenly clamped onto my shoulders with a grip like iron vices. The old Taoist stood there, his eyes glinting with a murderous, predatory light as he fixed his gaze on the ghost-striking whip at my belt, his voice a low, raspy hiss that curdled the night air. "Boy, cutting off a man's livelihood is like murdering his parents. Remember that meddlesome people seldom see the dawn of a long life." They vanished into the dark, leaving me with a lingering, bitter chill that I didn't realize had manifested until I felt the warmth on my shoulders, the vital, protective yang flames that guarded my spirit flicker and vanish, extinguished by their parting curse. Oblivious to the sudden vulnerability of my soul, I retreated to my shop to focus on the mindless, grounding work of food preparation. Yet, as the night deepened and I made my way toward my apartment, a profound, aching soreness began to radiate from my shoulders, a physical symptom of the spiritual drain taking hold. The streets felt wrong tonight, inexplicably crowded with pedestrians who moved with a disjointed, rhythmic silence and donned strange, anachronistic clothing that defied the modern world. And as I navigated through this tide of eerie, displaced souls, I inadvertently collided with a young girl with shock pink hair. My reflex was polite, an instinctive apology, but as she looked up, her features contorted into a mask of terrifying, otherworldly horror, her jaw unhinging as she screamed, "You can see me." And in that heart-stopping second of revelation, every other pedestrian on the street halted in perfect, chilling unison, their eyes turning to lock onto mine with a hunger that turned my blood to ice. The world around me seemed to warp and dissolve in that terrifying instant. The mundane streetlights flickering out as the pedestrians, each one in hollow, spectral imitation of humanity, ceased their aimless wandering and locked their predatory, unblinking gazes upon me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical impact. I was surrounded by a sea of ghosts, and the pink-haired girl, now a horrific caricature of a human with skin stretched thin over a skull of pure malice, screeched into the silence, her eyes burning with an intense, otherworldly hunger as she lunged. I reacted on pure, desperate instinct, my hand snapping to my waist to unfurl the ghost-striking whip, the willowwood construction whistling through the air with a vengeful crack that sent the girl tumbling backward, her form flickering like a dying bulb. But there was no respite. A wave of minor spirits, drawn by the scent of my fading vitality, swarmed toward me with a synchronized, chilling tenacity that bypassed my rational mind and sent a bolt of raw panic through my veins. I didn't wait to fight a losing battle, slapping a shimmering protection talisman onto my chest as I spun on my heel and bolted, my boots pounding against the cold pavement, while the relentless wails of the pursuing horde echoed like a death knell in my ears. As I sprinted, the chaos of the chase forced my memories of the Yin-Yang Anecdote Record to the surface, an obscure passage about how a coffin, thick with the damp, heavy energy of death, acts as an impenetrable barrier that even persistent minor ghosts are loath to touch, and I steered my desperate path toward the coffin shop on the old street. I could see the dim, flickering lantern outside the shop, the owner just moments away from shutting the doors for the night, and I screamed out with every ounce of air in my lungs, "Wait, don't close yet." The shopkeeper, Cao Wanshan, startled by the manic urgency in my voice, turned to see me, a disheveled, frantic young man, and barely had time to offer a bewildered greeting before I barreled past him, ignoring his confusion as I dove headlong into the nearest heavy, wooden coffin and slammed the lid shut. Outside, the cacophony of the spectral swarm reached a fever pitch, only to abruptly die down as if hitting a wall, and I heard Cao Wanshan, realizing the gravity of the situation, scramble into a nearby coffin of his own. The silence inside my narrow, dark tomb was suffocating, yet I soon realized I wasn't alone. The space beneath me shifted, and the distinct, unmistakable chill of a non-living presence seeped into my skin, causing my pulse to drum frantically against my ribs. I tried to maintain a facade of calm, whispering, "No offense intended, truly, no offense," into the crushing gloom. But a woman's cold, sharp sneer cut through the air, her voice vibrating with a terrifying irony. "The kind of no offense where you're currently pressing your weight down on me." My fear-addled brain completely abandoned logic, and I blurted out the first ridiculous thing that popped into my head, promising her an exquisite, life-changing hotpot meal, desperate to appease the entity whose space I had invaded. She fell into a stunned, icy silence, and we remained in that tense, cramped purgatory until the faint, pre-dawn light began to bleed through the cracks of the coffin, signaling that the vengeful spirits had retreated. "The sun is rising," she whispered, her voice like grinding stone, "and the danger has passed. But you should know that your vitality is already hemorrhaging. 2 of your 3 yang flames have been extinguished, And if you don't find a way to restore that spiritual balance soon, you'll be marked prey for every ghost in this city. I scrambled out of the coffin, my limbs stiff and trembling, and finally beheld her in the dim shop light, an ancient, powerful specter draped in a regal red bridal gown that seemed to bleed darkness. And before I could process the shock, Cao Wanshan crawled out of his own coffin and let out a string of panicked curses, realizing I had been sharing space with the legendary Lady Red. She merely dismissed his alarm, mocking my foolishness with a strange, lingering amusement before I retreated from the shop, my mind racing. Once outside, I urgently dialed Zhang Baofeng, but his grim assessment offered no immediate relief, as he warned me that only he could reverse the two ghosts, patting the shoulders curse, and he was too far away to intervene. Left with no choice, I spent the remaining hours of the night crafting more ghost-striking whips with trembling hands, pinning my entire survival on the faint, glimmering hope that if I could just hold out until my scheduled meeting with the two Underworld envoys, my salvation, or at least a way to endure, might finally be within my reach. The oppressive stillness of the midnight air in my restaurant was a heavy shroud, and as I gripped the cool, willow wood handle of my ghost-striking whip, every fiber of my being was braced for the arrival of my supernatural guests. Then, a single, frigid droplet of water struck my cheek, a sensation so sharp and wrong that I jerked my head upward, only to find a roiling, malevolent mass of black water defying gravity as it hung, suspended above me, before plummeting like a deluge of ink. I didn't think, I simply reacted, my whip whistling through the air in a desperate arc that shattered the water's cohesion and sent it spraying uselessly against the walls. But the attack was merely a diversion. As my fingers fumbled for an evil-breaking talisman, the very floorboards beneath my boots betrayed me, turning into a swamp of churning earth that swallowed me up to my waist. Before I could regain my footing, the ground nearby erupted in a geyser of debris as a glinting, serrated blade launched itself at my chest with lethal intent, forcing me to snap a protection talisman against my own chest, the parchment flaring into blinding light and shattering into ash just as the metal deflected into the wall. My lungs were burning, my heart racing at a frantic, impossible pace, and just as a searing, violet-tinged ball of fire lunged toward me from the shadows, threatening to consume everything I had built. The air pressure in the room collapsed and a figure materialized in the center of the kitchen, his silhouette sharp and dignified in the archaic, flowing robes of an ancient official. "Are the dishes ready?" he asked, his voice calm, unfazed by the inferno currently lashing out at my skin. And though I could barely catch my breath, I gasped, "They've been ready for a long time. I've just been occupied." The middle-aged man simply let out a low, melodic chuckle, tossing a small, embroidered pouch into the air with a careless flick of his wrist, and in a blink, the swirling masses of water, fire, and earth were sucked into the void of the bag like dust into a gale. The envoy's brow furrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his stoic features as he murmured, "The 5 elements ghost-taming technique. It's a nuisance, but it's still missing one." And my eyes, darting in a panicked frenzy, landed on a single, lone chopstick on my table that was vibrating with a rhythmic, unnatural intensity. The envoy's gaze followed mine. He flicked a finger, and the final trace of the 5 parasitic spirits was extinguished in an instant. He tossed the bulging, pulsating bag into my trembling hands, and in a distant, hidden wooden cabin, I imagined the old Daoist of the ghost-taming sect let out a strangled, blood-curdling cry as he recoiled, clutching his chest while he spat a spray of arterial blood across his ritual altar, having lost his hard-earned connection to his 5 spirits. His disciple watched in sheer, paralyzed disbelief as the master railed against the impossible, vowing to uncover what kind of divine or diabolical being was protecting me. But his rage was cut short by the overwhelming, bone-chilling atmosphere that descended upon my restaurant entrance, heralded by the envoy's shout, "The VIP has arrived. Hurry, we must go out and welcome him properly." Hiding in the encroaching shadows, the old Daoist watched, his resolve wavering as he saw the envoy, yet he bared his teeth, determined that no matter my backing, he would end me tonight. But his arrogance vanished when a sudden, soul-freezing gale whipped through the alleyway, the moon itself suffocated by a tide of dense, oily black energy that eclipsed the stars. He paled, his eyes widening in primal, unadulterated terror as he felt the presence of a power that made his own arts look like child's play. Stammering, fierce ghostly winds, demonic energy blocking the moon. What kind of terrifying monster has been summoned here? Before he turned and fled into the darkness, abandoning his quest. It was then that a tall, ethereal figure emerged at the entrance, his presence commanding a reverence that rendered the air heavy and sacred. And as the Underworld envoy stepped forward with a grin, gesturing toward the newcomer who wore a tall ceremonial hat inscribed with the chillingly ironic words, "Make money upon sight," I realized with a shock that brought me to my knees that I was in the presence of the legendary 7th Lord, the White Impermanence himself, standing in my humble shop ready for a meal. The atmosphere in the restaurant had shifted from a state of mortal terror to a tense, suffocating reverence. The moment the White Impermanence, the legendary 7th Lord himself, settled into his seat, his white robes flowing around him like mist, as he reached into the void of his own aura to produce 2 slender, ethereal sticks of incense that morphed instantly into elegant chopsticks. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, each second stretching into an eternity as he took his first bite, his features freezing into an unreadable mask that sent a jolt of pure, cold adrenaline through my veins. The two Underworld envoys standing beside me seemed to stop breathing entirely, their faces pale as death, and I found myself contemplating the grisly prospect of being dragged to the deepest levels of the Underworld, to be rendered into oil, if the Seventh Lord found my humble cooking lacking. The silence shattered when a look of genuine, radiant surprise broke across his face, and he let out a satisfied, "Delicious," that felt like a reprieve from a death sentence, though my relief was cut short by the realization that such a feast was incomplete without drink. When the envoys' faces fell at their own oversight, I felt a surge of pragmatic inspiration, recalling the jars of wine I had been infusing in the back with the strange, fragrant red flowers plucked from my garden, a gamble that now felt like the stroke of genius I desperately needed. "Seventh Lord, please, grant me a brief moment. I have something that might perfectly complement your meal," I said, masking my tremors with a bow before darting into the kitchen to retrieve the small, earthenware yuge, returning to find the envoys watching me with expressions of newfound respect. Bai Wuchang toasted the air, the wine's sharp, potent aroma filling the room, and he praised its depth with such frequency that I began to feel the heavy weight of his favor, an intuition confirmed when he fixed his enigmatic gaze upon me after the final bite. "Boy, your craft is commendable, and I am not one to accept such hospitality without offering something in return," he remarked, his tone shifting from casual to ominous as he pointed a pale, slender finger at my forehead. "Your glabella is marred by a dark, ominous glow, and you are currently strangled by the lingering aura of death. I have a method to preserve your life, but whether you possess the insight to grasp it is entirely up to you." I stared, bewildered, as he pointed to the tall, ceremonial hat resting on the table, where the characters' fortune upon meeting seemed to glow with a life of their own, and before I could even begin to process the weight of his riddle, he vanished, turning his attention to the envoys. "I shall deal with the mess you two have orchestrated. Come, we have spirits to collect," he commanded, and the envoys, casting me looks of profound gratitude and warning, pressed a collection of artifacts into my hands, the soul-morning staff and soul-reaping chain, before they reached out to firmly pat my shoulders, a sensation that felt like ice shattering, signaling that the malicious curse of the ghost-patting shoulder had been undone. They vanished into the ether, leaving me alone with a hoard of supernatural treasures, 1,000 gleaming ghost coins, pungent black incense, and the heavy, grim weight of the morning staff, all of which I carefully sequestered, knowing full well that the old Daoist who had cursed me would not simply walk away from the humiliation of losing his 5 spirits. My premonition proved correct the following night, as I sat in the darkened, hollowed-out silence of my restaurant, waiting in the shadows until 2 familiar, malicious silhouettes emerged from the gloom, the old Daoist and his sycophantic apprentice, their presence turning the air acidic with greed and murderous intent. "Drag that brat out and make him spill the location of my 5 spirits," the master hissed, and without a second's hesitation, the apprentice surged into the shop, his fingers flying through complex, twisting hand seals to initiate the ghost-summoning curse. Masses of roiling, corrosive black energy erupted around me, seeking to bind my limbs and sap my spirit, but I didn't tremble. With a calm, cold focus, I slammed the black talisman the envoys had gifted me against my own chest, the dark, protective energy instantly erupting to coat my body in a shroud of shadow that mirrored the very darkness they had unleashed upon me, signaling that the hunter had now become the prey. The air in my restaurant grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and rot as I stood my ground, my hands closing firmly around the cold, unnerving textures of the morning stick and the soul-reaping chain. I didn't waste a moment on dialogue, instead, channeling my intent into the morning stick and swinging it with a decisive, sweeping arc that tore through the encroaching shadows. The mass of black energy that had been threatening to envelop me gave off a high-pitched, soul-shattering shriek before dissolving into nothingness, its essence shattered and scattered. The apprentice, who had been sneering just seconds ago, recoiled as if burned, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief as he sputtered, How could you possibly possess the sacred artifacts of the Underworld envoys?" I offered him no words, my silence serving as a cold, sharp blade, and I lashed out with the soul-reaping chain, its iron links rattling like teeth as it sought to bind him. He barely managed to twist away, the chain whistling through the space he had occupied a heartbeat before, and he scrambled toward the door, fleeing in a pathetic, clumsy panic. The old Daoist, however, remained rooted to the spot, his brow furrowing as he pulled a small, tarnished bell from his robes, its chime a piercing, discordant sound that cut through my senses. Ding-ling. "Sever the ghost thread, evil spirits from all directions. Hide no more. Heed my command. Come." The very fabric of the air seemed to fray, and out of the resulting tears appeared countless wailing masses of black energy that swarmed like locusts, diving straight for my throat. I countered with the soul-reaping chain, a desperate, fluid motion where the iron links acted as a vacuum, greedily drinking in the black energy wherever they made contact. But the old Daoist, realizing his minions were being harvested, shouted, "The heavenly gate is open. Evil spirits, return quickly." In a horrific display, the energy reversed its trajectory, spiraling into the master's own body until his physical form contorted, his features twisting into a beastly, unrecognizable snarl as dark, oily vapor began to bleed from his pores. If my 5 spirits hadn't been lost to me, if my vitality wasn't already flickering on the brink of death, I wouldn't need to resort to such base tactics to crush a novice like you, he roared, his voice layered with 1,000 spectral echoes. I gripped my artifacts until my knuckles turned white, every instinct screaming at me to defend. But he crossed the room in a blur of speed, his palms striking me with the force of an avalanche. My protective black talisman shattered, crumbling into useless gray powder, and even the morning stick and soul-reaping chain, those gifts from the Envoys, withered into brittle ash in my hands. The old Daoist loomed over me, his smug, triumphant expression radiating pure malice as he hoisted me into the air by my collar, gasping for breath as the room spun in dizzy, black and white patterns. With your borrowed power reduced to dust, tell me, boy, where are my 5 spirits? Just as the darkness began to close in, leaving me staring into the abyss of his cruel eyes, the final words of Bai Wuchang pierced through my haze, and I mustered every remaining shred of my spirit to scream at the top of my lungs, fortune upon meeting. The Daoist hesitated, his gaze darting behind me in sudden, unadulterated shock, and in that split second of distraction, thick, verdant vines erupted from the floorboards like serrated serpents, lashing out to coil around his limbs in a suffocating embrace. This is Wenjin grass? He choked out, his arrogance crumbling as he let me drop to the floor, but the grass was relentless, weaving tighter and faster around him. Desperate, the apprentice rushed back in, oblivious, shouting, "Master, I'm here to save you." But the Daoist's eyes gleamed with a predatory, cold light. He grabbed the boy's shoulder, his fingers sinking into flesh as he initiated an ancient, forbidden art. The apprentice's face turned from concern to sheer, bone-deep horror as he realized his master's intent, and he shrieked, "This is the karmic substitution. Master, you're sacrificing me to save yourself?" The old man sneered, "I never taught you that, which means you've been secretly studying the Linen Ghost Taming book, you treacherous rat." But the boy, now desperate and betrayed, shrieked back, "If I hadn't read it, how would I have known you were planning to drain my life to escape your own death?" And he lunged with a hidden dagger, plunging it into his master's side. The old Daoist kicked him away with a savage, final blow, spitting out a massive, viscous mouthful of blood, his face pale and trembling as he realized the horrific cost of the art he had just deployed, muttering, the price of this karmic substitution. It is truly, unforgivably terrifying." The old Daoist's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated malice, his eyes burning with a desperate, hungering hatred as he spat at me. "Kid, it is truly impressive that you've managed to push me to this desperate brink. But make no mistake, your miserable existence ends right here and now." He reached into the inner folds of his robes and withdrew a sinister, jagged black token that seemed to drink in the ambient light of the room, his voice rising into a manic, chanting crescendo as he howled, "Among all 300 unorthodox paths, only the ghost-taming sect dares to claim the throne. Crimson token, emerge. Evil spirits, gather and heed my summons." A sudden, bone-chilling gale shrieked through the restaurant, the windows rattling violently as if trying to flee from the encroaching darkness, and he leered at me, triumphant, "Today is your death date, boy. With my cultivation depth, this crimson token can command 100 malevolent spirits from the surrounding vicinity to tear your soul to shreds." My skin crawled, a cold sweat breaking across my brow, but I didn't succumb to the panic radiating off him. Instead, I felt a dangerous, calculated fire ignite in my chest. "You leave me no choice, old man, you force my hand," I murmured, my voice steady despite the chaos. As I pulled 6 sticks of black incense from my inventory and struck a match, the flames licking hungrily at the dark, pungent sticks. This was the legendary soul-summoning ghost-attracting incense. A single stick alone would draw the attention of every lingering entity within a 10-mile radius, and the old Daoist's eyes widened in genuine horror as he watched me ignite all 6. He let out a jarring, discordant cackle that sounded like scraping metal. "6 sticks, you reckless fool. You're not summoning help, you're calling for an apocalypse. Every ghost within 100 miles will descend upon this shop. I possess the crimson token to command my 100, but you have nothing. You're playing with fire and burning yourself to ash." I merely sneered, my expression hardening into one of cold, iron resolve as I looked him dead in the eye. "Your precious crimson token might be able to corral 100 spirits, but I wonder, old man, can it withstand the hunger of 1,000? The old Daoist's laughter died in his throat, replaced by a choking, gargling sound of realization, and he stammered, "Extinguish that incense, you lunatic. If you don't, we'll both be torn apart here." I flashed him a grin that was far from friendly. Who exactly said I was going to die? Suddenly, the night outside erupted. A tide of wandering souls and wild, starving ghosts surged toward the restaurant like a dam breaking, their collective wails turning the air into a cacophony of madness. I reached into my bag and pulled out a heavy pouch of glinting ghost coins, the currency of the dead, and held it high. "Whoever brings me the head of this old Daoist, whoever delivers his soul to me, receives 500 ghost coins." The old Daoist's jaw dropped, his face paling to a ghostly gray. "Where in the hell did you get that many coins?" Before he could find an answer, the horde of spirits, as if injected with a frantic, lethal adrenaline, surged past him, crashing into his defenses with overwhelming ferocity. And the combat was a blurring, horrific spectacle of clawing limbs and tearing essence, until finally, a small, childlike entity drifted forward, clutching the fading, translucent wisp of the Daoist's soul. I tossed the pouch of 500 ghost coins to the child, but as I turned to dismiss the rest of the gathering, I noticed them hovering their dead, hollow eyes fixed on me with a hunger that hadn't been satisfied. I straightened my posture, my voice projecting a commanding, icy authority that cut through the gloom. I use my money to buy his life, and I have enough to buy yours, too. Either vanish back into the shadows this instant, or I will scatter your souls into nothingness. The threat hung heavy, and sensing the sheer, uncompromising killing intent behind my words, the ghosts finally dissipated into the mist. I turned my attention to the wisp of the old Daoist soul, brandishing an evil-breaking talisman with calm, precise movements as I approached the flickering remnant. Spare me, please. I'll teach you every secret art I possess. I'll hand over the linen ghost taming book. I'll give you the crimson token. He shrieked, his voice thin and desperate, but I only let out a cold, sharp laugh. You truly are a fool if I kill you. All of those things become mine by default. Without a hint of hesitation, I slapped the talisman onto his soul, and with one final, miserable gasp, the old Daoist vanished into absolute oblivion. I rummaged through his discarded belongings, securing the linen ghost taming book, the bronze bell, and the powerful crimson token, before turning my gaze toward the apprentice, who lay beneath the twisted, dying vines of the Wenjin grass, appearing lifeless. Stop playing dead, I called out calmly. The apprentice slowly climbed to his feet, a dark, calculating expression replacing his earlier fear. I didn't think you'd see through it. How did you know? I chuckled, the sound devoid of warmth. I was bluffing, but don't look so crestfallen. I was going to finish you off regardless. He sighed, looking at me with a twisted sense of admiration. Ruthless, merciless. You're truly a natural fit for the unorthodox path. He mused, then looked at me intensely. But tell me, do you even understand what the unorthodox path truly is? I looked back at the darkness, my voice a whisper. I know enough. It's the pursuit of witchcraft and those twisted arts that harm men from the shadows, invisible and without remorse. Yes, but you're only scratching the surface. To truly define the unorthodox path, one must look at the rot inherent in the master-disciple bond, a relationship built entirely on the foundation of mutual destruction, I explained, watching the apprentice with a mixture of pity and cold calculation as he sat amidst the constricting vines of the Wenjin grass, his voice steady even as he stared his own mortality in the face. The disciple obsesses over the moment he can slit his master's throat to seize his techniques, while the master spends every waking second using his apprentice as a vessel for evil arts or a battery for refining ghosts, holding back the true secrets of his craft to ensure he remains indispensable. It is a cycle of betrayal that keeps the unorthodox path perpetually steeped in blood and paranoia. The apprentice nodded slowly, an eerie calm washing over his features, and I couldn't help but ask, is this philosophical lecture meant to beg for your life, or are you hoping I'll be moved by your honesty? He laughed, a dry, rasping sound, and shook his head. Given the methods you've used tonight, I know well enough that you wouldn't grant me mercy. I am merely here to fulfill the destiny I chose when I stepped onto this path. I was momentarily baffled, squinting through the dim, stagnant air of the restaurant. Your destiny? I prompted, and he looked up at the ceiling, his eyes distant and strangely content. My life was always destined to mirror my master's. I would take in a disciple of my own, spend decades embroiled in magical feuds and soul-shattering battles, and eventually, I would succumb to a blade in the dark, held by the very hand I had trained to replace me. But the truth is, I cherish this life, because I belong to the unorthodox path. I have lived for this moment of transition, and now I simply want to take in a successor and allow them to finish what I started. A chill that had nothing to do with the spirits in the room crawled down my spine as I realized exactly what he was offering, and without a heartbeat of hesitation, I dropped to my knees, my voice dropping to a ritualistic tone. Disciple Lin Yi pays his respects to master. The apprentice's face softened into a look of profound, chilling satisfaction, and as he began to unspool the history of the ghost-taming sect from its inception and its long, shadowed glory to its slow, tragic decline, he entrusted me with the secrets of the core 5 elements, ghost-taming art, identifying the crimson token as the symbol of the sect leader and the spirit fiend bell as the absolute supreme treasure of our lineage. Remember, he whispered, his voice fading as the life drained from his vine's entangled body. Whether you walk the orthodox path or the unorthodox, power is the only measure of truth. With it, you define the world as you see fit. A faint, almost peaceful smile touched his lips, and he gestured toward his own chest. Your grandmaster, my master, hid a painting in his pocket. It is the final key. Master, do what you must do. I didn't falter. I retrieved a heavy, sharp machete, and with a voice ringing with solemn, iron-willed duty, I declared, Disciple Lin Ye respectfully sends master to his death. The deed was done, and once the quiet had returned to the shop, I turned my feverish attention to the linen ghost-taming book, a tome bound in death that promised mastery over the nether yin energy required to drive ghosts to my command. For an exhausting, transformative week, I retreated into a rhythm of constant study, decoding occult sigils by day and refining my internal cultivation by night, until I felt ready to confront the bag containing the 5 spirits that I had claimed from the late, pathetic old Daoist. I knew from my studies that each of these 5 elemental spirits had been forged through the sacrifice of 100 souls, a monstrous cost that the old man had paid over a lifetime of butchery. But now, the fruit of his sins sat waiting. masterless and drifting in the void of the spirit bag. I released them, their forms coalescing in the room like shifting smoke, and I held out my palm, drawing a line of my own essence blood to tether them to my will. Heaven has its spirits, earth has its threads, and the 5 spirits each claim their divine dominion. The former master has returned to the dust, and today, the successor inherits their power. As the ancient incantation left my lips and the residual aura of the previous master evaporated into the rafters, I felt a jolting, visceral snap in my soul, a permanent, rhythmic connection to the 5 little entities that now orbited my consciousness, their power now mine to command. I collapsed into a brief deep sleep, but the peace was short-lived. The next morning, the jarring, electric trill of my phone cut through the silence of the shop, jolting me awake to the reality that my new life as the successor to the ghost-taming sect had only just begun. The shrill, piercing ring of my phone sliced through the quietude of my morning, dragging me from the heavy, dreamless slumber that always followed a night of dark ritual. I fumbled for the device, my voice still thick with sleep as I answered, "Boss Lin, are you still alive?" And I could only manage a weary, dry yawn in response. Alive, though barely, I'm still sleeping. The voice on the other end, unmistakably that of my acquaintance Zhang Baofeng, vibrated with a frantic, uncharacteristic edge as he asked, "Boss Lin, you were dealing with some heavy hitters in our trade, is it finally resolved?" I rubbed my eyes, the memory of the night's blood and dust still fresh in my mind, and muttered, "Yeah, it's finished." I took them both out. The silence that followed was absolute, until a stunned, incredulous, "Holy crap, really?" erupted from the receiver, causing me to smirk, despite the lingering exhaustion. Zhang Baofeng quickly composed himself, clearing his throat to hide his shock before adding, "Look, Boss Lin, I've got an urgent matter to discuss. Meet me at 6:30 this evening." I spent the day preparing, and by late afternoon, I was behind the wheel of my aging, rattling second-hand minivan, the engine protesting every mile as I navigated toward the rendezvous point. When I stepped out, Zhang Baofeng's eyes widened, his gaze sweeping over me with a mixture of curiosity and sudden, sharp wariness. "Boss Lin, I haven't seen you for a few days, but your yin energy is suffocatingly heavy. Tell me, you didn't go and start cultivating the unorthodox path, did you?" I gave him a knowing, cryptic smile, keeping my hands tucked in my pockets. "I took a master. You could say I've officially entered the trade." He looked ready to drop his tea. "Took a master? Who on earth would take you in?" My smile widened. "The apprentice of that old Daoist I just disposed of." Zhang Baofeng recoiled as if I'd struck him, his face twisting in disbelief. "Holy hell. You slaughtered your master and your grandmaster immediately after initiating the apprenticeship. A kind master and a filial disciple. Indeed, that's the quintessential style of the unorthodox path, you madman." His demeanor shifted instantly. The familiar, friendly air vanished, replaced by a surge of overwhelming righteous pressure as he took a firm step back, a blistering Daoist aura erupting from his core. "Since you've crossed the line into the unorthodox, I have no choice but to take action and eliminate you, the next great menace." I stood my ground, my heart hammering a warning, though I couldn't help but feel a flash of sarcasm at his theatricality. His sudden shift in personality was so jarringly swift that I couldn't help but sigh. "Daoist Zhang. Even the orthodox path has its fair share of villains and saints, and even within the unorthodox, there are those of us who carry a conscience. I may be on the unorthodox path, but I am a good unorthodox cultivator." Zhang Baofeng held the pose for a heartbeat longer before erupting into a boisterous, rolling laugh, his aura dissipating as quickly as it had appeared. "Relax, I'm just messing with you. I'm not nearly that pedantic. Since you've officially entered the fold, let's stop the formalities, address me as a fellow Daoist from here on out." I relaxed, nodding in appreciation as I asked, "Then, fellow Daoist Zhang, what was the real reason you called me here?" "I wanted to introduce you to 2 others in the trade. You've entered this life, so it's time to see if you have the stomach for what's coming next." We stepped into the restaurant, and I immediately felt the weight of 2 pairs of scrutinizing eyes upon me, both guests frowning as they parsed the dark, lingering aura clinging to my skin. An older man with a distinctive, thin goatee stood and cupped his hands in a traditional gesture, his voice smooth and precise. Shimen feng shui practitioner, Su Mingfu. Beside him, a woman sat with a rigid, icy posture, her eyes like shards of glass, Quanjin lineage, Qingjing sect Xia Ruyan. I dipped my head in acknowledgement, my tone measured and calm. Night Fragrance Hotpot Restaurant owner, Lin Yi. Zhang Baofeng stepped between us, waving a hand dismissively. "No need to get bogged down in the minor details, everyone, let's talk business." The room grew quiet as he explained the job. A factory had seen 7 deaths in a single month, each one a bizarre, unexplained drowning, yet the basin in question was barely half a meter deep, a pool shallower than a stride, and yet it claimed 7 lives? I asked, my brow furrowing as I searched for the logic. "Is there some malevolent entity hiding there?" Zhang Baofeng shook his head. "No, I've scoured the area repeatedly. There isn't a single trace of any supernatural interference. If it wasn't a spectral haunting, then the issue was almost certainly rooted in a fatal distortion of the local feng shui. That was my suspicion as well, which is why I've invited experts like you to help uncover the truth," he admitted. And as the trio finished their deliberation, they all turned their collective gaze toward me. "Brother Lin, you've just entered the trade. Why don't you come along to gain some real-world experience? The payout will be split evenly among us. I didn't hesitate, for I was acutely aware of the gaps in my practical knowledge, and this was the perfect opportunity to learn from veterans. All right, then I'll be relying on you esteemed fellow Daoists to look after me while we're out there. With the deal struck, I climbed back into my creaking, second-hand minivan, and soon enough, we were all driving toward the factory, embarking on my first real assignment as a practitioner of the unorthodox path. Brother, take a deep breath and steady yourself. There's no need to be this nervous, especially when fellow Daoist Shi is here. She's currently the undisputed #1 expert on the Earth ranking, and with her here, this matter is as good as solved, Zhang Baofeng murmured, his voice a low, reassuring rumble against the backdrop of the industrial landscape. I glanced over at the icy, composed woman, curiosity piqued, and asked, is fellow Daoist Shi really that formidable? Zhang Baofeng's expression shifted, a flicker of genuine admiration and wistful envy crossing his features as he leaned in closer. In our trade, we live and die by the rankings. Earth rank and heaven rank are the markers of true power, the elite strata where the legends reside. As for those rare few above them, the top 10 of the black rank, those are monsters capable of erasing an entire sect from the map with nothing more than a wave of their hands. To think Shi Ruyan has reached the pinnacle of the Earth rank at such a tender age. Truly, the tides of destiny favor the young, he sighed, shaking his head at the unfairness of it all. We moved on to the inspection, the factory grounds feeling oppressive and heavy under the weight of the surrounding terrain. Nestled in a natural basin, flanked by steep mountains on 3 sides and anchored by a rushing river, with 3 distinct mountain spring streams descending like silver veins to converge right at the factory's heart. A textbook, water-condensing wealth-gathering formation, I mused aloud, a half-remembered fragment of lore surfacing in my mind. Xu Mingfu, the Qimen feng shui master, looked toward me with sudden, sharp interest, his eyes narrowing. Brother Lin, you have a talent for feng shui. I kept my expression neutral, waving a hand dismissively. Not at all, I just happened to stumble upon the concept in a dusty old book once. Xu Mingfu nodded slowly, conceding. Still, you have the right of it. This was meant to be a fortune-gathering layout, but look at the mountain slopes. The willow trees are choking the life out of this design. Willows are notorious for anchoring yin and drawing down malevolent vapors, turning what was once a prosperity bringer into a yin-condensing evil-gathering formation. It's too clumsy to be accidental. Such a layout should have been crafted by a master, and yet, such a glaring flaw was left exposed. Si Ruyan, who had remained as silent and frigid as a winter morning, finally broke her vow of stillness. A crude formation like this wouldn't be enough to claim 7 lives in a single month. There is something far more malicious at work here than mere stagnant geomancy, she stated, her voice devoid of warmth. Just then, the factory owner, Pan Minghan, hurried toward us, his face a mask of sweating, desperate relief. Masters, thank the heavens, I've been waiting for you to arrive. We didn't waste time on pleasantries, following him straight to the site of the tragedy. As I stood before the shallow, unassuming pool, I felt the air grow thin and brittle. There were no overt spectral manifestations, no screaming apparitions, yet the water held a lingering, viscous taint of deep yin energy. The yin is trapped, refusing to dissipate into the natural current, I whispered, kneeling to place a hand near the surface. There is something buried beneath this, festering in the dark. Without waiting for permission, I channeled my will, and the earth spirit my newly acquired, subterranean scout burst from my sleeve and dove headfirst into the muck, vanishing into the earth. The effect on Xie Ruyan was instantaneous, her gaze sharpened into a glacial, lethal glare, her hand drifting toward her blade. You're a disciple of the ghost-taming sect, she hissed, the air around us crackling with the sudden, sharp scent of ozone and impending violence. The history of that sect was a stain upon the martial world, a legacy of carnage that had once forced the celestial master of Longhu Mountain to launch a solitary, blood-drenched crusade 30 years ago, a night that ended in the total annihilation of the sect, or so the world believed. Feeling the lethal weight of her suspicion, I didn't reach for my weapons, but instead looked her squarely in the eye. An old ghost from that sect tried to take my life not long ago, and I simply saw to it that he wouldn't get the chance again. I inherited the remnants of his path, but power is a neutral force. See Ruyan, it is the hand that wields it, not the path itself, that dictates whether one acts for good or for evil. The tension held for a suffocating heartbeat, the air heavy enough to crush bone, before she finally let out a long, slow breath and withdrew her hand, her gaze losing its killing intent. A moment later, the ground rippled, and the earth spirit surfaced, vibrating with the confirmation I had already sensed in my gut. There was a human corpse rotting in the dark silence beneath the pool. The factory manager stood frozen in a state of absolute, gaping denial, his face drained of all color as he stammered. A corpse. That's utterly impossible. We've had no one go missing here, and the pool is nothing more than a shallow basin. I didn't have the patience to argue with his ignorance, offering him a curt, dismissive nod as I signaled the others. Let's focus on the truth of what lies beneath before we jump to any conclusions, I stated, my focus shifting entirely to the dark, viscous water as I commanded the earth spirit to churn the muck. With a sickening, squelching sound, the ground gave way, and a geyser of frigid, suffocating yin energy erupted from the pit, thick enough to make my lungs ache. Boss Pan, this is no longer a place for a civilian, get out of here. Now, I ordered, and as the man scrambled away, the four of us leaped into the dark, hidden cavity without a second glance. The sight that greeted us in the subterranean chamber was enough to stop my heart. The space was illuminated by a macabre circle of nearly 100 flickering green oil lamps, casting dancing, sickly shadows against the walls. In the center, pinned to the earth like a grotesque specimen, lay a corpse pierced through the chest by a jagged wooden stake, the hilt of which was adorned with a single, vibrant red flower that sent a jolt of recognition through my soul. It was an exact replica of the strange flora growing in my own backyard. Zhang Baofeng stepped forward, his expression grave, and leaned in to inspect the body with a seasoned practitioner's eye. This remains has been festering here for at least 5 or 6 years, and yet, the oil in these lamps hasn't dried up, he muttered, his voice trembling as he reached toward the red flower with cautious fingers. By all the heavens, these are netherworld flowers. I never imagined I'd see these in the mortal realm. I felt a spark of unease, my curiosity warring with a primal sense of danger. Brother Zhang, surely they aren't that rare. I pressed, and he turned to me, his eyes wide. They don't belong in this world, Lin Yi. They only bloom under the bridge of helplessness in the deepest reaches of the underworld. When I asked about their properties, his explanation chilled me to the marrow. The flower was an object of absolute, concentrated yin, the ultimate delicacy for the unorthodox path, capable of elevating a mere zombie or ghost to nightmare levels of power, or providing an intoxicating, euphoric high to any spirit foolish enough to consume it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. No wonder the ghost envoys I served in my restaurant were so addicted to my hot pot, as it clearly carried the same volatile, addictive essence. While I was lost in thought, Xie Ruyan stood like a statue of ice, her gaze locked onto the lamps. But the fragile silence was shattered when Zhang Baofeng suddenly turned ghost white and recoiled with a panicked shout, retreating into the shadows. Old Zhang, what in the name of the ancestors is wrong with you? I demanded, my hand flying to my weapon, and he pointed a shaking finger at the center of the room, while brandishing a copper coin sword. I just heard the corpse's heart beating. It's alive. The air in the chamber turned stagnant and lethal, and as we all drew our blades, our senses strained against the gloom, hoping he had hallucinated the sound. But Zhang Baofeng's gaze was unyielding, his wind-listening ears rarely failing him. Xie Ruyan's voice cut through the tension like a razor, her composure replaced by pure, refined fury. 99 corpse oil lamps, a willow stake to anchor the soul, and a perfect circuit to harvest the surrounding yin. This creature isn't just a corpse, it's a vessel in the final stages of cultivation. Before we could strike, the shadows at the edge of the room coalesced into two distinct, malevolent figures. Earthly fiends trap them, disaster waters draw them in. Spirit-locking array, activate. The command echoed with a sickening finality, and before I could even draw a breath, thick, black iron chains lashed out from the darkness like vipers, binding me and my companions in an unbreakable, spirit-suppressing hold. Xie Ruyan struggled, her composure fracturing as she spat out the identities of our ambushers. Ranked 4th on the Earth rank, Li Buchun, and that coward Guo Niandong, ranked 11th. Xu Mingfu, usually so calm, looked ashen as he realized the trap. It's a true spirit-locking formation. It's designed to seal our dantians and render us incapable of channeling a single shred of spiritual energy. Xie Ruyan scoffed, a dark, dangerous light flickering in her eyes as she prepared to defy the impossible. The unorthodox path is nothing more than a brittle facade that shatters under the weight of true justice. My Daoist aura surges, and your pathetic little tricks break with a single sweep of my steel. Xie Ruyan's voice rang out, cold and melodic, as her long sword vaulted from its scabbard, arcing through the air like a sliver of moonlight before driving deep into the stone floor. The resulting shockwave of raw, refined Daoist energy detonated outward, instantly snapping the black iron chains of the spirit-locking formation like dried twigs. Li Buchun, standing in the shadows with a serpent-like smirk, barely flinched, merely clapping slowly, breaking my formation with such effortless grace. Truly, as expected of the legendary fairy Xia, he crooned, though his eyes remained as predatory as ever. Xie Ruyan's face darkened, a lethal, crystalline glint surfacing in her eyes as she locked onto him. You two have stained the earth with the blood of the innocent. You have long since forfeited the right to walk beneath the heavens. You deserve nothing but immediate execution. Li Buchun's smile didn't reach his eyes as he countered, Fairy Xia, we aren't fools. We know exactly how formidable you are. Did you really think we would stand before you without being fully prepared? At his command, the horrific, staked corpse in the center of the chamber let out a sound like grinding bone and suddenly lurched upward, the wooden sword and the netherworld flower pinned to it, dissolving into a fine, obsidian mist that vanished into the body, unleashing a pulse of evil energy so foul and concentrated that the very air in the cavern began to warp and hiss. Xu Mingfu recoiled, his face drained of all color as he wheezed. That level of evil energy. It isn't just a corpse, it's a living disaster. Run. The creature moved with blurring, unnatural speed, hurtling toward us like a cannonball of putrefaction. Xie Ruyan slapped a desperate hand sealed together to intercept it, but the sheer force of the impact sent her reeling backward, her boots carving deep grooves into the ground. Panic flared in my gut. I had only signed up for a simple investigation to gain some experience, yet here I was, staring down the throat of an apocalypse, and I cursed my own curiosity for leading me into this death trap. Kid, you look lost, Li Buchun sneered, a roiling mass of corrosive black energy coalescing in his palm as he turned his sights on me. I didn't wait for him to finish his monologue, shouting, "Earth spirit, swallow the ground beneath him." The floor instantly liquefied, and Li Buchun let out a startled roar as his feet plunged into the hungry, shifting dirt. I didn't give him a second to recover. My fire spirit, a tiny, frantic orb of living combustion, tumbled into the air and unleashed a torrent of white-hot flame. But Li Buchun, ever the survivor, yanked a plain-looking piece of fabric from his robe and threw it into the path of the fire. The flames didn't just stop, they were hungrily swallowed by the cloth. The 5 elements ghost-controlling art of the ghost-taming sect. You're not just some brat, you're a practitioner of the unorthodox, a true ghost burial doctor. He flicked the fabric toward me like a whip, the material stretching into a monstrous, constricting shroud. I roared for the water spirit, and as the 2 elemental spirits collided with the strange artifact in a chaotic, swirling mess of vapor and heat, Li Buchun's face twisted in frustration. Damn, this kid. He's barely out of his teens and he's already refined 3 spirits. He's as ruthless as they come. Why haven't I heard his name in the Underworld circuit until now? Across the chamber, the combat was just as dire, with Zhang Baofeng and Xu Mingfu fighting tooth and nail to keep Guo Niandong at bay, their movements desperate and strained. As the fire spirit finally incinerated the magical shroud, Li Buchun hissed in annoyance. As I feared, my artifact is no match for this wretchedly ominous entity. I watched as Sheruyan, her robes billowing with power, slammed her hands into the floor. Qian, Kun, Li, 3-element pulse sealing array. 3 shimmering, geometric barriers slammed into existence, boxing the corpse into a crushing cage of light. Seizing the opening, I blurred across the room, appearing directly behind the distracted Li Buchun and commanding my fire spirit to strike, but Li Buchun shrieked, "Daoist Guo, assist me." Guo Niandong abandoned his defense against the others, throwing himself back to intercept my assault, using the momentum of his intervention to drive me back with a bone-jarring blow. Li Buchun ripped his legs from the earth, his mana spiking as he burned through his reserves to break my earth spirit's hold. This kid is far too resilient, it's not worth the cost. We retreat for now. Xie Ruyan, her eyes blazing with intent, prepared to unleash a killing stroke, but Guo Niandong whipped a blackened, cursed talisman at the light barrier with a malicious cackle, shattering the array into fragments and freeing the corpse to begin its slaughter anew. Watching the 2 villains scramble for the exit, Xie Ruyan unleashed a blistering wave of sword chi that tore through the air, catching the fleeing pair squarely in their backs and sending them stumbling, yet they were so desperate to escape that they barely registered the damage. While I stood back, observing the battlefield with a calculated calm, Xie Ruyan, Zhang Baofeng, and the others converged on the reanimated corpse, their combined efforts creating a desperate stalemate. But I chose a different path. I didn't care for the accolades of this struggle, I cared for the hunt. I bolted from the factory, my lungs burning as I sprinted into the night, hearing Li Buchun's panicked, high-pitched shrieks as he urged Guo Niandong, "Is your heaven-ascending rope ready yet?" Guo Niandong, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the magical artifact that dangled toward a swirling, ethereal white cloud, was nearing a state of complete hysteria, and I could hear Li Buchun's voice cracking with genuine, visceral frustration. Who in the hell is that brat? He's not even 20 years old, and he's already managed to refine 3 separate spirits. How is it possible that there isn't a single whisper of him anywhere in the underworld? Just as the rope locked into the cloud and began to pull them toward their escape, I burst through the factory doors, my arrival greeted by a furious curse from Li Buchun. How did that little bastard catch up to us this fast? He turned to flee, but I was already upon him. I drew my machete, the steel singing as it bit into his flesh, and I didn't stop. I hacked at him again and again, a blur of motion and raw, unadulterated ruthlessness, until the man lay still. Guo Niandong, watching from the rope, was reduced to a whimpering mess, his spirit shattered by the carnage I had unleashed, and he began to frantically scramble up toward the cloud. But I wasn't finished. I hurled my heavy machete with everything I had, the blade finding its mark with a sickening thud as it embedded itself deep into Guo Niandong's backside. He let out a piercing, miserable shriek that echoed through the night before he dove into the cloud and vanished, leaving me standing in the silence, feeling a prickle of annoyance that the second one had managed to slip away. I wiped my blade, crouched down, and meticulously searched Li Buchun's cooling body, my fingers brushing against a cold, metallic object, a token engraved with the number 4, the unmistakable mark of an Earth rank status. When I trudged back underground, I found Xie Ruyan, Zhang Baofeng, and Ku Mingfu gasping for air, utterly drained by their struggle against the corpse. Zhang Baofeng looked up, his eyes widening as he noticed my return. "Brother Lin, if those 2 manage to escape, just let them go. Are you hurt?" I simply tossed the bloody token onto the floor, my voice flat, hacked the one to death. The other bastard got away with a blade stuck in him. Zhang Baofeng scrambled to pick up the Earth-rank token, his jaw practically hitting the floor as he stammered, "Holy shit, Lin Ye, you actually slaughtered Li Buchun." I looked at him, genuinely unfazed. What's so surprising about a guy dying in our line of work? What does this stupid thing even do? Zhang Baofeng, still looking at me like I was a complete monster, explained that in our world, climbing the rankings was the quickest path to infamy, and the shortcut was simple. You kill the man whose name is on the list, and you take his spot. I weighed the heavy metal in my hand, a small, dark smirk touching my lips as I realized the implications. So, you're saying I'm officially ranked 4th on the Earth rank now? I turned my attention to the writhing, trapped corpse that remained the center of their focus, my tone sharp. Why haven't you finished this thing off yet? Xiaoruyan looked up, her exhaustion etched into the lines of her face. It's not as simple as you think. Daoist Ku had to burn his life force for the 4-water evil trapping array, and we are barely holding it together with my 3-element pulse sealing array, just to keep this monster from tearing us all apart. We are out of our depth. This situation is far too volatile for us to manage alone. We need to contact the Daoist Association immediately, Zhang Baofeng muttered, his fingers hovering over his phone with grim determination. Just as he started to dial, a shrill, piercing sound tore through the air, and a black, serpentine shadow exploded from the corpse's chest, hurtling through the chamber like a bolt of jagged lightning before diving directly into Ku Mingfu's trembling body. Xiaoruyan's eyes widened in alarm, her hand darting to her blade as she cried out, "No, it's attempting a forced possession." My muscles coiled, ready to spring forward and unleash my ghost-taming arts, but before I could act, Ku Mingfu let out a guttural, strained roar, his veins bulging as he fought the intrusion. "Get out of me!" With a violent shudder, the soul was ejected, but Zhang Baofeng didn't hesitate, snapping his wrist to launch a glowing, evil-breaking talisman at the exposed spirit. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and vanished into the night air, fleeing the factory. I started to give chase, my blood boiling with the intent to root the filth out once and for all, but Xiaoruyan blocked my path, her expression unyielding. "Let it go, Lin Yi. Our priority is the containment of this vessel." With a heavy sigh, I relented, watching as Zhang Baofeng finally managed to secure the line to the Daoist Association, effectively ending the immediate crisis. As the dust settled, Xiaoruyan turned to me, her gaze piercing yet strangely appraising. "Daoist Lin, the unorthodox path is fraught with corruption. If you truly wish to carve a proper place for yourself in this cultivation world, I have the connections to recommend you to a prestigious major sect." I offered her a tired, lopsided grin, shaking my head. "I appreciate the gesture, Fairy, but I've grown accustomed to my own brand of laziness. I prefer the freedom of my own walls over the suffocating structure of a sect." 3 days passed in a blur of mundane life at the restaurant, until Zhang Baofeng finally strolled into my shop, looking significantly more relaxed. "The association has successfully scrubbed the site," he announced, slapping a thick envelope containing 50,000 yuan onto the table as my payment. That night, as the moon climbed high, I opened my doors to the usual spectral clientele, and it wasn't long before 2 grim reapers crossed the threshold, leading a dejected, translucent soul behind them. "This must be the spot," one murmured, and I smoothed my apron, walking over with the practiced, cheerful hospitality I reserved for the Underworld's finest. "Gentlemen, welcome. Please, make yourselves at home." They were surprisingly courteous, the reapers nodding as they settled in. "Brother Zhao spoke highly of your hotpot, and since we're in the area on a reaping mission, we figured we'd see if the rumors were true." I knew immediately they were referring to Zhao Huan and Wang Jing, my contacts in the Underworld, but as I turned my attention to the soul they had brought in, my blood turned to ice, and the smile died on my lips. "Daoist Ku? What is his soul doing here?" I demanded, my pulse quickening. Did his lifespan reach its limit? The reapers exchanged a glance, their expressions shifting to one of professional hesitation. "Boss Lin, we really shouldn't be discussing this, but since Brother Zhao considers you one of our own, I'll be blunt. This man was in your line of work, and he didn't die of natural causes. His life was cut short by a magical duel." My mind raced, the cold realization settling deep in my gut as I asked when he had been killed. "Approximately 3 days ago," one of them replied. The date hit me like a physical blow. 3 days ago was the very moment we were fighting that corpse. If Ku Mingfu had been dead for 3 days, then who was the man who had walked out of the factory with us? Wait, when we fought to force the soul out of his body, could it have been that we didn't force out the evil entity, but rather expelled what little remained of Ku Mingfu's actual soul? Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded my senses. "Could you grant me a favor? I need to ask him a few questions," I pleaded, but the Reaper interrupted me with a shake of his head. "Boss Lin, it's a waste of time. Look at him, he's completely hollow, a mindless vessel. A cultivator's soul should be resilient and lucid even in death, but this one has been shredded." I began to stammer, "But he's a friend, and his physical body is still out there, entirely intact." Before I could finish my desperate appeal, the Reaper held up a hand, his eyes darkening. "Boss Lin, are you harboring some naive hope that you can force his soul back into that shell and resurrect him? It's a fool's errand," the Reaper said, his voice devoid of pity. "His 3 souls have already departed for the higher realms. Even if you tethered the spirit back to his flesh, the vessel would be nothing more than a mindless, rotting puppet." The crushing weight of reality settled over me, and seeing that there was truly no salvation left for Ku Mingfu, I let out a long, weary sigh and nodded. "Understood. Thank you for the honesty. Tonight's meal is on the house. Consider it a tribute," I muttered, watching the 2 grim reapers settle in to enjoy the hot pot with a professional contentment that felt jarringly out of place. I pulled out my phone, frantic to reach someone who might have an answer, but neither Zhang Baofeng nor Xiaoruyan would pick up. I paced the room, cursing their sudden, suspicious silence as the hours bled into morning. I finally trudged back to my rented apartment, my mind heavy with the grim implications of Ku Mingfu's death. When my phone finally chimed, it was Jiang Baofeng. I spilled the news about the Reaper's revelation, and his tone instantly shifted from casual to dead serious. What? Brother Ku was possessed? Lin Yi, listen to me. Whoever is wearing that man's skin has a background that will swallow you whole. Do not engage. If he shows his face, you contact us, and you do it immediately. I hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs, and as I stepped into my living room, the phone rang again. It was Shi Ruyan. I moved to answer, but my earth spirit, coiled deep within my dantian, suddenly surged with a violent, rhythmic warning that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I stopped dead, my gaze snapping toward the shadows in the corner of my living room, my voice dropping into a register of frigid, lethal calm. A guest entering a home without an invitation is one thing, but lurking in the dark? You've got some nerve, Daoist. A shadow detached itself from the wall, and I recognized the face of Ku Mingfu, though the energy radiating from him was utterly alien. You truly are sharp, Daoist Lin. I'd masked my presence with the utmost care, yet you sniffed me out before I even drew a breath. He chuckled, his eyes scanning me with a terrifying, clinical interest. A rookie who's been in the game for less than a month manages to slaughter Li Buchun, the fourth-ranked terror of the Earth ranking. I'm deeply curious just how many ancient spirits are hiding within that skin of yours. I narrowed my eyes, keeping my stance balanced and ready. I don't have your grotesque penchant for wearing other people's faces like a coat, Daoist. I am simply me. He frowned, the mask of the possessed man slipping to reveal a flick of genuine annoyance. So, you already know. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. You're visiting me in the dead of night, don't tell me you're just here to ask for a glass of water? A flash of murderous intent ignited in his eyes, but I didn't wait for him to strike. I summoned the 5 spirits, the air around me vibrating as they manifested in a defensive formation. Ku Mingfu's gaze swept over them, and a look of genuine surprise flickered across his features. You've refined all 5? TSK. Rare, indeed. I find myself wondering whose dark legacy you managed to inherit. I didn't blink. My Grandmaster and Master both died prematurely, so their techniques and these spirits naturally fell into my possession. His brows arched in a mockingly inquisitive expression. And how, pray tell, did they meet their end? I met his gaze with a cold, unwavering intensity. I sent them on their way myself, of course. The room plunged into a suffocating silence as he processed my words, his expression shifting from amusement to a chilling, twisted admiration. You really are a natural for the unorthodox path, aren't you? It seems the shadows are about to produce another prodigy. I didn't lower my guard. Did you come here to avenge Li Buchun's pathetic life? He waved a dismissive hand. Whether that fool lives or dies is of no consequence to me. If his end brings a genius like you into the light, I'm actually quite pleased. If I weren't so pressed for time, I'd be tempted to drag you into a lifelong friendship. He flicked his wrist, tossing 2 small, vibrating red bugs toward me, and I snatched them out of the air. These are mother-child telepathy go. Should you ever find yourself in need of aid, simply crush the child go, and I shall know exactly where to find you. With that strange, cryptic promise, he turned and vanished into the night, and in the exact moment of his departure, my phone buzzed again, Xia Ruyan's voice, cool and steady, coming through the receiver. Can I come in? She stood just outside my door, and I moved to open it, my mind racing with the weight of the night's revelations. I found Xia Ruyan standing just beyond my threshold, her slender fingers white-knuckled as she gripped the hilt of her sword, her gaze fixed intently on the dark, receding horizon, where the phantom presence of Ku Mingfu had vanished. He isn't far, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. If you move now, you might still catch him. She didn't turn, her expression a mask of cold, analytical frustration as she replied, It is pointless. The gap between our strength is too vast. Had there been any shred of opportunity to strike him down, I would have drawn my steel the moment he stepped into the light. We retreated into the living room, the air still heavy with the lingering chill of the encounter, and I reached into my pocket to produce one of the 2 red, writhing mother-child telepathy goo that he had left behind, pressing it into her palm. Take this, I instructed, sensing her hesitation. He knew you were lurking just outside the door. That's precisely why he gifted me 2. He wanted us to be linked. She gazed down at the insect, its faint, rhythmic heartbeat pulsating against her skin, and looked back at me with a softened, albeit still guarded, resolve. So long as you do not stray into the darkness, remember that you have an ally if you find yourself cornered by that monster or worse, do not hesitate to reach out. With that brief, uneasy pact sealed, she vanished into the night, leaving me to my thoughts as I prepared for the shift at the restaurant. Business had become a surreal routine. The word had clearly spread among the ranks of the underworld, as more grim reapers were appearing at my door every night, drawn by the unique, lingering spirit fragrance of my broth. Zhao Huan and Wang Jing walked in a few hours later, their ethereal presence momentarily dimming the fluorescent lights as they ushered in a terrified, trembling soul. Brother Zhao, Brother Wang, you're finally back. I greeted them with a tired but genuine smile, and Zhao Huan grunted, loosening his ceremonial robes. The bureaucracy of the afterlife has been relentless lately, but we finally managed to carve out a moment of respite to indulge in your cooking. The soul they held suddenly dropped to his knees, clawing at their garments with a desperate, pathetic wail. Mercy lords, I'm too young, I have so much left to do, please, let me return. Zhao Huan rolled his eyes, his patience clearly wearing thin. Enough with the dramatics, your time was measured by the mandate of heaven, and it has run out. Follow us to the gate and accept your fate like a man. The reapers then turned their attention to me, their eyes scanning the frantic pace of the kitchen. Business is clearly thriving, Brother Lin, but surely you aren't planning to shoulder this workload alone forever? I let out a jagged, humorless laugh, wiping my brow. And who would I hire? I've tried, but the last two mortals who stepped into this kitchen were so terrified by the clients that they fled before I could even explain the pay. Zhao Han's eyes lit up with a sudden, pragmatic realization. Wait, this soul we have here, he was a master chef in his previous life. If you need hands, why not put him to work? I paused, skeptical. Is that even allowed? You built this shop to cater to us. A little creative staffing for the benefit of our stomachs is hardly a breach of the cosmic order. The next morning, as I was preparing to lock up, the man Song Jae walked through the entrance, his translucent, ghostly form finally settling into the reality of his existence. He took one look at me and let out a shuddering breath, the confirmation of his death finally sinking in. I'm Song Jae, Boss Lin. I'm ready to start. I set the boundaries immediately. I don't have many rules, but respect them. We open after midnight and close at 5:30, and you will work until your afterlife calls. Do that, and you stay. He nodded fervently, terrified that any failure would result in him being dragged back to the underworld's bleakest corners. I had just collapsed into bed when my phone erupted in a jarring, rhythmic vibration. Zhang Baofeng. Brother Lin, meet me at our usual spot. There is a matter of grave importance we need to discuss. Exhaustion clung to my limbs, but I climbed into my battered minivan and drove to the rendezvous, finding him waiting with an uncharacteristically smug, eager smile. Interested in a bit of freelance work, Brother Lin? He asked, leaning in. Protecting a high-ranking official from Myanmar, they're in the middle of a civil war, and the peace talks in Kunming have thrown the Daoist Association into a panic because they're severely understaffed for the security detail. I recoiled, hesitant. Brother Zhang, that's a political powder keg. If I slip up, the repercussions will be immense. He shook his head, his eyes burning with intensity. Stop being so modest. It's been less than a month, and you've already carved a bloody path through the rankings, killing Li Buchun and seizing the 4th spot on the Earth rank. The underworld is in an absolute frenzy. And you've been dubbed the ghost-controlling Daoist. That's not a title earned by a coward. I blinked, stunned by the sheer weight of the name. Ghost-controlling Daoist? Is it really that intense? Of course, it's badass. Besides, the association isn't relying solely on us. We're part of a specialized task force for this operation, Zhang Baofeng insisted, his eyes glinting with a mix of excitement and professional duty. I didn't need much more convincing. The sheer weight of the 100,000 yuan fee was more than enough to soothe my initial hesitations, so I climbed into my battered minivan, the engine rattling to life as we navigated toward the designated hotel. Upon arriving at the opulent lobby, I found a small assembly already waiting, an eclectic mix of practitioners who radiated distinct, powerful auras, 2 female cultivators with cold, composed expressions, a monk whose presence felt like a calming anchor, and an elderly man accompanied by a younger protege. Apologies for the delay, Zhang Baofeng announced as we stepped inside, his tone breezy. I had to bring a friend along, and it took a bit of navigating. The monk stepped forward, bowing slightly. Amitabha. It is well that Daoist Zhang has arrived in time. The old man, whose face was etched with a map of wrinkles and a wide, friendly smile, approached us with genuine warmth. Brother Zhang, I was beginning to fear you wouldn't make the cut. Zhang Baofeng waved a hand dismissively. Just a slight detour, but I believe you'll find my guest was worth the wait. I stepped forward, offering a traditional, respectful salute. I am Lin Ye, of the Yin-Yang Hotpot Restaurant. A flicker of uncertainty crossed the old man's face, a momentary lapse of recognition that seemed to tickle his memory, until his apprentice leaned in, whispering urgently into his ear, a comment that caused the old man's eyes to widen in stunned recognition. Master, that's the ghost-controlling Daoist everyone is talking about. The old man let out a sharp, surprised laugh. So it is, forgive my lapse, Daoist Lin. I am Huang, Sikai of the Yin-Walking faction, and this is my apprentice, Chen Jian. We've heard enough of your exploits to fill a book. The others, including the stoic monk and the 2 sharp-eyed women, began to scan me with newfound intensity, and Zhang Baofeng quickly stepped into the role of mediator, gesturing to them. This is Monk Deliang of Guangji Temple, and these 2 skilled practitioners are Yang Xia and Xia Yan, disciples of the Zhengyi sect's Manhwa branch. Our mission is simple. Hold the perimeter tonight until the main association heavy hitters arrive to take over. As the clock ticked past midnight, the hotel became a tomb of silence, the atmosphere thick and pressurized. I paced the hallways alongside Zhang Baofeng, the floorboards groaning under our feet. Old Zhang, do you honestly believe someone will be foolish enough to attempt an assassination here? I asked, my voice a low murmur. The association's intel is rock solid, they're coming for the official, he replied, though his eyes darted toward the shadows. But surely, no one is desperate enough to strike on the first night, I countered, to which he simply shrugged. Relax. If the night remains quiet, we still walk away with 100,000 yuan for a night of hotel patrolling. My skepticism turned to genuine surprise. You're telling me that even if the night is uneventful, that fee is guaranteed. Just as I processed that unexpected financial comfort, a psychic transmission from Chen Jian sliced through my thoughts, urgent and jagged. Daoist Lin, Daoist Zhang, there is a disturbance near the stairwell. A heavy, suffocating dread replaced my calm, and I looked at Zhang Baofeng with a grim smirk. So much for the easy money. We sprinted toward the source, finding Chen Jian in a state of visible agitation. What's the situation? I demanded. A shadow crossed the landing, and my master gave chase alone. He hasn't returned, and there's been total silence since, he explained. I braced myself to rush into the stairwell, but before my boots could hit the concrete, a frantic figure barreled around the corner, sprinting for his life. Earth Spirit, stand forth, I shouted, slamming my palm against the ground to manifest a jagged, monolithic boulder that blocked the path, momentarily stalling the figure, but my triumph was cut short as Huang Shikai scrambled up the stairs behind it, his face pale with terror. Daoist Lin, move back, he screamed, his voice cracking, and as I looked past him, my heart nearly stopped. A dense, writhing tide of countless figures was spilling out of the stairwell, an endless, swarming mass of animated corpses. What in the hell are those? I roared, drawing the soul-condensing bell from my waist. Evil spirit dolls from the Myanmar border, zombie-like constructs that are weak individually, but once they swarm, they're nearly indestructible. Huang Shikai yelled, gasping for breath. The sheer, overwhelming number of them made my skin crawl, but I didn't falter. I jerked the bell upward, and the air around us shattered into a freezing, supernatural gale. Ring! Ring! The sound echoed like a death knell through the hotel, and I poured my essence into the command. 10,000 ghosts appear. Spirits of the 8 directions, cease your hiding. I command you to heed my call and emerge. Chen Jian's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief while staring into the swirling vortex of spectral energy that had suddenly manifested in the hallway. Master, look, a massive horde of ghosts just tore through the veil. Huang Shikai, initially struck by the sheer scale of the manifestation, felt his fear dissolve into a state of shocked, pleasant surprise. Daoist Lin, I truly had no idea your power was this profound. To maintain control over such a vast legion of restless souls, it's unheard of. I didn't break my focus, my fingers still locked firmly around the vibrating soul-condensing bell, and I shot him a quick, wry look. Don't flatter me, Huang, I'm not controlling them. I'm just buying their cooperation. Huang Shikai stood rooted to the spot, completely dumbfounded. Buying them? What in the world do you mean? If you aren't suppressing them, what happens when they realize you have no leash on them? What if they turn on us? I ignored his rising panic, my jaw set with cold, pragmatic resolve as I turned toward the encroaching swarm of evil spirit dolls and let out a roar that echoed off the hotel's reinforced walls. Listen up, you lot. Every one of these puppet creatures you destroy is worth 10 ghost coins. The effect was instantaneous and electrifying. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and rot as thousands of local wandering souls and opportunistic wild ghosts surged forward in a hungry, mindless stampede to claim their bounty. Chen Jian stood by, mouth agape, his worldview visibly fracturing in real time. Master, is it even possible to use high-level spellcraft like this? Is this legal in the cultivation world? Huang Shikai shook his head, his own eyes struggling to process the chaotic spectacle. This is a first for me, boy. I've never seen anyone treat the spirit world like a mercenary army. While the hallway devolved into a brutal, frantic war of attrition, high up on the wall, a small, unassuming gecko clung to the molding, its eyes tracking the carnage with calculated precision. Inside a hidden room buried deep within the hotel's architecture, a woman's face contorted into a mask of pure, venomous rage. Damn it, how is this even possible? This young brat is barely out of diapers, yet he's summoning the entire local underworld to swarm my puppets at once. A man standing in the shadows behind her, his aura heavy and oppressive, signaled for silence. Lord Ace of Spades has made his mandate clear. The official must be erased from this plane before the sun rises, regardless of the cost. Do not let this interference rattle you. Check the perimeter and move. She tapped into her connection with the gecko, preparing to reposition it for a better vantage point, but the air suddenly shimmered with a dense, earthy vibration. Before she could react, my earth spirit, which had been lurking deep within the plaster, lunged out with the speed of a striking cobra, swallowing the gecko in one massive, hungry gulp. The woman shrieked as her connection snapped, her face turning ashen. My summoned beast. It's gone. He killed it. How could he possibly have detected such a subtle spy? The man beside her grunted, his own brow furrowing in confusion. That's impossible. Your summon possesses no spiritual signature. It's practically a ghost. Who is this kid, and what kind of sensory arrays is he running? Meanwhile, in the hallway, the tide began to turn as my improvised army tore the evil spirit dolls to shreds, their spectral limbs ripping through the wooden constructs with ravenous efficiency. I began fishing into my storage for ghost coins, tossing them into the air to satisfy the bloodthirsty horde. But a sharp, biting cold settled in my chest as I realized the speed of their consumption. This is working perfectly, but it's burning through my savings like wildfire, I thought, my heart sinking as I counted the remaining stash. I paid out the last of the front line, only to realize my pockets were empty. That's all for now, lads. The rest of you get your pay tomorrow, I shouted, feeling the phantom pressure of thousands of expectant, hungry eyes. Just as I hoped the carnage had reached its end, the floorboards at the end of the hall splintered as if hit by a sledgehammer, and a single, ancient wooden puppet stepped out from the wreckage. Huang Xikai stepped forward, his staff materializing in his grip, his eyes focused. "Let me handle this." Yin and Yang walk, traversing the threshold of the living. Let the Yang energy ignite the flame, break the seal, and shatter the evil. He breathed a torrent of white-hot, righteous fire toward the puppet, but the creature stood stoically within the inferno, the flames licking at its wooden skin without leaving so much as a scorch mark. What? It's completely immune to fire. I didn't hesitate, sensing the weight of the threat. Earth spirit, strike. I slammed my hands together, forcing the ground beneath the puppet to liquefy and turn to quicksand. But the wooden horror remained rooted to the spot, immovable as a mountain. My expression darkened, the chill of the situation sinking in. Standard arts won't work, it's shielded. Before I could swing the bell again to initiate a more complex ritual, Yang Xia and Sha Yan blurred past me, their blades humming with blue, lethal energy. Talisman invites the divine. Let the heavens descend with the strike of the thunder. They leaped into the fray, their swords trailing crackling arcs of lightning, intent on shattering the puppet's unnatural defense. The two disciples from the Manhwa branch of the Zhengyi sect, Yang Xia and Sha Yan, moved in perfect, synchronized harmony, their blades carving twin arcs of blinding lightning through the stale hotel air as they struck the wooden puppet from opposite sides, but the impact resulted only in a sharp, metallic clang that vibrated through my very marrow. The puppet was utterly unscathed, an unfeeling construct of malice, and in the next heartbeat, its lidless eyes snapped open, glowing with a stagnant, cursed light. Before the two women could even recoil, a wave of concussive force exploded outward, slamming them into the reinforced hallway walls and sending them collapsing to the carpet as they coughed up bright, crimson blood. My heart seized this wasn't just some common spirit, and I lunged forward alongside Huang Xikai, combining my ghost-taming arts with his yin-walking strikes, yet, despite our combined onslaught, the puppet's movements were fluid, precise, and entirely oppressive, pushing us back until we were gasping for air. Just then, a familiar shout erupted from the gloom behind the construct. "Brother Lin, I'm here. Hold your ground." It was Zhang Baofeng, charging into the fray with his Maoshan talismans glowing like molten gold, and I felt a wave of relief, shouting, "Old Zhang, your timing is impeccable." I braced for a decisive blow, but the puppet's reaction was instantaneous. With a motion so fast it was barely a blur, it whipped a heavy, wooden limb around, landing a monstrous slap that sent Zhang Baofeng tumbling through the air like a discarded doll. "What in the hell?" I cursed, my voice cracking with disbelief as I scrambled to maintain my footing. "Are you even serious right now?" The situation threatened to spiral into total catastrophe until Monk Deliang arrived, his face a portrait of serene focus, as he clamped his palms together and roared, "Prajna Paramita." A colossal, shimmering golden bell manifested from thin air, crashing down with a deafening boom that vibrated through the foundation of the hotel and effectively encased the puppet in a dome of immovable, sacred light. Zhang Baofeng, having dragged himself to his feet and nursing a bruised jaw, stared at the construct with begrudging respect. "I never realized you'd actually achieve such mastery over the golden bell shield, monk." Deliang let out a soft, strained sigh, beads of sweat peppering his brow. "Amitabha, it is nowhere near minor success. I had to tap into every ounce of my spiritual essence just to manifest that much, and it won't hold for long." Zhang Baofeng's gaze turned analytical, his eyes narrowing as he studied the trapped monstrosity. "This is a lifespan puppet entirely immune to fire, water, and steel. Its only tether is the life force of its controller, which it consumes to maintain its invulnerability." I felt a shiver of dread at the implications. "So, there has to be a way to sever that control. Where is the master behind this?" "They cannot be far," Zhang Baofeng replied, his voice grim. "The controller must be hiding somewhere within this very building, likely watching us." Huang Xikai, realizing the stakes, stepped forward with confidence. "I have a tracking art that can pinpoint them." He pulled out 4 white candles, placing them in a perfect square around his feet, and began a rapid, rhythmic chant. "Heaven is round, the earth is square. By the 9 chapters of the law, the one I seek shall have nowhere to hide." Zhang Baofeng offered a faint, reassuring smile. With Daoist Hong's tracking, the enemy's escape is effectively over. But the ink hadn't even dried on his confidence before. Huang Xikai convulsed and sprayed a thick mist of blood across the carpet, his face turning ghostly pale. "Impossible. The enemy is using a counter-tracking spell. My own art is being turned back on me." Zhang Baofeng blinked, the awkwardness of the sudden, brutal failure hanging thick in the air. Huang Xikai wheezed, clutching his chest. "I can win this clash of wills, but I need at least 2 hours of undisturbed focus." Monk Deliang's frown deepened into a crevice of pure worry. 2 hours is an eternity. My shield is already fracturing under the puppet's fury. I took a deep breath, deciding that subtlety was a luxury we no longer possessed. "Step aside, I'll do it." I produced 6 sticks of black, funerary incense from my satchel, igniting them with a snap of my fingers, and the smell of rot and old graves filled the hallway. Zhang Baofeng's face drained of color. "Brother Lin, stop. That incense will draw every wandering ghost within a 100-mile radius to this building." True to his words, the air grew heavy, and a sea of writhing, shadowy figures manifested from the walls, their hollow eyes fixed on me. I didn't flinch, There are unorthodox cultivators hiding in this hotel. 500 ghost coins to the first soul who finds them go. As the ghosts swarmed into the ventilation shafts, I leaned in to hear a conversation drifting from the vents. Boss, have you noticed the temperature dropping? Ignore the spirits, keep your focus. My puppet is trapped, and we need to break it out. I motioned for Jiang Baofeng and the 2 female cultivators to follow, and as we rounded the corner, we found the trio waiting for us in the corridor, their expressions cold and ready for the slaughter. Jiang Baofeng's movements were precise, his hands dancing through the air as he drew 3 jagged talismans from his sleeve, his voice dropping into a rhythmic, guttural chant that seemed to pull heat from the very atmosphere. By the mandate of the heavens, I invoked the ancient embers, talisman to spell, spell to flame, samadhi true fire. 3 searing fireballs erupted from his fingertips, hurtling toward our 3 antagonists with the intensity of dying stars, and I followed his lead, slamming my palm into the floor to command the earth spirit to erupt beneath the feet of our foes. The battle was short, perhaps too short. The 3 figures crumpled under our coordinated assault, but as I looked down at their defeated forms, a cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach. Hold it, I whispered, the adrenaline fading into sharp, analytical suspicion. These 3 are far too weak, they lack the spiritual cultivation required to command that level of puppet. This is a distraction. My intuition proved terrifyingly accurate, for while we were tied up in the hall, the true threat had already struck at the heart of the hotel. Across the complex, near the suites, the air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and defeat, where Monk Deliang and Huang Sikai lay broken upon the carpet, their bodies battered and spirits nearly extinguished. A man stood casually beside the dormant puppet, his posture relaxed, his gaze flicking toward the 2 wounded men with a sneer of professional disdain. You Wuxia cultivators and your incessant flashy spells, he muttered, shaking his head. They really are such a tedious nuisance to work around. He didn't bother delivering the coup de grace to my allies. Instead, he pivoted toward the presidential suite, his target, clearly the high-ranking official within. But as his foot hit the threshold, the floorboards beneath him groaned and dissolved into a sucking vortex of earth and debris. He sank to his waist, his composure barely flickering as a faint, mocking smile touched his lips. I certainly didn't expect someone in this backwater to have the foresight to prepare a trap. A machete whistled through the air, aimed directly at his throat, only for the puppet to move with mechanical, unthinking speed, intercepting the blade before it could find its mark. With a violent, guttural roar, the man tore himself free from the earth spirit's hold, his confidence returning in a rush as he signaled the puppet to advance. You have your tricks, kid, but the moment I take you out, your pathetic resistance dies with you. I stared at the encroaching construct, my mind racing through my repertoire. I knew all too well that physical strikes were useless against this wooden horror, so I bit my lip, forcing my energy outward as I howled. The gates of the underworld are unsealed. Spirits of the void, emerge. It was a desperate gambit, a ghost possession technique where I acted as a vessel for a stronger soul, its efficacy entirely dependent on the strength of the entity I could summon. To my absolute shock, 2 tendrils of cold, familiar green smoke spiraled through the air and burrowed straight into my chest, a sensation of freezing liquid fire spreading through my veins. The voices of Zhao Wan and Wang Jing resonated within the cavernous depths of my mind. We were wondering why such a dense cloud of wandering souls had gathered here. It's you, you little brat. I felt a surge of unbridled joy. Brothers, what are you doing in the mortal realm? We're here on official business, but seeing your mess, we decided to take a look. Honestly, cut the chatter, dawn is approaching, and there's no time for pleasantries. Give us the reins, Lin Ye. I let go, surrendering my consciousness to their overwhelming, icy presence, and my entire body ignited with a suffocating, dense ghost energy that made the very air warp around me. The intruder's face, once confident, drained of all color as he saw me raise my hand, a shimmering soul-mourning staff manifesting in my grip with a resonance that shook the hotel. With a single devastating swing of the staff, the puppet was sent flying into the wall, its wooden frame splintering like dry twigs. Seeing his primary defense shattered, the man turned to flee, but a spectral iron chain, cold as the deepest pit of hell, shot from my palm, wrapping around his neck and hauling him backward into the dirt. Just as I prepared to finish him, a shadow detached itself from the gloom, a masked figure stepping into the light. Lord Ace of Spades, this brat is a monster. I can't hold him. But it doesn't matter, I've already released the 3 corpse goo into the kitchen. Anyone in that suite is as good as dead. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had been so focused on the puppet that I had left a back door open, and I felt the crushing weight of my own arrogance. I was still too green for this game. But then, the masked man's arrogant grin transformed into a mask of pure, bewildered agony as he clutched his chest. Damn it, how? My 3 corpse goo. It's been destroyed. He stared at me, trembling. I underestimated you. You were holding a trump card the whole time. I didn't let him see my internal panic, forcing a calm, icy chuckle as I leaned back, feigning total control. Did you really think I'd be foolish enough to leave the kitchen unguarded against a rat like you? In truth, I had no idea what had happened, but 30 seconds ago, inside the suite, my faithful earth spirit had been watching a small, venomous scorpion crawling across the floor, its duty fulfilled before I even knew the danger existed. The scorpion on the carpet of the presidential suite didn't even have time to skitter away before my earth spirit, acting with predatory, instinctual lethality, snatched it up and swallowed it in a single, flight gulp, effectively neutralizing the last of the assassin's sabotage. Through the connection, I felt the muffled frustration of the masked man as he realized his trump card had been countered, his voice trembling as he addressed his leader, Lord Ace of Spades, the trap has failed. I should go in and finish the target manually. The figure beside him, shrouded in an air of cold, lethal competence, silenced him with a sharp wave of his hand. Do not be a fool. The association's heavy hitters are already converging on this position. We abandon the mission now, retreat, and worry about severing these spectral chains later. As they turned to slip into the shadows, a sudden, oppressive chill swept through the hallway, and the voice of Zhao Huan boomed through the air with the weight of an iron gavel. Soul extraction. Before the assassin could even scream, his soul was wrenched violently from his physical vessel, a sight that caused even the formidable Ace of Spades to recoil in genuine, visible shock. He didn't hesitate, hoisting his partner's limp, soulless husk onto his shoulder and vanishing into the darkness like a ghost dissipating in the wind. I surged forward, ready to chase them down and ensure the threat was eradicated permanently, but Zhao Huan's hand clamped onto my shoulder, his grip firm and cooling. Hold, Lin Yi, do not pursue. That masked man is masking a reservoir of power far greater than what he just displayed, and the sun is beginning to crest the horizon. We are envoys of the Underworld, and we must depart before the first rays of dawn burn our mandate to ash. Just as the two ghost messengers prepared to sink back into the veil, Zhang Baofeng came sprinting around the corner, his robes disheveled and his breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Brother Lin, where did they go? Are we in the clear? I watched the space where they had stood just moments ago, now empty. They slipped away, but the threat to the official is neutralized. Zhang Baofeng let out a weary, gravelly chuckle. Close enough. The association's main force has finally touched down, so we can finally breathe. As we stepped out of the hotel's suffocating atmosphere into the crisp, morning air, a figure detached itself from the shadows, his presence radiating an aura of terrifyingly refined spiritual cultivation that made my skin prickle. Daoist Zhang, the newcomer remarked, his voice smooth and devoid of warmth. You are technically of the Maoshan lineage, are you not? It is quite disheartening to see you debasing your sect by running with these unorthodox heretics. Zhang Baofeng went rigid, his eyes widening with a mixture of professional recognition and genuine alarm. It's him. I felt a flare of irritation at the stranger's condescending tone and leaned toward Zhang, whispering, Who in the hell is this guy? Zhang's response was a frantic, hushed warning. Keep your voice down, Brother Lin. Do not let him hear you, and for the love of the Dao, do not offend him. This is Li Xiaoyun, Daoist name Ling Ling, a true monster of the younger generation, only 2 years, my senior yet already ranked 25th on the heaven roll. He gestured toward a distant, unseen horizon. He and Xia Ruyan are the legendary dragon and phoenix twin prodigies of the orthodox sects. Zhao Han, lingering in the sliver of shadow before his total departure, added a final, grim warning. I have heard whispers of this boy in the Underworld archives. He was born with a natural Dao heart, uniquely favored by the heavens themselves. Some say he is the reincarnation of an ancient, ascended deity. My mind reeled at the description, a prodigy, a reincarnated master, and a favorite of the heavenly Dao, and I wondered just how much of a badass he could really be. High above us, on the roof of a neighboring skyscraper, a group of elders observed our confrontation with a clinical, detached hunger, one of them stroking his beard as he murmured to his peers the techniques he employs. Those are the forbidden arts of the ghost-taming sect, a lineage thought to be extinguished after that hermit from Longhu Mountain leveled their ancestral grounds. This boy must be the new shadow rising from the unorthodox path. He put Li Buchun in the grave less than a month after his debut. He has promise, certainly, but he has made a fatal error. He has crossed paths with Li Xiaoyun. He will be broken before the sun is even fully risen. Li Xiaoyun ignored their whispers and mine, his focus entirely on Zhang Baofeng, Daoist Lingling, this Daoist Lin and I. Zhang began, but Li cut him off with a disdainful gesture. The air around him is choked with stagnant yin energy and the corruption of the grave, an unorthodox heretic, no matter how strong his aura, is still just filth. He drew his long, elegant sword in a motion so fluid it looked like a ripple in water. Heavenly thunder. Annihilate the impure. Restore the peace. Thunder. Strike. The sky didn't just flash. It tore open. A singular, massive bolt of divine lightning screaming down to slam into the pavement where I stood. The sheer concussive force, instantly vaporizing the remnants of the spectral energies I had summoned and leaving the air smelling of burnt ozone and ozone-charred earth. I felt the loss of my ghost-taming connection like a physical wound, and as the dust began to settle, I felt a deep, dark anger rising within me, my face darkening as I realized I was being treated like common trash. I turned my gaze toward the flickering, spectral silhouettes of Zhao Huan and Wang Jing, my voice steady despite the adrenaline-fueled tension vibrating in my chest. Brother Zhao, Brother Wang, if I decide to go head-to-head with this guy, does it complicate things for you? Zhao Huan's response was a boisterous, dismissive laugh that cut through the oppressive atmosphere of the morning. Complicate things. He may be the darling of the heavenly Dao, but what does that have to do with us? The Underworld owes him nothing. Do what you must. Brother Lin, what do you need your brothers to do? A dark, cold grin spread across my face as I looked toward Li Xiaoyun. He He loves showing off his righteous lightning and clearing the dark clouds to let the blue sky shine through, does he? Then I'll make sure this sky stays suffocatingly dark for as long as I'm standing here. I tapped into the deepest reserves of my spiritual well, and my aura exploded outward, a torrent of terrifying, viscous yin energy surging into the air to blot out the nascent morning light. Li Xiaoyun didn't look bothered. He merely chuckled, a sound like glass shifting on stone. Interesting, but still merely a speck of dust. Boom! Another jagged pillar of heavenly lightning shrieked from the clouds, shattering my concentrated yin barrier and forcing the shadows to retreat in a hiss of evaporating energy. The sight from the hotel's perimeter was surreal, a jagged scar of brilliant, righteous lightning on one side, and a swirling, suffocating abyss of ghost energy on the other. Zhang Baofeng, sensing the impending catastrophe of a full-scale clash between us, hurried toward me, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Brother Lin, maybe we should." I cut him off. My eyes locked onto Li Xiaoyun's cold, arrogant features. Old Zhang, it's already past the point of diplomacy. How is his posturing any different from him taking a shit on our heads? If the pressure is unbearable, then there's no reason left to bear it. From the heights of the surrounding skyscrapers, the unseen elders whispered among themselves, their voices caught in the wind. I never thought I'd live to see this. A clash between the unorthodox and the divine. They seem perfectly matched. Though with dawn approaching, the rising yang energy will surely sap the strength of a ghost-taming disciple like Ling Yi. Another elder disagreed, his voice thoughtful. Don't be so certain. Li Xiaoyun is a prodigy, but summoning heavenly thunder without the aid of talismans or artifacts is an immense tax on the mortal body. I doubt he can maintain this much longer. My muscles burned, and my spirit felt stretched to the point of snapping. I looked at Li Xiaoyun and saw his own pallor, the sheen of sweat on his brow, revealing the toll of his arrogance. I held my ground, appearing calm while my heart hammered against my ribs, knowing the dawn was mere minutes away. Finally, with a mental nod to my companions, I began to draw back the yin energy, letting the suffocating pressure dissipate. "Brother Zhao, Brother Wang, the time for this has passed. Withdraw. Aren't we going to fight until one of us falls?" Zhao Huan asked, his voice echoing in my thoughts. "There is no need," I replied internally. Simultaneously, Li Xiaoyun ceased his chanting, the thunder dying out as he exhaled a ragged, shaky breath. Damn it, I genuinely underestimated him. Zhang Baofeng, ever the diplomat, rushed to bridge the gap before the tension could reignite. Evenly matched. Daoist Li, we have official matters to attend to regarding the bounty, so we shall take our leave. I didn't look back as we retreated, and only when we were miles from that suffocating confrontation did Zhang Baofeng finally let out a long, shuddering sigh of relief. "Brother Lin, tell me you weren't actually going to trade lives with him." I glanced back toward the city, my expression unreadable. How could I? He's been coddled by the Divine Firmament sect since he was a child, and I've been carving my path for a mere month. But in the cultivation world, there are no permanent victors. Who knows what the future holds? We made our way to the headquarters of the Daoist Association, where the air was thick with the scent of sandalwood and old paper. A man stepped forward, bowing slightly. It was Xu Lisheng, the vice president. "Daoist Lin, your contribution to this crisis was singular. The association wishes to reward you 600,000 inches currency, or a magical artifact of your choosing, and I will personally exhaust our vaults to see your request fulfilled." I blinked, surprised by the generosity, and settled on the latter. "I have no need for coin right now. I am in search of a weapon." Xu Lisheng nodded, his gaze shifting. "We have the standard armaments, the copper coin swords of the Zhengyi, the whisks of the Quanzhen, even confiscated relics from the unorthodox paths. But there is one item in particular I feel called to recommend to you." "What is it?" I asked. "A blade," he replied. At the mention of the word, Zhang Baofeng went rigid, his face paling as he fell into a haunting silence. Yet he said nothing as Xu Lisheng turned and led us into the deep, restricted heart of the vault. As Xu Lisheng guided us deeper into the vault, the air grew noticeably colder, thick with the weight of ancient, dormant power, until my eyes locked onto a weapon resting on an obsidian pedestal, a jagged, obsidian black blade that seemed to drink the very light from the room. "This is the artifact I recommend," Xu Lisheng murmured, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. "It is known as the Chio blade." I felt my pulse quicken at the sheer, raw intensity radiating from the steel. The name alone carried a legendary, archaic weight that made my skin prickle. "Chio blade," I breathed, unable to tear my gaze away. That name. It sounds absolutely, terrifyingly badass. Xu Lisheng looked at me, a calm, inscrutable expression on his face. "Daoist Lin, will this blade suffice as your reward for your services?" I feigned a look of shocked humility, though I couldn't help but feel a thrill of greed, my mind flashing to the exhaustion and financial ruin I'd face while fending off those relentless assassins. "Oh, I couldn't possibly accept," I said, though my feet were already moving with a mind of their own. "I mean, I know I contributed the most, and I essentially went bankrupt just to hold the line, and I nearly lost my life several times over. But this artifact is far too precious. It wouldn't be right to take it." Despite my words, my hand shot out before I could even stop myself, gripping the hilt with a firm, possessive strength. Instantly, a torrential wave of crimson bloodlust flooded the room, the air thick with an ancient, violent energy that made my knuckles white. "What terrifying, overwhelming killing intent!" I exclaimed, grinning as I felt the blade hum in resonance with my own yin-heavy aura. It truly is a magnificent blade. I looked up at the vice president with a playful glint in my eye, not wanting to give him a second to change his mind. Vice President Shu, I hope you aren't planning on going back on your word now. He chuckled, a sound devoid of mirth but heavy with intent. Of course not. Consider the blade officially yours. I left the association feeling lighter than I had in weeks, my fingers clutching the steering wheel of my battered, second-hand minivan as I drove home with a genuine, triumphant smile. Behind me, Zhang Baofeng stood in the dim light of the vault, his brow furrowed as he watched Su Lisheng. How could you be so certain Lin Ye would survive touching that blade without losing his mind? Shu Lisheng didn't look at him, staring instead at the empty pedestal. I wasn't. Master Shen instructed me to give the Chiyo blade to Lin Ye. It was meant for him. Zhang's eyes narrowed. The association paid a bloody price to retrieve that weapon. After we finally brought it back, there were others who tried to wield it. Anyone who dared to grip that hilt either suffered a gruesome, violent death or had their minds shattered into a blabbering, incoherent mess. Shu Lisheng sighed, turning to face his old comrade, old Zhang. In this age of Dharma decline, surely you don't intend to stay a nomad. Why not return to serve the association? Zhang stiffened, his humor vanishing. I'm a broken man, a cripple. What point is there in returning to that life? Old Zhang, back when we fought together to seal the zombie king. Zhang interrupted him with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand. Let the dead remain buried and the past stay in the past. I'm nothing but a carefree rogue cultivator now. With that, Zhang Baofeng turned on his heel and disappeared into the night, leaving me to my own affairs. The following evening, the city was draped in a suffocating shroud of darkness, and as I pulled up to my hotpot restaurant, I found my entrance swarmed by a chaotic, undulating sea of wandering ghosts. Oh my, what a busy night, I muttered, though my stomach churned with dread as I realized the atmosphere was all wrong. Song Jae rushed to my side, looking panicked. Boss, I don't think they're here for the hot pot. They don't look like they're looking to pay. A realization struck me like a bucket of ice water. Holy crap, how could I have been so negligent? These wandering ghosts aren't guests. They're creditors here to collect on the souls I've liberated. I scrambled to the back, grabbing the stacks of ghost money I kept for such emergencies, and braced myself as the line of spirits began to shriek their demands. How many did you kill? One ragged shade demanded. 3, I shouted back. Another lunged forward, his face twisted in malice. I killed one more than that. You shortchanged me. I lost my patience, my temper flaring as I shoved a fistful of coins toward them. Fine, you want to play that game? I won't give it to you. I killed a person, and I'm keeping the change. Bullshit, the ghost roared. None of those people died. Who do you think you're kidding? Another spirit slithered up, looking oily and desperate. And what about me? I don't have a kill. I just saw someone handing out cash and came for the payout. My lip curled in disgust. Motherfucker, Earth Spirit, get out here and beat his ass into the ground. After an exhausting, verbal and spectral brawl that left my head spinning, I finally managed to appease the last of the VIPs and sent them packing into the night. As the early hours of the morning bled into the horizon, the real customers finally arrived. Ghost messengers drifting through the front door, their presence cooling the air. Boss Lin, we brothers have returned to support your business once more. I bowed, my exhaustion melting away into a customer-focused smile. Please, come in, you're always welcome. I ushered the 2 envoys to their usual booth, and Song Jie hurried into the kitchen, the clatter of pots and the rising scent of spicy, numbing broth, signaling that the real business of the night had finally begun. The air in my restaurant, usually a sanctuary of savory aromas and spectral quiet, suddenly shifted into something razor-sharp and suffocatingly tense when a figure in a vibrant, blood-red bridal gown drifted through the threshold, her presence carrying an ancient, chilling weight that I recognized instantly. It was the Red Lady from the coffin shop. Her expression remained as impassive as a frozen lake, her eyes devoid of human warmth, as she reminded me, "You gave me your word last time that you would prepare hot pot for me." I scrambled to maintain my composure, forcing a welcoming, albeit slightly strained, smile to my face. Right. Of course, my apologies for the wait. Please, have a seat inside. I felt a tug on my sleeve as one of the ghost messengers, who had been enjoying their meal, leaned in close to whisper with visible trepidation, "Boss Lin, in the name of the Underworld, how in the hell did you provoke this jinx?" I kept my voice low, darting a nervous glance at the crimson-clad figure. "Sir Messenger, you know her?" He shuddered. "Know her? That is an understatement. She is," but his words were cut short by the creak of the front door swinging open yet again. A man strode in, his eyes scanning the chaotic array of patrons with a frown that deepened as he registered the spectral entities, the Red Lady, Underworld Envoys. What in the world are these things doing in a common hotpot restaurant? I stepped forward, putting on my most professional, unflappable owner persona. "Fellow Daoist, are you here for the hotpot, or are you just here to critique the clientele?" He sized me up with a calculating intensity that made my skin crawl before his lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "So, you are the owner, Lin Ye, the unorthodox prodigy whose name has been echoing across the martial world lately." I waved off the praise with a humble shrug. "It is just an empty title, nothing more. Fellow Daoist, please, come in and take a seat." Scarcely had he settled into his chair than 3 more men burst through the entrance, their initial aggression toward the first man evaporating instantly as they froze, their eyes widening in collective disbelief at the sight of the Red Lady and the envoys sipping broth. The Red Lady, and are those actual ghost messengers? One of them stammered, his face draining of color. I interjected, stepping between the groups with a practiced, diplomatic grin. I am the owner of this restaurant, Lin Yi. Welcome. The leader of the new trio regained his composure, cupping his fists with a respectful nod. A pleasure, truly. I am the Gu Master, Mao Se. Everyone in the circles has been talking about the new rising star, who managed to stand his ground against the prodigy Li Xiaoyun without backing down. Truly impressive. The quiet didn't last, as three more figures entered, an old man flanked by a man and a woman, and like those before them, they stood paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the gathering. Are you three here for the food, or just the scenery? I asked, already dreading the bill for the potential property damage. The old man stepped forward, his posture rigid with pride. We are of the Zhengyi lineage, from the Jingming sect. I am Shi Bing, and how should I address you, young Daoist? I adjusted my collar, trying to project authority. Ghost-taming Daoist, Lin Yi. The silence that followed was deafening, the air thick with invisible friction, as Shi Bing's group began trading hostile glares with Mao Se's trio, the tension rising like steam from a boiling pot. Realizing this was a powder keg waiting for a spark, I ducked into the kitchen to drag Zhang Baofeng into the fray, hissing, "Emergency! I've got a mob of heavy hitters crashing my place, and the vibes are absolutely lethal." Zhang Baofeng didn't hesitate, storming out with a burly, middle-aged man in tow, roaring, "Brother Lin, I'd like to see which idiot dares to disturb your..." But the words died in his throat as the two of them stopped dead, staring at the crowded dining room in sheer, unadulterated horror. "Holy shit," Zhang whispered, his face turning pale. "Ghost messengers, the Red Lady, Shibing of the Jingming sect, Gu Master Mao Se, and is that Yan Jian the Master Thief? Are you trying to get us all killed?" They scrambled back into the kitchen, pulling me with them, both looking as though they'd just seen a ghost, despite that being a daily occurrence for me. "Brother Lin, tell me the truth. Did you accidentally violate the laws of heaven and earth? Why on earth are there so many apex predators in your shop right now?" I threw my hands up in genuine frustration. I have no idea. They just swarmed in like bees to a flame. "Old Zhang, quit staring. Who is this guy you brought with you?" The stranger stepped forward, bowing stiffly. "Jingyi branch, Zhaoshan sect, Huo Qushan, at your service." I looked back at the kitchen door, the muffled sounds of shifting chairs and sharpening hostility reaching us, and whispered, "Old Zhang, Brother Huo, just tell me what exactly is the deal with this terrifying crowd." Huo Qushan leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, gravelly whisper that barely carried over the rising clamor from my dining room, as he began to dissect the dangerous collection of individuals currently occupying my space. "Listen to me, Brother Lin. That man called Mao Se is a high-level Gu master, and his mastery over the flying head Gu technique is legendary. He's a man you do not want to cross," he warned, his eyes darting toward the storefront. "And Shi Bing, that man with the rigid posture? He's an elder of the Jingming sect. Both of them hold firm, undisputed positions on the heaven roll. As for Yan Jian, the one everyone is eyeing, he's perhaps the fiercest of the lot. He's ranked 23rd on the heaven roll, a rogue cultivator with no sect to back him, yet he strikes fear into everyone. But none of them compare to the Red Lady. She is a different class of evil entirely, something that even the titans of the heaven roll would struggle to survive against." Zhang Baofeng, who had been listening with a grim, analytical focus, finally broke his silence. Rumors have been swirling that Yan Jian finally laid his hands on the long-lost four-finger life extension technique, and this art is whispered to be intimately connected to the ancient Gu master lineages. It's no coincidence they're all here. Mao Se is undoubtedly hunting for that secret, while Shi Bing has a blood debt to settle. One of his most beloved disciples was slaughtered by a Gu master, and he's clearly looking to harvest a life in return. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my curiosity burning brighter than my apprehension. "Old Zhang, you always seem to have an ear to the ground for these things. What is this four-finger life extension technique anyway?" He puffed out his chest, though his eyes remained wary. "I've only heard whispers, but it's said that whoever successfully cultivates this technique gains 4 extra lives, a near-immortal edge in a world of killers. That's the extent of my knowledge, and frankly, that's enough to make anyone a target." I mulled over the terrifying implications, but Huo Qushan interrupted my train of thought, his voice urgent. "They're done posturing, Brother Lin. They're about to start killing." Outside in the main room, Mao Se stood up, his eyes locking onto Yan Jian with a chill that could freeze marrow. "You've certainly got a pair of fast legs, Master Thief, but we buried dozens of men just to corner you here. Your 4 extra lives have finally run out, so be a good boy and surrender the technique, and maybe you'll die quickly." Before Yan Jian could offer a retort, the woman at Shi Bing's side erupted into motion, her sword singing as she leveled it at the man standing behind Mao Se, her voice cracking with grief. "You slaughtered my senior brother. Pay for it with your own blood." The air in the room grew heavy, the spiritual pressure so thick it felt like I was drowning in it, and as the threshold of violence reached its absolute limit, I stepped out from the kitchen, my voice resonant and cold. "If you lot want to tear each other apart, kindly take your slaughter outside. I just finished cleaning these floors." The three hostile factions turned in perfect, mechanical unison to stare at me, while the Red Lady and the Ghost Messengers sat back, watching the standoff with cold, predatory amusement. Seeing the potential for my restaurant to be leveled, I drew the Chio blade, the steel humming with a dark, hungry vibration that commanded attention. Everyone after you. My doors are open, but they lead to the street. Yan Jian, seeing an opportunity, bolted for the exit, and Mao Se's group and Shi Bing's sect members followed in a furious, tangled blur of motion. Once they were gone, Huo Qishan and Zhang Baofeng looked at each other, their eyes bright with the reckless curiosity of men who should know better. Brother Lin, the two of us are going to shadow them. There might be some scrap of glory or treasure left behind once they're done carving each other up. Are you coming? I shook my head, feeling no desire to witness the aftermath of such high-level carnage. With that many heavy hitters competing over a single prize, I'd rather keep my head attached to my shoulders. You guys go ahead. I watched them sprint after the chaos, then turned to find my restaurant empty, the ghostly envoys having already vanished into the night. The Red Lady was the last to stand, smoothing her bridal gown with effortless grace. The meal was acceptable. I shall return again, she remarked before dissolving into the shadows. The next morning, as I prepared to pull the shutters down, the front door swung open and in stumbled Zhang Baofeng and Huo Qishan, their robes torn, their faces bruised, and their breathing ragged. I looked at them, arching an eyebrow. Weren't you two looking for scraps? Why do you look like you were run through a meat grinder? They collapsed against the wall, utterly spent. Don't even start, Brother Lin. We were lucky to escape with our skins intact. If we hadn't run like our lives depended on it, we would have been buried out there in the dirt. The air in my restaurant felt heavy, thick with the lingering scent of stale incense and the residual anxiety that always followed the arrival of Zhang Baofeng and Huo Qishan, who were still struggling to catch their breath as I pressed them for details on the massacre they had barely escaped. What on earth happened out there? I demanded, my eyes tracing the fresh wounds on their robes, and Huo Qishan finally managed to articulate the chaos that had unfolded in the woods just outside the city limits. It was a bloodbath, Lin Ye, he wheezed, his expression haunted. The three factions reached the forest and didn't even bother with a parley. They just started slaughtering each other the moment they locked eyes. It was a brutal stalemate until a fourth party tore through the tree line, a group led by a masked figure calling himself the King of Hearts. The man was a monster, possessing power that was frankly terrifying. He didn't just fight, he systematically dismantled them. He suppressed Shi Bing, Mao Se, and Yan Jian with such ease it made my blood run cold. Yan Jian was cut down in the first wave of the assault, and while Shi Bing and Mao Se managed to survive, they were left critically wounded, and every single one of their subordinates was wiped out. We realized we were out of our depth the second the King of Hearts turned that mask toward us. So we made our exit. I suspect the two elders might have crawled away, but Yan Jian's corpse, that's likely been harvested by now. My frown deepened, and as he mentioned the name of this mysterious faction, the Poker Society, the gravity of the situation settled into my gut like lead. I had caught glimpses of their capabilities before, but to see them systematically dismantle multiple Heaven Roll experts was a warning I couldn't afford to ignore. I shared the details of my encounter with the Red Lady with them, and Huo Qishan let out a breath so long and shaky it rattled his chest, muttering, "Thank the heavens you only promised her hot pot, Brother Lin. If you had promised her anything more substantial, a soul, a service, a life, you'd already be a memory." I leaned back, my brow furrowed. Is she truly that malicious? He looked at me with eyes that seemed to have seen the end of the world. 20 years ago, a disciple of the Donghua sect tried to cheat her in a bargain, offering his eyes and hands for a favor. He fled to his sect, thinking they could shield him from her. But she didn't care about their wards or their numbers. She dismantled that entire sect to collect her due. She isn't just a ghost. She's an avatar of retribution. After they left, the silence of the room felt oppressive, and I sought refuge in the pages of my Yin-Yang Anecdotes Record, my attention snagging on the entry for the four-finger life extension art. The more I parsed the ancient, jagged characters, the more I realized how truly heaven-defying this technique was. It didn't just preserve life, it acted as a cosmic anchor, allowing one's 3 Hun and 7 Po souls to reform even after being utterly scattered, though the cost, the consumption of 4 full lives was a price only a madman would pay. I was still deep in contemplation when the heavy air of the shop chilled further, signaling the arrival of the ghost messengers, but it was the figure trailing behind them that made me drop my book. Yan Jian, now a translucent, shimmering soul, floated into the room with an expression of weary astonishment. "Daoist Lin," he said, his voice sounding like dry leaves skittering over stone. "I never imagined we'd meet again under such final circumstances." I stared at his spectral form, genuinely perplexed. "They let you reach the Underworld? They didn't extinguish your consciousness?" He let out a hollow, humorless chuckle. "They wanted the secret of the technique, and they were eager to pick my brain apart to get it. But I've always been good at slipping through the cracks. They aren't going to give up, though they'll hunt until they have that art, no matter how many layers of reality they have to tear through." His words were prophetic, for at that exact moment, the front door rattled as a cloaked figure pushed into the restaurant, their presence radiating a cold, predatory hunger. One of the ghost messengers immediately stepped forward, his face twisted in annoyance. "This is the 3rd time tonight. The dead belong to the cycle, and their souls are property of the Underworld. If you know what's good for you, you'll turn around and walk away. because the living have no jurisdiction here. The atmosphere in my restaurant curdled instantly as Mao Se loomed near the entrance, his face a map of deep-seated resentment and pain. It was obvious the wounds he'd sustained in the woods hadn't begun to knit, yet his arrogance remained entirely intact. He fixed his gaze on the two ghost envoys, his voice dripping with a chilly, dangerous authority that made the very air feel thinner. "You two, I'm only asking for a moment of your time to answer a few simple questions. I trust you'll find it in your best interest to do me this small favor." When the envoys remained unmoved, his lip curled into a sneer of pure menace. "Let's not forget where we are, envoys. This is the mortal realm, not the cold, dark halls of the underworld. You wouldn't want anything truly unpleasant to happen to your precious souls, would you?" My hand hovered near the hilt of the Chio blade, ready to intervene, when a sudden, violent gust of sinister, freezing wind whipped through the room, cutting through the tension like a guillotine. Zhao Huan manifested between the envoys and the Gu Master, his presence radiating an authority so absolute it made Mao Se look like a frantic amateur. "Such big words for a man with one foot in the grave," Zhao Huan remarked, his voice smooth and lethally calm. "We are the servants of the underworld, tasked with escorting the dead to their final judgment. Do you have a problem with our duty, or are you just eager to expedite your own appointment with the afterlife?" Mao Se's expression curdled into a mask of pure hate, but even he knew when he was overmatched. He realized he was staring down a powerhouse he couldn't possibly contend with, and he retreated into the night with a defeated, impotent scowl. The two ghost envoys immediately dipped their heads in deference, chanting, "Lord Zhao," as he signaled for them to take their leave. "I will personally see to the transport of this Daoist soul," Zhao Huan announced, and with a nod, the envoys vanished into the ether. Turning to me, Zhao Huan gave a sharp, professional nod. "Brother Lin, my duties here are finished, and I have a mission waiting that demands my full attention, so we'll have to save our reunion for a later time." He then pivoted toward the translucent, shimmering form of Yan Jian, his eyes glinting with a strange, knowing gravity. "Daoist, I've heard every detail of your ordeal, and it is a genuine tragedy that such a heaven-defying skill as the four-finger life extension art should perish with you." Yan Jian's eyes locked onto mine, a flicker of understanding passing between us as he reached out. "I've spent my life guarding this secret, but perhaps it's time it found a new vessel. You've got the spirit for it, and you're the only one I trust to do it justice." Before I could even process his intent, he thrust his hand forward, and a searing, brilliant streak of white light slammed into my forehead, filling my mind with ancient, complex geometries of spiritual power. After Zhao Huan departed with the soul of the thief, I sequestered myself in the quiet corners of my restaurant to study the art, only to find a glaring obstacle. The technique required the purity of heavenly Tao origin as its foundation. I sat in silence, frustrated and searching for an answer, until a sudden, visceral vision burned into my consciousness, revealing a precise location: Mount Huangju, in the heart of Jiangdu, Jiangsu. The very next morning, the hum of an airplane engine replaced the quiet of my shop as I flew toward Jiangdu, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and duty. The climb up Mount Huangju was arduous, the air growing colder and more ancient with every step until I stumbled upon a hidden, vine-choked cavern. Inside, a skeleton sat in a perfect, meditative cross-legged pose, and as I approached, the silence was shattered by a lingering, spectral voice that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. "My compatriots, do you fare well in these times?" the voice asked, filled with a haunting, sorrowful pride. "In the 25th year of the Republic, when the Japanese invaders tore through our land, even those of us on the unorthodox path heard the call of blood and soil. I joined the Nationalist Army, and later the Red Army, to stand against the imperialist dogs. I discovered that they were hunting for this very art, and I knew it could never fall into the hands of those island slaves. So, I led my people in a final, bloody stand. We won, but the cost was my life. I leave this to you not for glory, but for the safety of our nation." I bowed my head, a profound wave of respect washing over me. I had always thought of the unorthodox path as selfish and greedy, but the senior had shown me a patriotism that could shame the greatest of the righteous sects. The voice softened, echoing with a final, solemn directive. "It matters not if a scoundrel claims this art, so long as the blood running through their veins is Huaxia's own. It must never reach the hands of the foreigners. Any cultivator who honors the sacrifice of their brothers, kowtows, and acknowledges me as their master shall claim this inheritance." I dropped to my knees with a resonant thud against the cold stone floor, my heart pounding with a mixture of reverence and anticipation as I declared, "Disciple Lin Ye pays his deepest respects to master." The cavern, silent for decades, seemed to exhale a lingering breath of history, and as if in response to my sincerity, a small, ornate box descended from the gloom above. With trembling fingers, I pried it open to reveal a single, translucent drop of liquid that pulsed with an intense, golden luminescence, the legendary heavenly Tao origin. Before I could fully comprehend its significance, the droplet defied gravity, darting through the air and sinking directly into my skin, where it ignited a fire of pure, primordial energy that surged through my meridians. Not wanting to overstay my welcome in such a sanctified tomb, I bowed once more and made my exit, retreating to the relative safety of my hotel room where I spent the remainder of the day sitting cross-legged, obsessively channeling the profound mantras of the four-finger life extension art. The hours bled away until the clock struck 11:30 p.m., leaving me famished and craving something mundane. So I headed out to a nearby barbecue stall, unaware that my quiet night was about to shatter. I had barely taken my seat when two young men approached, their eyes sharp and assessing. Noticing the distinct copper coin swords swaying at their waists, I knew instantly they were part of my world. "Sir, you must be a practitioner as well," the first said with a friendly grin. "I am Shi Gang of the Gengi lineage's Manhwa sect, and this is my partner, Zhou Shi." I kept my composure, offering a calm nod. "I am the ghost-taming Daoist, Lin Yi." The recognition that crossed their faces was immediate and electric. "The Jade Ghost Daoist? Lord Lin. We've heard legends of your exploits," they stammered, clearly awestruck. As we settled into a conversation about their business investigating an evil cult linked to the encroaching shadows of the poker society, my blood ran cold. The mere mention of that organization sent a spike of dread down my spine, but before I could probe further, the stall owner stepped over, his face masked in a generic, hospitable smile as he set our food down. My hand reached for the chopsticks, but my instincts refined by my connection to the five spirits screamed a warning, so piercing I nearly toppled my chair. I glanced at my companions, ready to issue an alarm, but the sight that greeted me was worse than death. Qi Gang and Zhou Shi were sitting perfectly upright, their eyes fixed and vacant. They were stone dead, their lives snuffed out in a heartbeat without a single sound. A murderous rage surged through me, and I drew my pig-slaughtering knife, the blade hungering for blood. As I surged toward the stall owner, he recoiled in genuine stuttering terror. "Sir, please. I haven't done anything to offend you. If you need money, I have some, take it. Just please don't kill me." His confusion looked so visceral, so terrifyingly human, that my momentum faltered. If it wasn't him, then who? The answer hit me like a physical blow when a thick, copper-tasting mouthful of blood erupted from my throat, and I felt a searing, agonizing rupture in my chest that told me I had been poisoned. With a desperate shove, I slapped a 100 yuan bill onto the ground and bolted, my vision swimming as blood sprayed in my wake, the pain in my heart reaching a crescendo of white-hot agony. I summoned the water spirit to dive into my own flesh, its ethereal form scouring my veins, and the revelation left me paralyzed with horror. A parasite, a goo bug, was burrowing into my heart. The assailant was nearby, they had to be, and they were watching. I yanked the soul-condensing bell from my belt, the frantic peal cutting through the night as I roared, 10,000 ghosts appear. Spirits of the 8 directions, do not hide. Heed my command and find the coward. As waves of wandering ghosts swarmed the area, I scattered a handful of ghost coins into the air, screaming, "Find the man hiding in the dark. Heavy rewards for his head." In the shadows, a man wearing a mask bearing the 3 of clubs trembled with sudden, shocked agitation, his eyes widening as his connection to the goo bug wavered. "This brat, he can actually suppress my goo," he whispered, his voice dripping with venomous disbelief as he scanned the swirling, spectral vortex I had unleashed, unaware that his secret was already being torn from the darkness. The air in the alley turned frigid as the two assailants realized they had been spotted, their composure shattering instantly as they locked eyes with me. "It's him, that's the Jade Ghost Daoist, the one who's been making such a damn racket in the cultivation world lately." The man wearing the 3 of clubs mask hissed in alarm, but I didn't wait for them to regain their footing. I surged forward, my intent focused into a singular, razor-sharp point of murder. As they turned to flee into the labyrinthine shadows of the city, I slammed my palm against the pavement, grounding my will. "Earth Spirit, seal them in," I commanded, and the ground beneath the feet of the 3 of diamonds liquefied, ensnaring his limbs in a suffocating grip of packed soil. With the pig-slaughtering knife vibrating in my hand, I lunged, closing the gap in a heartbeat. The 3 of clubs frantically drew a serrated scimitar, parrying my strike, but the sheer force of the blow rattled his bones, sending him stumbling backward as he realized his strength was no match for my fury. Not to be outdone, the 3 of diamonds whipped a glowing talisman from his robes and tossed it toward me. The resulting explosion scorched the air, forcing me back, but I refused to lose momentum. I tapped into the latent, corrosive power of the pig-slaughtering knife, drawing its ancient, malevolent aura directly into my own meridians, feeling my veins thrum with a dark, intoxicating strength. "What is this? That aura. It's suffocating," the masked men gasped, their confidence dissolving into visible dread. I didn't give them a moment to breathe. I shifted, moving with supernatural speed that blurred the world, appearing like a phantom behind the 3 of clubs, and before he could even turn his head, my blade claimed his life. I instantly deactivated the possession, my body trembling as the residual baleful aura threatened to tear my mind apart. 3 seconds of that power was all I could survive before the backlash became fatal. I spun toward the trapped 3 of diamonds, the pain in my heart screaming as the parasite burrowed deeper, and I loomed over him with eyes burning with cold rage. "Give me the method to extract this goo, and you might live to see the dawn," I demanded, but he only let out a jagged, mocking sneer. "Let me go and I can summon it out. There is no other way. You fool, kill me if you want, but you'll die with me." He was playing a dangerous game of chicken, certain I wouldn't risk the parasite killing me, but he underestimated my resolve. "I don't believe a word of your treacherous tongue," I spat, and at my silent command, the earth spirit tightened its hold, dragging him into the suffocating abyss of the earth to be buried alive. "I am the Jade Ghost, you idiot. Do you really think I can't pry the truth from your soul even after you're cold?" But just as I reached out to pluck his essence, his body erupted in spontaneous, violet flames, and in a blink, He and his companion were reduced to nothing but drifting ash and charred bones. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my chest as I realized the intelligence had died with them, and I scrambled to pull out my phone, dialing Zhang Baofeng with shaking hands. "Brother Lin? You're calling at this hour?" he asked, and as I recounted the frantic, bloody slaughter, his voice grew heavy with realization. "That's Miao Jianggu Arts, Lin Yi. The most reliable method was the master's command. Now that he's dead, the bug will act on his final, fatal instructions, to devour your heart." My stomach turned, and I realized the bastard hadn't lied. "But look, Ziru Yan is in Jiangdu for the cult investigation. She's your best hope for a remedy." The next morning, fueled by desperation and the rhythmic, agonizing pulse in my chest, I found Xie Ruyan, who led me without a word into a secure conference room filled with various, seasoned practitioners. A middle-aged man with sharp, predatory features measured me with his gaze. "I am Gao Long of the Wuzi sect, and you are?" Before I could answer, a younger man sneered from the corner. "He's the Jade Ghost Daoist, the one who's been causing such a stir." The room went silent, every gaze landing on me with newfound weight, but Xie Ruyan ignored the tension, stepping toward a woman in her 50s whose presence felt ancient and calm. "Senior Hua, I have a friend here with a lethal goo bug in his heart. I need your expertise," she said, and the elderly woman studied me with keen, experienced eyes. "No problem at all. Little Daoist, come with me, and let's see what we can do to save your life." The heavy wooden door creaked shut behind us as I followed the elderly woman into a quiet, sanitized chamber, my pulse still fluttering with the lingering, erratic throb of the parasite near my heart. "Senior, may I ask your name?" I asked, my voice slightly raspy from the previous night's ordeal, and she offered a warm, maternal smile that felt entirely out of place in this cutthroat world. "I am Granny Hua, a disciple of the Medicine King Valley. You're in safe hands. Child, just lie back and let me work. It will be over before you know it." I obeyed, my senses sharp as she worked with a cold, surgical precision that bordered on the divine. With a swift, fluid flick of her scalpel, she extracted a pulsating, obsidian-colored goo bug from my chest, the sight of the wriggling horror making my skin crawl. "A Miaojiang heart bug," she muttered with a grimace of professional disgust. Truly a vicious, cowardly method of assassination. As I sat up, a wave of profound lethargy crashed over me. My ghost medical arts were potent, yes, but they were a double-edged sword. They carved away the physical trauma but bit deep into the soul, leaving me feeling hollowed out and fragile. "You'll need at least 2 weeks of absolute rest to stabilize your soul," Granny Hua warned, and I nodded, my resolve hardening as I returned to the conference room to rejoin the others. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of stale tea and high-tension anxiety, as Gao Long laid out the truth about the Poker Society. The Mastermind is a clandestine organization that hides behind the iconography of playing cards. Every spade operative they field possesses the terrifying strength of a quasi-heaven-ranking expert, and we have finally pinned their base to a location here in Jiangdu. He paused, his voice heavy with the weight of lost lives. "We have already sacrificed many righteous brothers to uncover these details." The silence was broken by a sharp, dismissive scoff from a younger man who had been eyeing me with undisguised contempt since I entered. "Those unorthodox heretics deserve to be wiped from the face of the earth," he spat, his gaze lingering on me with an insult meant to sting. I simply narrowed my eyes, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Gao Long continued, "The intel confirms 2 spade rank leaders and several diamond, heart, and club members, all of whom hold firm positions in the earth ranking. If we coordinate our strike tomorrow night, we have a fighting chance to crush them." He glanced my way with a polite, appreciative nod. "Daoist Lin, with this group assembled, I shall defer to the collective strategy." The young man beside him smirked again, muttering under his breath about the worthlessness of the unorthodox path, but I ignored his petulance, turning instead to Xie Ruan with a sincere smile. "I owe you my life for this intervention, Senior Xie. If you ever require a favor, you need only ask." She walked me out into the cool evening air, her expression unreadable as always. "Who was that insufferable brat inside?" I asked, and she sighed. "Wang Yu, a disciple of the Shengxiao sect and junior brother to Li Xiaoyun, a prideful man clearly." That explained the hostility. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed behind us, and Wang Yu lunged into the corridor, his face flushed with manufactured outrage. "I heard rumors that you took down Li Buchun, the 4th-ranked expert on the Earth ranking, the moment you stepped onto the stage," he challenged, his eyes bright with a desperate need to prove his own worth. "That is correct," I replied calmly, my tone even, "though you look like you're struggling to accept that reality." Wang Yu sneered. "Are you truly capable of holding that 4th-place seat, or are you just a fraud?" Gao Long and the rest of the group emerged, hanging back, their silence tacit permission they wanted to see my mettle. Wang Yu erupted into action, his hands flying through intricate seals as he roared. "9 heavens hanging death, transform into divine thunder, majestic heavenly might, eradicate the filth." Bolts of violet lightning danced around his fists like coiled serpents, his aura surging with the righteous, crackling power of the Shengxiao sect. He threw a devastating punch, but I was already moving. I slipped through his guard like smoke, reappearing instantly behind him, where I channeled my yin energy into 2 heavy, physical blows that slammed into his shoulders. He spun, swinging a counterpunch, but I met it with a protective veil of hardened yin energy, and the collision sent us both staggering back, a shockwave of force rattling the windows. Gao Long, watching intently, murmured, "Though Wang Yu's lightning is a hard counter to the ghost Dao he just ate the two ghosts, patting the shoulders technique from the Jade Ghost sect, there is no mystery left to this match." Wang Yu steadied himself, his ego still intact, and gave a smug, triumphant grin as he watched me gasp for breath, thinking he had won until, in a heartbeat, his smugness dissolved into utter, hollow terror. His pupils dilated as his balance failed, his limbs suddenly unresponsive, and a cold, dizzying numbness seized his brain. "What is this?" he stammered, his hand seals collapsing as he felt his very soul begin to drift, agonizingly, from the anchor of his physical body. The sight of Wang Yu's arrogant sneer curdling into a mask of suffocating panic was almost enough to soothe the fire in my chest, but his pathetic display of unorthodox accusations only served to deepen my irritation. The man truly had no idea who he was dealing with. "Damn it, you foul practitioner of dark arts," he wheezed, his defiance sounding increasingly hollow, and my patience finally snapped like a dry twig in a gale. My expression hardened into a frozen mask of indifference as I glared at him, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that seemed to drain the very warmth from the room. "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you here, right in front of your peers?" I didn't wait for an answer. Instead, summoning the water spirit with a flick of my wrist, it obeyed instantly, coalescing into a shimmering, viscous sphere of liquid that encased Wang Yu's head and torso, cutting off his air supply as he thrashed like a trapped insect. "Let alone a pampered pup like you. I wouldn't even blink if your precious senior brother Li Xiaoyun stood in my way," I declared, my eyes burning with a dark, predatory light. "What do you think you are to challenge me?" As Wang Yu's frantic clawing at the water sphere grew sluggish and his face turned a terrifying shade of blue, the room descended into a state of paralyzed shock. Gao Long stepped forward, his mouth opening to intercede with a nervous Daoist Lin, but he was silenced as I let my internal power fully erupt. My presence shifted, shedding the guise of a polite cultivator and replaced by an aura so chillingly sinister that the very shadows in the corners of the room seemed to elongate and writhe in response. The five spirits earth, fire, water, wood, and metal manifested as haunting, spectral silhouettes circling my shoulders, their combined pressure pinning everyone to the floorboards. Gao Long's eyes nearly bulged from their sockets as he gasped. He has actually mastered the complete five spirits technique. The sight of those five entities was enough to shatter the last fragments of Wang Yu's bravado, his eyes glazing over with the dawning realization of his own mortality. I maintained the hold for only a heartbeat longer before abruptly dissipating the water, letting him collapse into a gasping, broken heap on the floor, and without a backward glance, I turned my back on them and walked away, my footsteps echoing with the finality of a closing tomb. Behind me, I heard Wang Yu's voice, raspy and choked with a pathetic, burning rage. "If my senior brother were here, would he ever let a rat like you humiliate me?" My ears caught the sharp edge of Shi Ruin's voice as she countered with icy disdain. "Even if Li Xiaoyun were standing right here, Lin Yi would still treat you exactly the same way, you fool." Wang Yu's retort was a frantic, shrill protest. "Daoist Shi, my senior brother has always held you in such high regard. Could it be that you actually harbor feelings for this unorthodox heretic?" Xia Ruyan's response was a blast of frigid, regal detachment. "Li Xiaoyun's opinions are his own, and as for Lin Yi, I have no such attachment, mind your tongue." I didn't stay to hear the rest. I had my own ghost to chase, and I spent the night back in my hotel room in a deep, meditative state, dissecting the complex, ancient geometries of the four-finger life extension art until the sun began to bleed over the horizon. The next morning, the sterile, bustling chaos of the airport offered no comfort as I stood by the departure gate, waiting for my flight to carry me away from the madness of Jiangdu. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the distance caught my eye, a figure, unmistakable and jarring, walking with the rhythmic, haunting gait of a ghost. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It was that old Daoist, the very man from the ghost-taming sect whom I had personally struck down, whose soul I had watched dissipate. My pulse hammered against my ribs, and I took an impulsive step forward, ready to hunt him down. But the crowd surged, and in a blink, he was gone, swallowed by the sea of commuters like a phantom in the mist. A cold sweat prickled my skin as I stood rooted to the spot, my mind racing with terrifying possibilities. Who was he really, and how could a dead man walk? Miles away, in the VIP lounge, a man named Ku Minfu, currently inhabiting the stolen skin of a deceased feng shui master, felt a sharp, resonant vibration from a bone-carved insect in his pocket and frowned, his eyes narrowing. So, he arrived in Jiangdu as well, he mused, a cruel curiosity dancing behind his eyes. When his subordinate queried who he meant, Q replied, "An interesting kid, the Jade Ghost Daoist, Lin Ye. When I shed my body to pursue immortality and sought a hexagram from the great seer Ji Tianji, he told me my grand design would be dismantled by the era's true child of destiny. I always assumed he meant Li Xiaoyun, that pet of the heavenly Tao, with his precious, innate heart, but no, it was this boy." The subordinate's jaw dropped in disbelief, but he is an unorthodox practitioner. In all the annals of our history, no such person has ever been the child of destiny. Ku Minfu let out a low, mirthless chuckle. "That is precisely why he is so fascinating. Let us be off. It is time to seize the prize while the fools are busy playing their games." I remained oblivious to the predator watching from the shadows, still standing in the terminal, my gaze fixed on the empty space where the dead Daoist had vanished, haunted by the feeling that the true storm had only just begun. My irritation at the delay was already simmering, but it transformed into a cold, prickling anxiety as I checked the terminal clock. My flight was indefinitely grounded, leaving me stranded while the shadows of the poker society lengthened over Jiangdu. Miles away, in the dead of the night at 1:30 a.m., a select group of the cultivation world's finest Gao Long, the icy and formidable Xie Ruyan, the pragmatic Granny Hua, the insufferable Wang Yu, and the seasoned Liang Qingzhao, vice sect, master of the Zhengyi lineage's Beishan sect, stood in the darkness, their eyes locked on the monolithic, sinister silhouette of the evil cult's primary base. The atmosphere around the building was suffocating, thick with a nauseating miasma that made their very souls feel exposed. Gao Long shivered, his brow slick with sweat. "Why does this place feel so wrong?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's as if something is clawing at my inner desires, drawing them out against my will." Just as the tension reached a snapping point, the quiet of the night was shattered by the arrival of two more figures: Yang Chengzi, the terrifyingly powerful vice sect, master of the Shengxiao sect, and his martial nephew, Li Xiaoyun. Liang Qingzhao's face lit up with a forced, professional smile. "Brother Yang, I didn't expect a legend like you to grace this operation." Yang Chengzi gestured toward the handsome youth at his side, merely accompanying my nephew on an errand. Li Xiaoyun ignored the pleasantries, his gaze softening only as he approached Xie Ruyan. "Ruyan, this mission is far more treacherous than you know. I couldn't bear the thought of you facing this alone, so I brought my uncle to ensure your safety." Xie Ruyan, however, didn't even soften her gaze, her tone cutting as winter ice. "You worry too much. If I have committed to this path, I have already accepted the inevitability of death." The rejection was sharp, and Li Xiaoyun could only force a pained, awkward smile, which was quickly interrupted by Wang Yu, who scurried over with a face twisted in pathetic grievance. "Senior brother, you must vindicate me." Li Xiaoyun blinked, genuinely bewildered. "Who has dared to bully you?" Wang Yu pointed a shaking finger into the void. "It was Lin Yi, that bastard, he almost..." The complaint died in his throat as Gao Long stepped forward to break the stalemate, his voice tight. "Seniors, the timing is critical, we must initiate the strike now." But before they could even draw their weapons, the ground shuddered, and a geyser of violet light erupted from the cult's base, piercing the low clouds like a jagged spear of pure malice. Yang Chengzi and Liang Qingzhao recoiled, their faces paling, as the air grew heavy with a dark, intoxicating pressure. I felt my desires tugging at my heart earlier, but I didn't realize the source. Yang Chengzi murmured, his eyes wide with newfound horror. "It is greed, the embodiment of the 7 deadly sins." To condense such a formless, abstract concept into a physical pillar of light, just what kind of monstrous existence are we dealing with? Observing the profound gravity and fear etched onto the faces of these two legendary figures, Xie Ruyan's intuition flared. She stepped into the shadows and dialed a number, her fingers trembling slightly. I was still sitting in the purgatory of the departure lounge when my phone buzzed against my leg, and her voice came through, uncharacteristically somber. "I have a contact, a senior on Mount Longhu. If you ever feel the need to truly devote yourself to the path of the Tao, go find him." I frowned, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. "Why are you telling me this now? Are you all in danger out there?" "No," she replied, her voice steadying but devoid of its usual warmth. "We have the support of Vice Sect Master Yang of the Shengxiao sect and Vice Sect Master Liang of the Beishan sect. There will be no issues." She ended the call abruptly, leaving me staring at the dead screen. A cold, sinking feeling took root in my chest. Xie Ruyan wouldn't be handing out farewell advice if she truly believed they were safe. If those two titans were present and she still sensed a need for finality, the enemy wasn't just strong, they were apocalyptic. I didn't think twice. I stood up, abandoning my luggage and the safety of the airport, and sprinted toward the exit. I needed to act, and my instincts dragged me toward the silent, grim rows of the city's public cemetery, where the veil between worlds was thin and the earth held secrets I desperately needed to exhume. I was barely inside the rusted iron gates, my breath coming in ragged gasps, when a young cemetery staffer materialized from the gloom, looking at me with weary concern. "Brother, if you're looking to pay your respects, you really ought to wait for the morning. This is no place for the living at this hour." The cemetery was a labyrinth of cold granite and suffocating silence, but as I stepped through the rusted gate, I felt an abrupt shift in the atmosphere, a warning prickle on the back of my neck. A young staff member barred my path, his hand raised in a gesture of well-meaning refusal. "Brother, it's far too late for visitations. The gates are closed, and it's best you leave the dead to their rest." Before I could argue, a gnarled, weathered hand gripped the young man's shoulder, pulling him aside. An old man, his eyes clouded with the distinct haze of someone who had stared into the abyss, stepped forward, his face contorting into a mask of sudden, frantic discomfort. "Little Wang, step aside, let this young gentleman pass." I didn't spare them a second glance, my focus entirely on the dark task ahead, and I strode into the heart of the graveyard. Behind me, the bewildered staffer whispered, "Uncle Ding, why let him in?" And the old man's reply, trembling and thin, barely reached my ears. The air around him, it reeks of deep, stagnant yin energy. He is one of them, a practitioner of the unorthodox path, and one of terrifying caliber. I felt a brief, cynical smile ghost across my lips. The old man had more sense than most. As I reached the center of the grounds, I withdrew the spirit summoning bell from my robes, the cold metal biting into my palm. With a precise, rhythmic flick of my wrist, the bell chimed a hollow, mournful sound that seemed to slice through the very fabric of reality. Yin bell rings, 10,000 ghosts appear. Evil ghosts from all directions, do not hide. Heed my command and gather before me. The effect was instantaneous. A vortex of spectral energy began to whip around me, and in the distance, I felt the desperate, frantic stirrings of restless souls responding to my call. I wasn't settling for a few minor spirits. I pushed my will further, channeling the ghost summoning art 6 times in rapid succession. The air grew impossibly frigid, a bone-deep chill that frosted the grass, and the sky above the cemetery turned an oily, bruised purple as the fiendish aura surged toward the heavens. A sea of translucent, moaning figures coalesced from the darkness, a tide of at least 10,000 souls pressing in on me, their collective hunger held in check only by my absolute authority. Listen to me, I have run into an obstacle that demands force. Follow me, and once this task is concluded, you shall be rewarded with incense and ghost coins beyond your wildest imaginings. Leading this silent, terrifying army of the damned, I turned and marched back toward the main road, unaware that 2 onlookers were watching from the darkness. Uncle Deng had applied cow tears to his eyes, a desperate ritual he had guarded for 40 years but never dared to test. As the young man beside him, Wang Gang, watched in mounting horror, he realized with a jolt of pure terror that they were staring at a young man, walking with a legion of shadows at his back, a sight that turned their blood to ice. Meanwhile, the air on the rooftop of the cult's base was thick with the scent of ozone and blood. Si Ruyan and her companions had fought their way through a gauntlet of traps to reach the summit, only to be blocked by 2 masked figures emanating a sinister, suffocating pressure. Yang Changji, his eyes burning with the intensity of his cultivation, looked past them toward the center of the chaotic formation and gasped, "Is that a Pixiu?" The sheer audacity of the vision made Liang Qingzhao recoil in disbelief. The Pixiu. It is the very embodiment of greed. Are they insane enough to summon it into our world? Shi Ruyan's brow furrowed, her grip tightening on her sword as Li Xiaoyun stepped up, his face grim. The ancient texts warn of the 7 deadly sins: gluttony, greed, sloth, envy, pride, lust, and wrath. This creature is the absolute manifestation of greed. Should it fully descend upon the mortal realm, the destruction it would wreak is beyond comprehension. The realization hung in the air like a death sentence. Disaster. Their crimes are unforgivable. You all hold back these 2, I will shatter that formation myself. With that, Yang Chengzi roared, his resolve sharpening into a blade of pure lightning, and he surged forward in a blur of motion, leaving the 6 and 7 of spades to desperately attempt to intercept him, only for Liang Qingzhao to throw himself into the fray, creating a wall of righteous fury that left the path clear for Yang Chengzi's strike against the encroaching phantom. As Yang Chengzi surged forward, his every step heavy with the weight of the Shengxiao sect's authority, he reached toward the pulsating manifestation of the Pixiu, his fingers tracing the air in a complex, crackling magic seal meant to shatter the entity's hold on reality. But the air warped with a sickening, oily ripple, and before I could even blink, a figure materialized out of the nothingness, a man shrouded in an aura of pure, chaotic malice. Yang Chengzi, his reflexes, sharpened by decades of combat, didn't hesitate. He thrust his palm out, the seal ablaze with divine light, but the stranger merely flicked his wrist with an insulting, casual grace. The collision of forces was seismic, a sickening crunch echoing across the rooftop as Yang Chengji was sent hurtling backward, his body carving a jagged trench into the stone before he finally skidded to a halt. He stared at his own palm, his eyes widening in mounting horror as wisps of corrosive black energy curled upward from his flesh, his voice barely a rasp. What kind of terrifying, necrotic palm force is this? The masked figures, the 6 and 7 of spades, instantly dropped to their knees, their posture bordering on religious adoration as they bowed to the newcomer, whispering a single, dread-filled name, Joker. Liang Qingzhao, his face drained of all color, stepped forward, his guard up, his voice tight with an ancient, primal fear. What manner of heretical evil art have you unleashed? I felt my heart plummet into my stomach, the weight of the situation crashing down as I realized the discrepancy in our power. This was not merely a high-level threat, this was a catastrophe. Brother Liang, move back, I shouted, the urgency tearing at my throat. This man's cultivation, it transcends the heaven rank. Could he be a practitioner of the black rank? But there are only 10 of them in the entire world. How is this possible? Panic began to fray the edges of the group's cohesion, and I turned to Yang Chengji, whose face was a mask of grim resolve. Brother Yang, what do? We are outclassed. His answer was blunt, delivered with the cold steel of a man preparing for his final act. Tell these children to retreat. They are useless here. They will only serve as fodder. The 2 of us must exhaust everything we have to seal this rift before the Pixiu can fully descend. The Joker simply let out a low, mocking laugh, the sound vibrating in our very marrow, and with a lazy flick of his hand, a sword materialized, a blade of pure, compressed shadow that thrusted forward with the speed of a dying star. Before anyone could even draw a breath, the air hissed, and I watched in slow-motion horror as the shadow blade punched clean through Gao Long's chest, the man collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. "Run!" I screamed, my voice cracking, but the Joker merely stamped his foot, and a tidal wave of suffocating black pressure erupted from his body, pinning everyone Zia Ruyan, the survivors, even the mighty Vice Sect masters to the concrete, our chests heaving as if the very oxygen had been sucked out of the world. Even Yang Chengzi and Liang Qingzhao were brought to their knees, their formidable auras flickering like guttering candles. "None of you will leave this roof alive today," the Joker murmured, his voice as light as a death sentence. Yang Chengzi's jaw set, a single bead of burning, golden life essence manifesting between his brows as he looked at Liang Qingzhao. "Whatever trump cards remain, do not hide them. Burn it all." With a roar that shook the building, Yang Chengzi invoked the Shengxiao sect's life-burning lightning summoning art, his very soul igniting to draw the wrath of the heavens, while Liang Qingzhao drew 5 sacrificial talismans, his voice chanting, "Heavenly Dipper Orthodox Magic, Dao transforms. Wushan, Wushan Fiend, manifest." A mile away, perched on a neighboring spire, I watched the masked subordinate of Ku Mingfu sneer. "Boss, this clown is a monster. Can those 2 old fogies actually stand against him?" The voice of the possessed Ku Mingfu came back, chillingly analytical. "Hard to say. The life-burning lightning and the Wushan Fiend are the absolute summits of their respective sects, but the Joker, he is a creature of the black rank, a tier unto himself." When the subordinate asked if Ku Mingfu could prevail, the answer was a simple, hollow, it would be very difficult. Below, the combined might of our masters managed to hold the Joker for a fleeting, desperate second, but with a mere flick of his fingers, a towering, nightmarish Dharma avatar rose behind him, swatting the 2 Vice Sect masters into the sky like flies. Just as the Joker prepared to deliver the finishing blow, the violet light and the Pixiu phantom abruptly dissolved, replaced by a solitary, glowing purple lotus descending through the smog, the lotus of greed. I realized then the true deceptive nature of their plan. The Pixiu had only been a feint to mask the true ritual. As the subordinate moved to jump into the fray, Ku Mingfu held him back, his eyes fixed on the unfolding horror. "Wait, the plans have changed." The air above the rooftop was thick with the suffocating tang of ozone and ancient malice, and as Yang Chengzi's face hardened into a mask of grim determination, his voice dropped to a hollow, desperate resonance. "If those fanatics secure that artifact, the devastation will be beyond mortal reckoning. We have no choice, we must destroy it, no matter the cost." Shatter. Shiruyan, her sword humming with a sharp, crystalline light, defied the oppressive gravity that sought to crush us all, her silhouette blurring as she erupted toward the pulsating, violet lotus of greed hovering mockingly above the Daoist crown. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of dread and adrenaline, as I watched her approach the abyss. But just as she neared the bloom, a figure flickered into existence, a sword of absolute shadow pressed coldly against her elegant throat, rushing headlong toward your own demise. The Joker sneered, his mask hiding whatever twisted expression he wore. "If your end is what you seek, I shall be the instrument of your salvation." Xie Ruyan didn't flinch, her eyes as calm as a winter lake. To sacrifice one's existence for the salvation of the common people is the ultimate honor for any cultivator. The Joker let out a sharp, jagged chuckle, his grip tightening, but before he could deliver the final, killing stroke, the atmosphere fractured. A gale of freezing, unnatural wind began to howl, and a heavy, suffocating wave of yin energy surged over the rooftop, turning the night into a mirror of the underworld. High above the commotion, Ku Mingfu let out a low, guttural grin, his eyes gleaming with dark anticipation. "He has arrived." I descended from the gloom, my presence heralded by the silent, spectral roar of 100 ghosts tethered to my command. The Chiyu blade held aloft in my grip, its aura drinking in the ambient shadow. Behind me, a literal sea of 10,000 restless, wild spirits trailed like a funeral procession, transforming the rooftop into a visceral, living hell that left everyone, friends and foes alike, frozen in a state of absolute shock and bewilderment. Li Xiaoyun's gaze locked onto me, his face twisted into a dark, unreadable expression of disbelief, but I had no time for his petty grievances. My focus was a singular, white-hot point of intensity directed at the Joker. "Let her go," I commanded, my voice cutting through the chaotic winds. The Joker remained eerily silent, his reply nothing more than a lazy tap of his foot against the concrete, sending a shockwave of crushing, soul-stifling coercion rippling outward. My heart jolted, a sudden spike of primal terror making my pulse race. Yet I didn't retreat. I slammed my own heel into the roof, grounding the force and neutralizing his pressure with a surge of my own ghost-infused power. Liang Qingzhao, his voice strained by the exertion, hissed, "Lin Yi, you cannot allow this monster to claim the Lotus of Greed." I didn't look at him, my stare locked onto the Joker's masked visage, my voice vibrating with a cold, manufactured ice. I said, "Let her go." To my surprise, he released her, and Shiruin stumbled back toward me, her eyes wide, searching mine as she whispered, Who are you?" I held her gaze, keeping my facade of the legendary, calm, and enigmatic ghost-taming Daoist, Lin Ye, perfectly intact, though internally, I was screaming in sheer, unadulterated panic. I was a man standing on a cliff's edge with no parachute. "Run!" Xiaoruyan shrieked, her face ghostly pale as she tugged at my sleeve. "This isn't a fight you can win, he has the strength of the Black Rank." I didn't break my composed exterior, though my mind was racing for an exit. Does he look like the type to let us simply walk away? Go. You all need to evacuate while I test the limits of this bastard's power. She moved to argue, but I leaned in, my voice dropping to a desperate, shaky whisper that only she could hear. Hurry up and move. I'm absolutely terrified right now. Get out of here before I completely blow my cover. She remained rooted to the spot, her eyes swirling with hesitation, until I barked, do not let my arrival here be in vain. You know me better than that, I don't play the martyr unless there's a reason. That final, sharp insistence broke her hesitation, and she turned to lead Liang Qingzhao and the others to safety, shouting the retreat as the last of them vanished into the night. Once I was finally alone with the monster, I let out a light, mocking chuckle, hiding the tremor in my hands. You're not going to stop them. The Joker stood still, his voice detached and chillingly hollow. My goal was never their lives. Their existence is trivial. What I desire is the obliteration of this entire world. I felt a bitter, cynical smirk touch my lips. So, you really are that arrogant? Then, can you do me a favor and let me leave too? No. I knew then that my life was the price of admission for this night, and I didn't hesitate to empty my soul into the abyss. Heavenly gates, open wide. Spirits of the earth and ether, heed my summons. I roared, the air rupturing as tens of thousands of wandering, feral souls flooded into my meridian channels, the strain threatening to shatter my physical form. Still not enough. I gripped the Chiyu blade, its edge hungrily drinking in the surrounding carnage and the dark, abyssal aura I had cultivated, my internal resolve crystallizing into a single, final gamble. One strike to decide the fate of everything. Let's see what you're truly made of. Across the rooftop, Ku Mingfu and his subordinates stared, their faces drained of blood, absolutely dumbfounded by the sheer scale of the power I was burning to fuel my final stand. I watched as the remaining combatants, their faces slack with a mixture of terror and disbelief, process my decision to engage the Joker alone, their internal monologue likely screaming that I had lost my mind. After all, they had just witnessed Yang Chengji and Liang Qingzhao, two absolute titans of the cultivation world, beaten into the dirt like broken dolls. My grip tightened on the hilt of the Chiyo blade, the freezing, malevolent hum of the weapon vibrating through my very bones, and with a roar that felt like it was torn from the throat of the abyss itself, I surged forward, my movements a blur of desperate, reckless intent. I didn't hold back. I funneled every ounce of the 10,000 spirits currently inhabiting my body into a single, devastating horizontal arc. The blade whistled through the night air, biting deep into the Joker's defenses, and with a wet, sickening thud, a jagged, gaping gash tore across his chest, spraying dark, oily essence into the wind. He stumbled back, his breath hitching in a strangled gasp of agony, his eyes flashing with a sudden, frenzied hatred as he steadied himself. That strike. It possessed a velocity that defies the heavens. I grant you this, you have earned a sliver of my respect, but that respect is a death sentence. With a casual wave of his hand, a sword forged from pure, solidified shadow shot toward me with the velocity of a falling star. There was no time to dodge, no time to parry, and the blade punched through my sternum with terrifying ease. I collapsed to the concrete, the world dimming into a gray, suffocating void, and as my vision faded to black, I knew the game was up. Between the absolute, soul-crushing backlash of housing a legion of wild, tormented ghosts and the necrotic rupture of the Chiyu blade's fiendish aura, my physical vessel had reached its absolute limit even without the Joker's finishing blow. My heart would have stuttered to a permanent halt within seconds. As I lay there, my consciousness receding into the dark, I felt the tremors of movement. Two shadows, the 6 and 7 of spades, lunged toward the violet lotus of greed, but the Joker, even wounded, flicked his wrist, and they were repelled with contemptuous force. He reached out, his long, pale fingers curling around the lotus, his expression one of twisted, insatiable longing as he swallowed the artifact whole, the power radiating from him instantly skyrocketing until the very air around the rooftop began to buckle. Suddenly, a figure materialized from the blind spot behind the masked man, a palm dense with condensed, pulsating black energy, striking him with such precision and force that it physically ripped the recently consumed lotus of greed right out of his gut. The Joker let out a scream of rage, his composure finally shattering, but Ku Mingfu, the mastermind who had been lurking in the periphery, began to chant with rhythmic, terrifying speed. Shrink the ground to an inch, walk 1,000 miles, cross mountains and ridges like flat land. In an eye blink, Ku Mingfu was standing beside his subordinate, his eyes darting to where my body had laid, his voice dropping to a low, ominous tremor. Where is Lin Ye's corpse? It's gone, his subordinate whispered, and Ku Mingfu's face turned the color of ash as he realized there might be another, even more ancient expert observing our carnage from the shadows. The Joker, now deprived of his prize, went berserk, launching a volley of attacks at Ku Mingfu and his men, who decided that retrieving my remains was far too costly. Forget the corpse, just level the building. The subordinate bellowed, his fingers flashing through a complex, forbidden detonation sequence, and a massive, deafening roar ripped through the sky as the structural foundations disintegrated, the entire building folding in on itself like a house of cards, burying everything in a tomb of concrete and steel. 3 days later, the dust had settled enough for Xia Ruyan to lead a search party to the ruins, where she found my broken, lifeless form beneath the rubble. Ruyan, cease this, a voice from the Daoist Association murmured, his eyes full of pity. The dead are beyond our reach. He performed a great service, even if his methods were unorthodox. I was a void on the records, an orphan with no name to call his own, and when the question of notifying my family arose, Wang Gang scoffed, his voice choked with bitter tears. Notify them. Tell them their son was a practitioner of the dark arts who died in some nameless, magical turf war. What good would that do? Shi Ruyan, her heart visibly hollowed out by the weight of the loss, hushed them all, her voice barely audible. Enough. I am finished. I am returning to my sect for seclusion. Farewell. Life, cold and indifferent, moved on. And it wasn't long after, under the cover of a moonless night, that I lay still in the earth of my final resting place, the silence broken only by the quiet, reverent dialogue of those still tethered to the world of the living. A young woman stood before my headstone, her eyes wet as she looked at an old Daoist. Master Luo, if you can truly cleanse my father of this hex, the payment will be significant, she said, and the old man, his shoulders slumped with the weight of failure, sighed. Miss Zhou, I am unworthy. I could only bargain for this method by sacrificing the project, and for that, I cannot accept such a reward. She insisted, however, that without his intervention, the consequences would have been far, far worse, and as they argued over the price of a life, I remained buried in the dark, my secrets safely hidden away beneath the soil. The air around the desolate graveyard felt heavy, laden with the metallic tang of old earth and the lingering resentment of the dead, when the silence was abruptly shattered by the sharp click of leather shoes against stone. I watched from the periphery, my presence obscured by the lingering remnants of my own burial, as a young man with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Cao Shang approached alongside an elderly, stoic-looking companion. Zhou Xiaoqian, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a desperate, burning fury, didn't waste time on pleasantries. She slammed a thick document onto a flat stone, her voice trembling as she spat. Cao Shang, there it is. The land deed your family has been salivating over. Now, fulfill your end of the bargain and hand over the method to shatter that vile hex. The old man behind Cao Shang, a man whose aura reeked of stagnant, low-level, heterodox arts, stepped forward with a thin, mocking smile. That was the price 3 days ago, little girl. Circumstances have shifted, and if you truly wish to save your father now, the cost has appreciated. Before she could spiral into further despair, Lu Maliang stepped forward, his body shielding her from their predatory gaze, his voice a low growl. Tanji, enough. There is a limit to how far one can push their luck. Leave a shred of mercy for others, lest you find none when your own turn comes. Tanji's laughter was like the grinding of dry bones. Lu Maliang, are you suffering from senility? You are lecturing me, a practitioner of the heretical path, about leaving a way out. Do you have any idea how absurd that sounds? Their confrontation reached a boiling point, the atmosphere vibrating with latent malice, when suddenly, the ground beneath the tombstone erupted in a violent bang of displaced earth and splintering wood. I hauled myself up from the dark, suffocating confines of my own grave, my lungs greedily inhaling the crisp, night air as I surveyed the 7 jagged peachwood nails driven deep into the stone around my resting place. The 7-nail coffin seal. It was a miracle I had managed to claw my way out at all. I stood there, disheveled and radiating a cold, phantom chill, my eyes pinning them in place as I demanded. The 7-nail coffin seal. Which one of you pathetic worms decided to plant this on me? Lu Maoliang and Tanji both recoiled, their bluster vanishing as they scrambled to deny any involvement, but my focus shifted when I caught a glimpse of the calendar date on a discarded newspaper, the 30th. My blood turned to ice. I had been buried for half a month, trapped in a timeless, suffocating stasis. I turned to walk away, needing to process the sheer audacity of my situation, when Zhou Xiaoqian's voice cracked through the silence. Are you Lin Ye, Big Brother Lin? I paused, blinking in confusion at the girl who was staring at me with a mixture of terror and overwhelming relief. You know me? She surged forward, her eyes brimming with tears, and shoved a group photo into my hands. I stared down at the image. There, smiling back at me, was Fan Jialing, the younger sister of the family that had taken me in as their own. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The world I thought I'd left behind had followed me into this nightmare. Big Brother Lin, please, you have to save me. They're killing my father, she pleaded, and as she spilled the details of her tragedy, my gaze drifted back to Tanji, who suddenly looked like he wanted to vanish into the dirt. Hand over the method to break the hex. Tanji's face morphed into an apologetic, oily mask of false humility. Lord Lin, I had no idea. I've heard so much about your reputation. I cut him off. Spare me the sycophancy, hand it over, or I'll take it from your soul myself. The threat hung in the air, weighted by my genuine intent. I wasn't just posturing, I had the means to peel his memories out of his skull-like skin. Trembling, he reached into his robes and pulled out a slab of vile-smelling cured meat. This emits a scent that draws those parasitic hex bugs right out. Take it, and leave. I handed the putrid item to Zhou Xiaoqian and softened my tone just a fraction. I have unfinished business to attend to. Don't tell Jialing I was ever here. As I strode away, I could hear Lu Maoliang trying to salvage his dignity, frantically apologizing to the girl for not realizing she was connected to a legend like me. Famous? I didn't care for the title, yet the irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. I finally found a dingy hotel room to rest, but as I kicked off my worn-out shoes, something hard and jagged poked into my heel, causing a sharp pang of discomfort. I reached down, pulling out a severed, calcified finger that fell onto the floor with a rhythmic thud. I picked it up, my eyes narrowing as I recognized the distinctive, necrotic markings, the four-finger life extension art. A chill crawled up my spine. The text claimed that to cultivate this art, one had to sacrifice a life for each finger. This meant I had somehow shed a life. Yet I had never mastered the technique, so where the hell had this finger come from? With a frown, I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person who might make sense of this madness. Hello, who is this? Old Jang, it's been half a month and you've already forgotten the sound of my voice. I heard a sharp intake of breath, a frantic scramble of movement, and then a shout that sounded like he'd seen a specter. Brother Lin? Holy Shar, you a goddamn ghost. I sighed, the absurdity of my existence, leaving me completely speechless. You're a Daoist who specializes in exterminating spirits, and yet you're terrified of a ghost? The absurdity of Zhang Baofeng's reaction over the phone line almost made me laugh, had my mood not been so utterly abysmal. My fingers tightened around the receiver, my knuckles turning white as I cut through the banter. Oh right, I'm a Daoist, but that's beside the point. Answer me. Zhang, are you a human or a ghost? The question was a sharp test of his spirit, but his indignant spluttering confirmed his humanity. Nonsense, of course, I'm a human, but Brother Lin, you're really not dead. That shouldn't be possible. I saw your corpse with my own eyes, 3 days after the building was leveled. You were dead as a doornail, cold and lifeless on that old street near the cult's ruin. I paced the small, cramped hotel room, my mind churning with the implications of this news. It's a long, messy story that I'm not ready to tell yet, but I need information. Tell me, who was responsible for my burial? It was Daoist Shi, of course, he replied, his voice still shaky. I pressed for more, my heart thumping against my ribs as I asked about the site of my discovery and the presence of any other cultivators in the area, but the most chilling realization came when I brought up the 7-nail coffin seal. I know it, I whispered. The name of the spell leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. It's the signature art of the Shengxiao sect, designed to pin the soul into the coffin so the victim can never reincarnate. My face darkened into a mask of pure, icy fury. If members of the Shengxiao sect were present during my death, then the truth was far more sinister than I had anticipated, and I vowed that whoever was responsible would pay with their very soul. The next day, I made arrangements to return to Kunming, needing to trace the steps of the imposter who had been walking in my skin. I stood at the airport entrance, the busy terminal feeling like a fever dream, when several hulking men in suits suddenly blocked my path. Before I could ask what business they had with me, a middle-aged man with a rotund, wobbling beer belly came jogging over, his face lighting up with sycophantic glee. Mr. Lin, I've finally tracked you down, he gasped, spinning around to berate the guards for their heavy-handedness. But I held up a hand, my expression guarded. Mr. Lin, do I know you? The man chuckled nervously, patting his chest. Mr. Lin, please, stop joking. We just met half a month ago. I frowned, the pieces failing to fit. Half a month? That's impossible. Tell me everything, and don't leave out a single detail. He looked perplexed, recounting how a terrifying little ghost had haunted his life until I, or rather, the man wearing my face appeared to save him with a peace talisman. Are you absolutely sure it was me? I pressed, my heart beginning to race with genuine dread. Was there anyone with me? No one, he insisted. It was just you, Mr. Lin. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had been walking around in my body, leveraging my reputation to consolidate influence while I lay in a grave. Did I make any demands after dealing with that spirit? I asked, my voice barely audible. He nodded eagerly, explaining that I had forced him to purchase a fish pond in the suburbs. Take me to that pond, I commanded, ignoring his panicked plea for help with his own encroaching evil aura. I had diagnosed his extinguished yang fires at a glance, but his survival was a triviality compared to the mystery of my own theft. As we drove toward the outskirts, I stared out the window, my mind racing through the impossible logic of the four-finger life extension art. I had never reached that level, so who was this entity capable of cultivating such a forbidden art in a mere 3 days? When we finally arrived at a desolate, empty clearing in the suburbs, I stepped out, my eyes scanning the barren ground in utter confusion. Where is the fish pond? I demanded, the silence of the wilderness mocking my search. I stand at the edge of the fish pond, my gaze fixed intently upon the freshly packed earth where water once pooled, feeling the weight of the mystery pressing against my temples as I ponder the absurdity of a cultivation technique that demands a single finger strike every 3 days, a practice that defies every shred of established Daoist common sense I have ever known. The air around the pond feels thick, stagnant, and heavy with a residual aura that doesn't belong here. And as Shu Yi nervously shuffles his feet beside me, his voice trembling slightly as he asks if we should dig up the earth to uncover what lies beneath, I dismiss the thought with a sharp shake of my head, knowing that the real answer lies elsewhere, specifically in the shadowed corners of his own home. By the time the early hours of the morning bleed into the horizon, I find myself standing within the sterile, opulent confines of Shu Yi's villa, my senses heightened and my spirit already attuned to the lingering scent of unnatural decay, and I instruct him to remove the protective peace talisman he wears a necessary risk, for only when the barrier of divine protection is stripped away will the little ghost haunting him finally lose its cowardice and emerge from the veil. Watching Shu Yi retreat, his face pale with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. I find myself left alone in the vast, echoing silence of the first-floor living room, my mind drifting to the background. I have pieced together about him. A man of influence and wealth who manages a major construction firm, yet a man whose life was derailed half a month ago when a simple night out at a bar with his female cousin turned into a nightmare. I can almost visualize the scene, the arrogance of the man who harassed his cousin, the simmering rage in Shu Yi's chest that he was forced to suppress, and the lingering threat of retribution that he foolishly dismissed as mere hot air, never suspecting that the lesson the antagonist promised would manifest as a series of increasingly lethal accidents that nearly saw him choked to death on his own drinking water, a fate he narrowly escaped only by crossing paths with me. The stillness of the room is suddenly shattered by a frigid, biting draft that carries the unmistakable stench of the underworld, a gust of yin wind that sweeps through the parlor like a serrated blade, and I stand firm, my hand instinctively reaching toward my side, watching as a distorted, spectral figure drifts into view, its eyes locking onto mine with a flicker of dawning realization that signals the hunter has become the prey. The ghost bolts, its form flickering like a dying candle, but I am already in motion, my blade whistling through the air in a silver arc of intent, only for the creature to dive frantically into the glass surface of the living room mirror, its body rippling into the mercury-backed depths with a desperate, liquid grace that makes me narrow my eyes in recognition. A mirror ghost, how delightful. I murmur to the empty room, a dry, self-assured smirk playing on my lips at the creature's cleverness, but I'm already tracking the faint, shivering disturbance in the spirit realm that reveals it fleeing into the master bedroom, where I know Shu Yi is currently huddled in a state of primal, shaking panic. I follow with calculated, silent steps, arriving just in time to see the mirror ghost coalescing from the vanity mirror's surface, its fingers reaching toward the throat of the terrified businessman, but before it can feast on his vitality, I trigger the connection I forged with my inner arts, and a small, translucent entity sculpted from pure, swirling water surges forward, manifesting beside Shu Yi like a guardian deity. The mirror ghost recoils in sheer, shivering terror, its ghostly visage contorting as it attempts to dive back into the safety of the glass. But I am already there, my presence acting as a physical and spiritual blockade that cuts off its only escape route, and I look down at the trembling, tethered spirit with a critical eye, testing the waters by offering it a chance to serve me. Mirror ghosts are exceedingly rare, a collector's item of the spirit world, so tell me, are you interested in following me? But the creature only shakes with a stubborn, pathetic devotion to its original master. Knowing that loyalty to the wrong path is a death sentence, I sigh, a flick of my wrist signaling the water spirit to exert its crushing power, shattering the ghost's form until its essence is scattered into nothingness, dissolved by the very element that birthed it. A familiar, prickly sensation ripples across my skin, a lingering echo of an external connection, and I turn my attention to the villa's exterior, sensing the arrogant, foolish presence of those who dare descend this spirit, feeling their shock ripple through the night air as their pawn is silenced, and I cannot help but smile, letting a cold, anticipatory thrill wash over me as I realize the master of this puppet show is close, whispering to himself that his mirror ghost is gone, his pride wounded by the realization that he has underestimated me. And though his lackeys discuss the big shot's aura and suggest charging through the front door like barbarians, I simply wait, my grip tightening on my gear, eager to introduce them to the reality of the game they have chosen to play. I watch from the shadows of the doorway as Guo Niandong, with an arrogant flourish, produces a crude paper doll that flutters into the villa like a moth to a flame, his voice booming with a demand that I roll out to meet them. Yet I cannot help but feel a flicker of amusement at his bravado. Beside him, his companion, Luobo, questions his recent disappearance in Kunming, and I catch the split-second reaction in Guo Niandong's body language, a sharp, involuntary clench of his glutes as the phantom pain of my previous blade strike surely flares in his memory, a stinging reminder of the time I taught him that crossing me leads to absolute misery, especially when it comes to basic bodily functions. Inside the living room, the paper doll hovers, its voice a grating, artificial bark demanding my presence, and for a fleeting moment, I wonder if these fools truly believe I would cower, so I grip the hilt of my blade, feeling the familiar, grounding weight of the steel, and stride toward the threshold, my mind calm and prepped for the inevitable confrontation. When we finally stand face to face, the silence is thick with the tension of recognition. Guo Niandong's face goes ashen, his posterior visibly tightening in a reflex of sheer terror as he gasps, "It's you?" While Luobo, eyeing my relatively youthful appearance, puffed his chest out with unearned confidence, barking orders for me to kneel and kowtow if I wished to preserve my life. I ignore the posturing of the lesser man, fixing my gaze firmly on Guo Niandong instead, my voice cold and steady as I remind him that the world is indeed small, and that, while I let him slip through my fingers once, his luck has finally run dry, a declaration that sends him into a blind, panicked retreat. "He's Lin Ye, run," he shrieks, and the instant realization strikes. Luobo, the name of the ghost-taming Daoist, is clearly one he has heard, whispered with fear, and both men scramble away in a pathetic display of cowardice. "Wood spirit," I command, and before the slower of the two can react, ethereal, shifting vines burst from the earth, binding him in place with the inescapable grip of the wilderness. as the remaining two cowards scramble toward the roadside to initiate some desperate contingency plan involving a Mr. Dang. I listen to their frantic bickering. Luobo, showing his true, cold-blooded colors, dismisses the captured disciple's fate, revealing he only intended to harvest the boy's soul for his own twisted experiments anyway. I close the distance with predatory focus, and as I reach them, Guo Niandong frantically begs Luobo to serve as a meat shield while their master finishes his ritual. Luobo steels himself, smashing 2 glass bottles to the pavement, releasing a miasma of blood-tinged black mist that screams with the agony of trapped souls, but with a single, practiced swing of my blade, I carve through the darkness, dispelling the manifestation like morning fog. The chaos reaches a fever pitch. Guo Niandong attempts to scale a rope to safety, only for the selfish Luobo to shove him aside and scramble up first, a move that draws a frustrated, desperate curse from the other man. I don't give them a moment to breathe. Fire spirit, burn this guy to death. A roar of crimson flames erupts, forcing the desperate Guo Niandong to scramble into a defensive posture, while Luobo continues his frantic, pathetic climb. I close the gap and execute a swift, precise slash. The blade finds its mark, and Luobo lets out a shrill, piercing shriek of agony, clutching his backside as the sting of my steel bites deep. As I close in on him, the terrified Guo Niandong lashes out with his final gamble. Water spirit, swamp ghost hands, and suddenly, the ground beneath my feet turns to a roiling, liquid necrotic mire, dozens of pale, skeletal hands clawing up from the depths to drag me into the earth. It is a formidable trap, but I merely call upon the earth beneath me, earth spirit. My own guardian spirit dives into the soil, its presence disrupting the geomancy of the trap, and in an instant, the grasping hands crumble into harmless shadow. I watch Guo Niandong reach the top of the rope, his face a mask of sweating, unadulterated relief. But his reprieve is short-lived. I am already in motion, vaulting upward, and as I catch him, my blade descends with poetic justice, delivering one final, stinging strike directly to the very spot that has haunted his nightmares ever since we first met. The agonizing wail tearing from Guo Niandong's throat echoes through the air, a symphony of sheer panic as he screams for Luobo to expedite their escape, and watching them scramble toward the illusionary clouds hanging in the sky. I don't hesitate, my muscles coiled and ready as I leap into the pursuit, climbing through the ether after them with a singular, grim determination. Once we reach the swirling, ethereal platform of the clouds, I find them cornered, and the smirk I flash is sharp enough to cut glass as I declare their journey at an end, already calling upon my wood spirit to bind them, but Guo Niandong, desperate and twitching, snaps a complex hand seal with a shriek of disperse, and just like that, the foundation of the world gives way, the clouds unravel into nothingness, and we are all sent plummeting toward the earth in a chaotic, bone-jarring descent. Bang! The impact is colossal, the breath leaving my lungs in a sharp rush as I hit the ground, my body screaming in protest and refusing to obey my commands, a temporary paralysis that leaves me grinding my teeth in frustration. Yet I force my will outward, commanding the 5 spirits to scour the perimeter and terminate the 2 cowards who dared to challenge me. Silence follows, save for the wind, and when the spirits return with nothing but empty reports of their escape, a dark, pulsing vein of irritation throbs in my temple, and as I finally manage to focus my vision on the environment, a desolate stretch of Nanshan Road in Kunming, the grim irony of the situation hits me. That mysterious Mr. Dang hadn't just tried to kill me, he'd used a translocation hex to dump me in the middle of nowhere, a classic move of an unorthodox coward. Shaky and wincing, I dig my phone from my pocket, the screen casting a pale, cold light on my face as I dial Zhang Baofeng, enduring his lighthearted confusion before snapping. Come, pick me up, Nanshan Road, Chenggong District, the old house. My patience worn thin by the night's absurdities, and though I don't see them, I can almost sense the 2 bastards lurking in a nearby hovel, listening to the car arrive and finally breathing their own sighs of relief, cursing me as a ghost-taming old demon, a title I find strangely fitting for a man who just had a very productive, if painful, evening. The transition to the medical clinic is a blur of soreness, and as I sit on the sterile hospital bed, I watch the 63rd generation descendant of Hua Tuo work his craft, the man's precision, with his needles almost enough to make me forget the internal damage, and I offer a genuine smile of gratitude, while remarking on the sudden, blessed immobility I feel returning to my limbs. Hua Nanshan, however, wears a mask of professional concern, his eyes lingering on my aura as he delivers the heavy news. My path as a ghost-taming Daoist is a double-edged sword, the residual yin energy from the countless spirits I've commanded, now threatening to drown my own vitality in a tide of cold, stagnant essence. He offers 2 paths, abandoning the unorthodox arts for the pure yang true qi of the orthodox sects, or a path of yin-yang dual cultivation that would leave me perpetually drifting between the 2 extremes, sacrificing the raw, jagged power of my current spells for a stability I'm not sure I can afford. I thank him, my mind already churning as Zhang Baofeng drops me off at the Night Fragrance Hotpot Restaurant, where the sight of Lady Red standing vigilantly at the door causes my friend to visibly recoil, his instinctual fear of the ancient ghost plain on his face as he refuses to go any closer. I approach her, her spectral, bridal elegance, a stark contrast to the modern neon, and as she rushes toward me with a genuine, fluttering concern that borders on a possessive intensity. I listen to her complaints about the shop being on the verge of destruction, her eyes narrowing as she scans me and immediately detects the same sickness the doctor did. When I admit I have no cure, she falls into a brooding, heavy silence, and I, knowing exactly how to handle such volatile spirits, immediately offer the only currency she truly cares about, an unlimited feast of hotpot, which prompts her to reveal the only viable solution, a coffin crafted from 500-year-old sandalwood, a vessel to act as an anchor and regulator for my shattered internal balance. As she retreats into the warm, savory embrace of the restaurant to begin her meal, I stand alone in the threshold for a heartbeat, watching the steam rise into the night and feeling the weight of the path I have chosen, knowing that for me, there is no easy return to the light, only the long, cold walk forward through the shadows. A sudden spark of inspiration hits me, and my mind immediately drifts to the dusty, atmosphere-laden shelves of the coffin shop I visited not long ago, a place that holds the very solution to the precarious decay currently eroding my vitality. Once I finish catering to Lady Red's insatiable demands, I retreat to a quiet corner and dial the number for Cao Wanshan. The old man's voice raspy and familiar when he picks up. I start with a respectful, albeit slightly ironic, "Senior, we meet again," but he cuts me off with a sharp laugh, mockingly protesting my use of the title of senior, given my reputation as a formidable ghost-taming Daoist. I brush aside his theatrics, getting straight to the point. I need a coffin, and I need it for myself, which draws a long, calculating pause from the old man before he clicks his tongue, his tone shifting as he notes the pervasive, unnatural chill of yin energy clinging to my physical form, confirming his suspicion that I am no longer merely human. When I specify the material, a 500-year-old sandalwood coffin, the gravity of my request visibly weighs on him, and he warns me that such wood possesses the raw, ancient potency required to suppress even a flying zombie, a treasure that is as dangerous as it is rare. My heart sinks at his initial quote of 2 million as a base price, and I can't help but bark back in frustration, calling him out for acting like a common highway robber, but he merely chuckles at my outburst, unmoved by my theatrics as he explains the scarcity of the wood, hinting that even at that price, procurement is far from guaranteed. Just as the weight of the cost begins to manifest as a pounding headache, Cao's tone turns devious, and he offers me a way out, a high-stakes task involving the coffin carriers, who are currently tasked with an arduous escort through the treacherous reaches of Shangxi and are desperate for a protector of my caliber, the reward for success being the very coffin I crave. The mention of Xiangxi sends a shiver of professional concern down my spine, and when I press him on the nature of the cargo, his confirmation that it is a zombie of terrifying and unusual power confirms my worst fears. I hesitate, wondering aloud if I truly have the capacity to handle something that leaves a veteran like Cao hesitant, but he only plays to my ego, goading me into admitting that I am perhaps more capable than I care to let on. All right, I'll take this job, I concede. And the following morning, the reality of the task greets me at the shop in the form of the coffin carriers. Huang Zhonghua, the leader, greets me with a respectful cupping of hands, introducing his nephews, Huang Dahu and Huang Erlong, before they reveal the cargo. As they haul the heavy, iron-bound vessel into the light, I see the surface plastered thick with layers of talismans, as if they were nothing more than scrap paper. The pungent scent of 500-year-old sandalwood hitting my nostrils with an earthy, ancient intensity that tells me this is exactly what I need, regardless of the danger. After a quick, final exchange of words with Cao Wanshan, we depart into the wilderness, pushing forward until the sun reaches its zenith. The noon hour, with its oppressive, roaring tide of pure yang energy, is a death knell for the undead and the worst time to transport such volatile cargo, so we find a place to hunker down and wait out the heat. As we share a meager, tense rest, Huang Zhonghua leans in, his expression grim and marked by the weight of experience as he warns me that this isn't just a hairy zombie we are hauling, but something far worse, a creature so fierce that the professional corpse drivers themselves were unable to control it, forcing them to turn to the carriers for help, a detail that makes my grip tighten on my gear as I realize the true scale of the nightmare we have decided to shepherd through the dark. The air was thick with a damp, ominous chill as I posed the question to Huang Zhonghua, my voice barely audible over the low rumble of the truck's engine. "Didn't you check what was inside the coffin before escorting the cargo?" His grim admission that the seal had been applied long before his arrival in Kunming, leaving a bitter taste of uncertainty in my mouth, the weight of the unknown cargo pressing down on us like a physical shroud. We pushed deep into the night, the national highway unfolding before us in a monotonous ribbon of asphalt that should have been desolate, yet, without warning, the flow of traffic ground to a halt, a sudden, unnatural congestion that set my teeth on edge and drew a grave, knowing look from Huang Zhonghua, who muttered that something was fundamentally wrong here. His sudden command for me to guard the coffin, signaling that the situation had spiraled from a simple escort job into something far more volatile. I moved to the rear of the truck, the smell of ancient wood and damp earth emanating from the sandalwood box, when a sharp, desperate shout from Huang Erlong shattered the silence. "Daoist Lin, watch out for the car." And before I could even process the warning, a white sedan appeared out of the darkness, accelerating with an unnatural, terrifying speed as it barreled straight toward my position. I attempted to throw myself out of its path, a desperate lunge to preserve my limbs, but the momentum was too great, and there was no time. The sickening crunch of metal on bone seemed inevitable, yet when the impact came, it was greeted only by a dull HMPH as the car buckled and twisted against my body, leaving me utterly unscathed, while the vehicle crumpled like a discarded soda can. My eyes widened as I looked at the mangled wreckage of the sedan, realizing with a jolt of disbelief that it was constructed of nothing more than fragile, stiff paper, its frame folding in on itself like origami. And when Huang Erlong's frantic inquiry about whether I possessed the legendary Golden Bell shield was met with his brother's exasperated correction, I felt a grim, dark amusement at the sheer audacity of the spirits playing games with us. Daoist Huang, do you know what's going on here? I asked, watching as he sent Huang Dahu to scout, the boy returning with 3 lotus incense sticks that began to hiss and blacken, the color of rot consuming the wax in a clear omen of malevolence, signaling that we had wandered directly into a ghost's hunting ground. With a flourish of spectral expertise, Huang Zhonghua ignited a candle of ghost seeking, its flame flickering to life with an eerie, rhythmic pulse before detaching from the wick and drifting, like a phantom firefly, down toward the dense, suffocating woods bordering the highway, and though he initially suggested we go together, I insisted on taking point, sending the 2 brothers to watch the coffin while I ventured into the darkness, accompanied only by the nervous, inquisitive Huang Erlong. As we picked our way through the undergrowth, Erlong's nervous chatter about the legends of peers like Li Xiaoyun filled the space between us, but it was abruptly silenced when the white sedan, real, solid, and screaming with malicious intent reappeared, crashing toward us through the brush with a lethal weight that made Erlong's brave posturing vanish as he lunged forward, his punch ready to shatter the illusion before I sensed the shift in the air, a subtle vibration that signaled this wasn't just paper anymore, and I tackled him out of the way just as the vehicle pulverized the rock where he had been standing, a massive bang echoing through the trees that left his skin pale and his mind reeling at the realization of how close he'd come to death, mixing the fake with the real. Interesting, I muttered, my pulse quickening as the guiding flame finally vanished into the canopy, leaving us in a heavy, unnatural silence, but my connection to the earth was still singing, and before the creature could strike again, I signaled my earth spirit, feeling its cold, subterranean essence burrow deep into the loam beneath our feet, its sudden, violent tug from the dark bowels of the earth, revealing the hidden anomaly and yanking our unseen assailant up from its hiding place, finally pulling the mask off our tormentor. As the earth spirit heaved the hidden terror from the dark, loam-choked depths, the sight that greeted us was enough to turn even a hardened stomach. Lying there in the dirt was a coffin wrapped in pulsating, blood-red strings, a sickening sight that drew an immediate, horrified cry from Huang Erlong. A red coffin wrapped in red strings. This is ghost-raising. My brow furrowed, my grip on my blade tightening as he explained the gruesome mechanics of the coffin carrier's most forbidden secret, where the tomb owner requires the living essence of a kidnapped virgin boy and girl, buried alive, to fuel a well of resentment so deep it could ripen into a great omen of calamity, and while Erlong trembled at the prospect of having offended such a monstrosity, I felt only a cold, surging heat of indignation. Offended? Humph, he offended us first. I snapped, my voice ringing with an icy, definitive authority as I barked the order for my gold spirit to tear that coffin lid from its hinges. And as the heavy, sandalwood-scented wood groaned and gave way, a roiling, impenetrable cloud of black mist billowed outward, coalescing into the mocking silhouette of a man who boasted of 60 years of planning in the fortuitous chaos of the current Jiazi year. My blood went cold at the creature's arrogance, its claims of a massive opportunity echoing with the confidence of the damned, but I didn't give it the luxury of further speech, my eyes narrowing as I met its gaze with a murderous promise. Who are you? It sneered, and I retorted with a promise of its imminent end, just as it unleashed a hollow, grinning skull that launched itself toward the highway, forcing me into a frantic scramble that was abruptly cut short when the world warped, the trees and road melting away to leave us stranded in the suffocating stillness of an ancient, impossible street. What's going on? An illusion? I muttered, and Erlong's frantic realization that we were trapped in ghost concealment, an illusion designed to stall us, until the entity finished its designs made my gears turn, a sharp, risky plan forming in my mind as I looked at the boy and decided to leverage his very presence. Do you want to complete this escort mission? I asked, and as he nodded in desperate affirmation, I told him to trust me, casting the 2 ghosts, patting shoulders technique upon him. He stumbled, his face turning pale as his protective yang fire flickered and died, leaving his shoulders cold and invitingly hollow, and as I watched with the predator's patience, the black mist, unable to resist the temptation of a vulnerable vessel, screamed into Erlong's body. I struck like a coiled viper, summoning my water and earth spirits in a flawless, synchronized surge. The earth spirit pinned his legs into the ground, while the water spirit encased him in a sphere of suffocating, pressurized liquid, and just as the ghost felt the sting of life slipping away, the black mist shrieked in desperation and fled, only to be met by the cold, swift arc of my blade that shattered it into nothingness, the illusion dissipating as the world snapped back to reality. I barely had time to clear the technique from a groggy, confused Erlong. Before I was sprinting back toward the truck, the skull clutched tightly in my hand as I raced to intercept the entity, arriving just in time to witness Huang Zhonghua taking a brutal, palm-shattering blow from the dark figure, a strike that sent him flying backward with a spray of blood and a wheezing warning about the Great Omen's power. The figure stood over him, chuckling with a condescending, chilling satisfaction. But the moment was fleeting, interrupted by the sharp, whistling shriek of my blade as I closed the distance, my soul ignited with a pure, righteous intent to cut this calamity down before it could claim another life. As my blade carved through the air with the weight of absolute finality, the figure's expression contorted from arrogant mockery into a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The sickening sound of severing bone and sinew filled the clearing, as both its arms were sheared clean from its spectral torso, and as I stepped fully into the moonlight, the dense, suffocating shroud of my murderous aura radiated outward, pressing against the air like a physical weight that made the very atmosphere tremble. The creature staggered back, its voice shrill and desperate as it pleaded, "Little Daoist, we both belong to the unorthodox paths, so why must we kill each other?" A question that made me scoff internally at its pathetic cowardice. Huang Zhonghua, standing by in a daze, gasped in realization, his mind racing through the history of the bloody, catastrophic conflicts between the orthodox and unorthodox factions that had decimated the supernatural world decades ago, and he stared at me, wondering aloud if he was witnessing a legendary figure from that forgotten era. I deactivated my state of murderous possession, the cold adrenaline in my veins pulsing as I spat out. Since when were we of the side doors and left paths a big happy family? And without offering the creature another breath, I unleashed a final, ferocious flurry of strikes that shredded its soul into nothingness, leaving behind only scattered wisps of dark energy. Huang Zhonghua stood dumbfounded, struggling to process that a threat he had deemed a great omen had been dismantled with such casual, ruthless efficiency, but I simply sheathed my blade and, with the dust of battle barely settled, urged us onward. The journey to Shangxi, consuming the next 2 days in a blur of winding, desolate roads and mounting anticipation. Upon arriving, I found myself idling by the roadside, turning the strange, hollow skull over in my hands as I pondered its origin, searching for the hidden locus of the illusions it had cast, when Huang Zhonghua approached with a furrowed brow, revealing that our client had abruptly changed the drop-off location, moving it away from the Ruan family compound. We arrived at the decrepit facade of an abandoned compound, and as a man stepped out into the twilight, I recognized him immediately as Daoist Ruan, the air around us growing heavy as I signaled for the Huang brothers to unload the cargo. They vaulted onto the truck with practiced ease, sliding the sandalwood-bound vessel to the ground with a dull thud that seemed to vibrate in my marrow. Ruan Zhenhou approached with eyes gleaming a predatory, unnatural gold, his focus locked entirely on the coffin, but I stepped firmly into his path, my body language a clear, non-negotiable blockade. He laughed, a brittle, hollow sound, and smoothly promised my reward was waiting at his main compound, a vow that bought his temporary passage. I stepped aside, watching as he produced 4 blackened, ink-stained talismans and chanted the incantation, "Heavenly Fiend, Earthly Yin, 4 ghosts, carrying the coffin, come forth," summoning 4 stunted, gray-skinned imps from the earth who scrambled to take hold of the wood. Huang Zhonghua watched in genuine awe, whispering that this was an exorbitant spell that burned through ghost coins at a ruinous rate, a dozen coins just for 100 paces, and as he turned to ask if I knew the art, I admitted with a shrug that while the knowledge was mine, the extravagance had never appealed to me. Ruan Jinhua mounted the top of the coffin with arrogant grace, and in a blink, the imps blurred into a streak of motion so fast they defied tracking, moving with the rhythmic precision of high-torque motors until they vanished into the distance, leaving me to muse on the sheer utility of the spell. But the silence he left behind was fleeting, broken instantly by the roar of multiple engines as a fleet of cars came tearing down the road, skidding to a halt with a screech of burning rubber that signaled our respite was well and truly over. The air suddenly chilled as a group of men emerged from the shadows like specters, effectively boxing the 4 of us in, their movements synchronized and menacing until a middle-aged man stepped to the forefront, with an aura that suggested he was well accustomed to being obeyed. Huang Zhonghua, ever the diplomat, offered a bright, disarming smile, attempting to wrap up our business with, "Patriarch Ruan, we have already successfully delivered the coffin into Ruan Zhenhua's hands, so as for the agreed-upon reward." But the man's features twisted into a mask of pure, unbridled fury that cut him off mid-sentence. "Reward? Who told you to hand the coffin over to that wretch Ruan Zhenhua?" he bellowed, his voice vibrating with such intensity that it felt as if the very ground beneath our feet shuddered, and he immediately issued a frantic, barked command to his subordinates to pursue the traitor before whatever lay within that sandalwood box could be claimed. I watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of irritation, my patience wearing thin as Huang Zhonghua stammered, "Patriarch Ruan, what is the meaning of this? You personally authorized the handover to Ruan Zhenhua, only to be met with a cold, condescending snort as the man revealed that the traitor had intentions of hoarding the contents for himself and defecting to an unorthodox sect. When Huang Zhonghua tried to salvage our pay by citing the professional rules of our trade, reminding the man that our escort mission was technically complete, Ruan Haoqian spat, "You still want your reward? If we don't recover the contents of that coffin, you won't see a single cent from this family," and at that moment, I felt a familiar, dark shadow fall over my expression. I took a deliberate step forward, my voice dropping to a dangerous, low register. From what you're saying, you're planning to renege on our deal. Ruan Haoshin cast a look of utter disdain in my direction, scoffing, and who, exactly, are you? When he realized I was the infamous ghost-taming Daoist, the man smirked with a predatory glint, acknowledging my reputation as a genius of the unorthodox paths, but dismissing it entirely because we were deep in the heart of his territory. Xiangxi. I didn't waste words. I drew my blade, the steel hissing as it cleared the scabbard, and demanded. So the Ruan family head is planning to default on the debt? When he met my defiance with a sneering, so what if I am? Huang Zhonghua threw himself between us, his face pale with frantic anxiety as he pulled me aside. Ruan Haoshin is the head of the corpse-driving Ruan family, ranked 21st on the heavenly ranking. We can't afford to offend him. Lin Yi, let it go. Please, we'll just consider this a loss and move on, he pleaded, his voice trembling with the weight of our professional vulnerability. Ruan Haoshin merely snorted in triumph, satisfied with our perceived submission, and led his men in a hurried pursuit of the defector, leaving the Huang brothers livid and fuming at the blatant injustice. As they drove away, Huang Zhonghua turned to me, his eyes filled with a desperate, apologetic resignation, as he tried to convince me to leave while we still had our lives, insisting that his small clan couldn't survive a confrontation with such a powerful entity. But as they piled into their vehicle and pulled away, I remained standing on the roadside, my knuckles white as I gripped the hilt of my sword. My face darkened, the cold anger within me refusing to be suppressed. Endure? I had never been one to swallow such humiliation, and if I didn't have the power to crush Ruan Hao Tian under my heel today, then I would burn his precious legacy to the ground until nothing remained but ash. Even as the Huang brothers expressed their admiration for my resolve, I knew I was walking a razor's edge alone, so after watching them disappear into the distance, I checked into a nearby hotel, the silence of the room providing the perfect sanctuary to pull out my communication device and dial Song Jie, my voice sharp and commanding. Old Song, tell the ghost guards at the shop to bring every bit of my ghost money to my location immediately. As the line clicked dead, I returned my focus to the bizarre, hollow skull I had been carrying, turning it over in my hands with renewed intensity, dissecting its secrets with the cold, calculated precision of a man who was done playing by anyone else's rules. I wasted no time in reaching out to Zhang Baofeng, my trusted friend and fellow practitioner, and as his raspy voice filled my ear, he confirmed my worst suspicions. The hollow, grinning skull in my possession was a relic of the ancient evil craftsman, forged through methods so harrowing and cruel that the craft had been purged from the world long before the nation's founding. He explained that by channeling my own blood qi into the relic, I could command its power, but his tone shifted to one of genuine alarm when I mentioned my current location in Xiangxi and my intent to raze the Ruan family to the ground. Burn down the Ruan family, the corpse-driving Ruan family. Brother Lin, you've lost your mind. They aren't some back-alley gang. Their influence in Xiangxi is absolute, and their power is sky-high, he warned, his panic palpable, yet my resolve only hardened, my conviction unshaken by his pleas for caution. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the skull in my palm, and began to bleed my own essence into it, the air rippling and distorting until the mundane world dissolved, replaced once more by the surreal, oppressive gloom of the inner ghost street. I grinned, feeling the potency of the artifact course through me, though the night that followed brought a strange, disquieting slumber that was shattered by a ghostly, rhythmic chanting of my name, Lin Ye, that forced me awake, heart hammering against my ribs until I realized it was the call of the underworld. Two spectral guards materialized in the shadows, their forms translucent and flickering, carrying heavy purses of ghost money that they presented with a nod, relaying a message from my friend Zhao Huan. No matter the gravity of my transgressions, the doors of my restaurant remained my sanctuary, and while he was bound by the laws governing mortals, within those walls, I was untouchable. Relief washed over me, a cooling balm for the anxiety of being a marked man, and with a sudden influx of resources, my plan for retribution crystallized into something far more dangerous than mere spite. Under the suffocating cover of a moonless night, I crept into the sprawling Ruan family compound, gasoline canisters in hand, directing my water spirit to coat the wooden structures in a slick, volatile sheen of fuel. The mission, however, took an unexpected turn when my earth spirit vibrated with a silent, urgent warning, sensing a hidden dungeon tucked deep within the manor's bowels, and as I ventured deeper, I was intercepted by two bored-looking guards who demanded to know my origin. Third branch, I lied, my voice steady, my heart steadying as they bought the charade with a casual request for a cigarette, even laughing off their partner's later suspicion that I looked unfamiliar, dismissing me as a harmless kid who couldn't possibly pose a threat to their dynasty. Confidence emboldened me as I swaggered up to the reinforced entrance of the dungeon, and when the guards stationed there challenged me, I leaned into the arrogance of a young master, barking, insolent, "Open your damn eyes and see who I am," and demanding they unseal the gates for me immediately, leaving the confused men stuttering and uncertain of their next move. "May we ask which branch you belong to, young master?" Without the direct verbal orders from the three elders and the family head himself, we really cannot allow entry into this sanctum. I stared at the two guards, their faces stiff with professional rigidity, and I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of their blind loyalty to a house that treated them like disposable cogs. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a low, cold whisper that cut through the stagnant air of the dungeon entrance. You really don't know who I am, do you? Listen closely, my name is Lin Yi, and before the confusion could even register in their eyes, I drew my blade, the steel flashing like a streak of moonlight as I executed a single, fluid strike that silenced them permanently. Stepping over their cooling forms, I descended into the bowels of the ruined family's secret prison, the atmosphere thickening with the stench of decay and ancient rot until I found them. 7 massive coffins, their surfaces choked with layers of yellow, ink-stained talismans that pulsed with a faint, malevolent rhythm. And as I ran my hand over the rough grain, I muttered, willow wood, and judging by the density and the way it leaches, the surrounding warmth, these must be at least 300 years old. The Ruan family's collection is as sickening as it is impressive. My moment of introspection was shattered by the shrill, discordant clamor of bells echoing through the damp stone corridors, a sound that clearly signaled an alarm, and miles away, the 4th branch elder, Ruan Maokai, must have been jerked from his sleep by the spiritual feedback. Someone broke into the dungeon, rally the disciples, stop the intruder at any cost. The elder's voice boomed from the upper levels, and within seconds, I could hear the thundering stampede of dozens of feet converging on my position, forcing me to act with lethal haste. I attempted to channel the 4 ghosts, carrying the coffin technique to whisk me away, but as the incantation died on my lips without a single imp appearing, I felt a surge of cold dread. Damn it, I cursed, my expression turning to stone as I realized the obvious. The sheer density of Ruan family malice and the concentration of their ancestral spirits made this compound a no-go zone for common ghosts, who wouldn't dare manifest on such holy, cursed ground. I burst out of the dungeon's maw into the night air only to find the courtyard teeming with Ruan disciples, their faces twisted with murderous intent as Ruan Maokai stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he recognized me. You are that rogue, Lin Yi. What is the meaning of this blatant intrusion into the Ruan family compound? He bellowed, his voice vibrating with aristocratic fury, and I couldn't stop the grin that spread across my face. Since your pathetic family refuses to settle their debts and honor the compensation promised, I've decided to come and collect it personally with interest. I thought of the fire spirit lurking in the unseen periphery, and at my mental command, it plunged into the gasoline I had meticulously spread hours earlier. The night sky instantly turned a violent, incandescent orange as the entire compound erupted into a roiling sea of flames, the heat licking at our faces and forcing the disciples to scramble in a panicked, uncoordinated frenzy. You treacherous little brat, you actually came prepared for this. Ruan Maokai roared, waving his disciples toward the blaze before turning his singular venomous focus on me. But I didn't engage in a head-on clash. I threw the hollow, grinning skull into the air between us, and in the span of a heartbeat, the elder and his remaining cronies collapsed into the disorienting, gray haze of an illusion. Damn it, ghost blinding. I heard him howl as he swiped at phantoms, but I was already moving, sprinting toward the gates while the 2 guards I'd encountered earlier watched, paralyzed with cigarettes still in their trembling hands, their eyes wide as they whispered, "Holy shit, he actually burned it down. He really burned the Ruan family to the ground." I hit the main gate with the momentum of a runaway train, and as I spilled out into the open road, I caught sight of several dark, ethereal figures drifting toward me from the outskirts, and a smug satisfaction settled in my chest. The sheer greed of the local spirits was my greatest asset, as they couldn't resist the mountain of ghost money I'd laid out to tempt them into doing my heavy lifting. However, my triumph was short-lived, for Ruan Maokai had carved his way through my illusion faster than I anticipated, and he was accompanied by something far more terrifying, a monstrous, corpse-hardened zombie that lunged with the force of a battering ram, its desiccated claws tearing at the air. "Lin Yi, don't you dare run," he shrieked, and I met the impact of the beast head-on, the force of the collision driving me back several steps, as the shock of it rattled my teeth and forced me to drop my guard, my focus narrowing into the sharp, deadly reality of the fight that was only just beginning. My heart hammered against my ribs, a rhythmic, frantic warning as I realized the gravity of my miscalculation. Ruan Maokai had shattered my ghost blinding with unnatural speed, and the zombie bearing down on me possessed a terrifying, raw power that suggested it had been refined with techniques reserved for the heavenly ranking, a level of strength I hadn't fully anticipated. As Ruan Maokai jerked his corpse-controlling bell, the chime vibrating with an ominous, soul-chilling resonance, the creature lunged again, its movements jarring and relentless. I didn't retreat. Instead, I reached into the depths of my own aura and pulled out my spirit fiend bell, letting out a crisp, authoritative ding-ling that sliced through the night air. 10,000 ghosts appear, evil spirits from all directions. Do not hide. Heed my command and come forth. I roared, my voice carrying the weight of the ghost-taming sect's heritage, and immediately, the air shivered, as over 100 spectral entities, wandering spirits and forgotten ghosts swarmed behind me, their collective chill turning the night into an arctic void. Ruan Maokai merely sneered, his arrogance palpable. "Heh, you don't actually think you can fight me with just these pathetic wandering ghosts, do you?" I only let a cold, sharp smile touch my lips before shouting, "The heavenly gate is open. Evil spirits, come forth." As the hairy zombie closed the distance to crush me, I channeled every ounce of my physical force into my arm, meeting its grotesque bulk with a single, devastating punch that sent it flying back into the dirt, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. "I didn't expect your ghost-controlling and martial arts to have reached such a level," Mao Sai muttered, his smugness flickering. But just then, a sea of Ruan family disciples flooded the scene, a massive, oppressive tide of men, each accompanied by a rotting, stiff-limbed zombie that stood ready to tear me limb from limb. Ruan Maokai's confidence surged back, his face twisting into a mask of smug triumph. "Today, even if you had wings, you wouldn't be able to escape." I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, letting the chaos of the moment recede, and whispered, "If you have any more tough words, spit them out now, because you won't get another chance." He scoffed, trying to stall for time. "I'd like to see what kind of backup you're waiting for." But his laughter died in his throat as four small, shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, heaving a heavy, ancient coffin between them. I leaped onto the lid with practiced grace, feeling the weight of the artifact beneath me, and chuckled. I was waiting for my ride, and as for you, you're just waiting for your end. Maokai's face drained of all color, his eyes wide with genuine panic. "Oh no, the Seven Fiends' coffin. Hurry, take it back at all costs." I laughed again, a dark, mocking sound. "This is a high-end, four-wheel drive supercar. It costs 10 ghost coins just for 100 steps. You really think your legs can keep up? Oh, by the way, there's more." With a wave of my hand, 6 more coffins were hauled out by the spectral assembly, and as we accelerated away into the darkness with Maokai's desperate, frantic shouts fading behind us, I couldn't help but stare down at the wood beneath my feet, wondering what secrets lay sealed within these relics that made a man like him so deathly afraid. We hadn't gotten far before a new shadow fell over our path. Ruan Haoqian, the head of the family, standing alongside his most formidable experts, blocking our route with an air of cold, lethal authority. My expression went hard, my muscles tensing as I realized the inevitability of this clash, and Haoqian's jaw dropped when he saw the funeral procession. Holy shit, my Ruan family's 7 fiends' coffins. Lin Ye, what in the name of hell have you done? Knowing there was no avoiding the steel, I channeled my arts once more. The heavenly gate is open, evil spirits, come forth. And as the swirling, amorphous mass of hundreds of spirits burrowed into my skin, turning my eyes into pits of void like ink, Haoqian smirked. "Good. You actually didn't run. Since you're so intent on seeking your own death, I'll be more than happy to grant your wish." I didn't wait for his permission, launching myself forward and slashing out with my blade, a silver arc aimed squarely at his throat, but the expected impact never came. Instead, a mysterious figure flickered into existence beside him, intercepting my strike with impossible fluidity. As the experts flanking Haoqian moved to surround me, the ground beneath them suddenly shifted, softening like quicksand as I tapped into my earth-taming arts, causing their formation to collapse in a flurry of panic and confusion. I locked blades with the mysterious protector, the sparks flying into the night, before I shoved him back and retreated toward the safety of the coffin, sheathing my sword with a deliberate, mocking slowness. "The Ruan family head strength is nothing more than this," I sneered, my voice cold and unimpressed. And as the little ghosts surged forward, carrying the 7 coffins into the protective shroud of the night at top speed, I left behind a fuming, humiliated Ruan Haoqian and vanished into the darkness to see what true horrors I had liberated from the Ruan family's vault. "Family head, are we truly going to abandon the chase?" one of the Ruan elders asked, his voice thick with indignation. But I was already miles away, watching the Ruan family's fury boil over into impotent rage as Ruan Haoqian stood amidst the wreckage, his features contorted into a mask of pure, murderous spite. "The 4 ghosts carrying the coffin is an ancient art. We cannot bridge that distance on foot," he spat, his eyes burning with a dark, calculating malice. "But every leap consumes vast amounts of currency. I want to see exactly how much ghost money this rat has to burn through. Pass the order. Lock down every road in Shangxi, check every bolt hole, and bring me his head." Meanwhile, perched atop the jolting, rhythmic coffin, I hunched over and hacked up a violent, metallic mouthful of blood, the copper tang of my own essence coating my tongue. My internal organs felt as if they had been shredded by a blunt blade. That thing I had fought wasn't just a basic construct, it was a wandering corpse, a beast of nightmare. My mind raced through the pages of the Yin-Yang Anecdotes, cataloging the hierarchy: purple, white, green, hairy, flying, and then, the true abominations: wandering corpses, floating corpses, and the fabled immortal bones. I realized then with a chilling clarity that my earlier estimation of power had been a naive delusion. Ruan Haoqian and his cohorts were not merely skilled. They were on a plane of existence I had vastly underestimated, and my survival had been nothing short of a miracle. As I drifted into the desolation of the wild, the news of my vendetta had already reached the Ruan compound, which now lay in smoldering, charcoal ruin. I was gone for mere hours, and my ancestral home is nothing but ash and soot. Haoqian screamed into the smoke-choked sky, his vow of vengeance echoing through the valley. I finally reached a dingy, nameless hotel, locking myself in a room that smelled of damp rot and floor cleaner, and sat on the threadbare bed to circulate my chi and bind my internal ruptures, sighing as the weight of my exhaustion threatened to drag me into an abyss. "Phew, that was too close," I muttered, my hands trembling as I tried to steady my breathing, but the silence was severed by the shrill, persistent ringing of my phone. It was Zhang Baofeng, his voice crackling with a mix of awe and terror. Brother Lin, you've become a legend. You actually burned the Ruan family to the ground. You have guts of steel, truly. I offered a strained, bitter smile. The irony of being hailed as a hero while I leaked blood onto the bedsheets not lost on me. Did the news really travel that fast? You're hearing about this already? Are you kidding? The entire circle is in a state of absolute hysteria. Do you even know what they're calling you? The unorthodox madman, the ghost-controlling old demon they've dubbed you Old Demon Lin? I felt a spark of dark humor pierce the pain, wondering when my life had turned into such a gruesome fairy tale. But Baofeng's tone turned urgent. Where are you? Tell me. I'm in a hotel, I replied, and his panic was instantaneous. Leave, now. Shangxi belongs to the Ruan family. Staying in a hotel is walking into a funeral pyre. I frowned, the warning setting my senses on edge, and I rose to head for the door. I pulled it open with a silent, controlled motion, finding a man standing there, his smile just a fraction too wide, too artificial. Sir, I'm just a waiter. Do you require anything? He asked, his eyes darting to my blood-stained clothes. No, I said coldly, and he turned to walk away, his pace hurried, his shoulders dropping with a sigh of relief as he thought he fooled the old demon. I didn't hesitate. I moved with the precision of a predator, the wet, sickening squelch of his final breath echoing in the hallway as I whispered, You think I'm an idiot? I was gone into the night before the Ruan family's main strike force kicked down the door, their arrival moments too late. Damn it, we're a step behind again. Ruan Maokai howled, his voice vibrating with frustration, but I was already weaving through the wilderness, the days melting into a grueling, blurred marathon of survival. 3 days and 3 nights passed in a haze of blood and iron. My clothes were shredded, my skin was mapped with lacerations, and my breath came in ragged, painful gasps as I stood in the clearing, surrounded by the cooling, twisted corpses of a dozen Ruan disciples. Old Demon Lin, you're an animal, one of the guards shouted, his sword shaking in his hand. We've been hunting you for 72 hours straight, and you haven't collapsed yet? I looked at them through eyes burning with spectral fever, reached into my robes, and gripped the cold, jagged surface of the evil condensing token. Cut the crap and stop whining. Come at me all at once. I channeled the last reserves of my spirit, the air around me warping as the heavenly gate groaned open, and I felt the chilling, parasitic weight of 10 wandering ghosts burrowing into my flesh, their malice sustaining me even as my human limits shattered. Ruan Maokai stepped forward, his eyes wary but resolute. You all are wasting your time. You aren't a match for him. Fall back. He barked, his fingers tightening around the cold silver of his corpse-controlling bell, which he shook with a manic, rhythmic fury. And before me, 5 hairy zombie-level horrors clawed their way out of the shadows, their stench of rot filling the air as the final, desperate act of this hunt began. Today, I will let you witness the true, 3,000-year foundation of my Ruan family. Ruan Maokai roared, his voice trembling with a manic, desperate zeal as he prepared to unleash the full force of his ancestral techniques. I didn't waste a single breath on a retort. I merely flicked my wrist, and in a flash of shifting light, I summoned my 5 spirits, their forms manifesting with crystalline clarity to intercept the 5 hairy zombie-level corpses that lunged toward me with gnashing, rotting teeth. While my spirits occupied the monsters, I surged forward, closing the gap between me and Maokai with a speed born of pure survival instinct, my blade humming with intent. But as I struck, he threw his head back in a jarring, hollow laugh. Old Demon Lin, you've fallen into my trap. I neglected to mention that while corpse driving is my utility, close quarters combat is my true, unbridled passion. He dropped his bell and whipped out a blackened, serrated dagger, his movements shifting into a fluid, deadly dance as he aimed to intercept my strike, but I couldn't help the mocking grin that widened on my face. You're attempting to trade steel with me using a dagger? Has your brain finally rotted away from all that corpse stench? I shifted my weight, bypassing his guard with a brutal, calculated motion that sent him reeling, his blade spiraling into the dirt as he collapsed, coughing up a thick, dark mouthful of blood. But I didn't stay to deliver the killing blow. 3 days of non-stop carnage had drained my reserves to the absolute floor, and the only thing on my mind was escape. I stumbled onto a lonely stretch of highway, my vision swimming, and just as I collapsed, a sleek, menacing black Jeep screeched to a halt, blocking my path, and my heart sank as I prepared for another onslaught. The door swung open, and Huo Qushin emerged, and my ragged, breathless sigh of relief was almost audible. Brother Huo? What a hell of a coincidence, I wheezed, but he just shook his head, his face set in a grim line. Coincidence? My ass. Old Jiang sent me to drag you out of this hole before you actually die, he grunted, and I practically collapsed into the passenger seat. Brother Lin, you really have the stones of a titan to burn down the Ruan family all by your lonesome, he remarked, casting a glance at the desolate road ahead. That's nothing, I muttered, my voice barely a whisper as the adrenaline started to fade, but it's a blessing you showed up, or I'd likely have spent the next 3 days hacking through their endless supply of trash. He shot me a sharp, questioning look as he shifted gears. Is that so? You still sound like you want to head back for round 2. Should I drop you off at the next turnoff? I laughed, a dry, rasping sound. No, keep driving, let's just get back to Kunming. Wo's expression turned solemn then, his voice dropping into a warning tone. Listen, Brother Lin, you're still a newcomer in this circle, So you haven't heard the history. Right after New China was founded, there was a slaughter between the Orthodox and the unorthodox that nearly wiped the former off the map, and while they managed to force the evil sects into hiding under that unorthodox label, the rot is surfacing again. Those bastards who try to possess your people? They're likely linked to the immortality cult, a pack of lunatics who'd burn the world to ashes just for a sip of eternal life. If we don't want to be caught in the coming catastrophe, we need to stay under the radar. Immortality cult, poker society, all these shadowy factions. What a damn headache, I groaned, leaning my head against the cool glass of the window. I just want to be a simple salted fish and run my shop. 3 days later, back in the sanctuary of my kitchen, the familiar, savory scent of boiling broth filled my senses as business hit a record, the restaurant packed to the rafters with hungry patrons, but just as I was feeling the peace of normalcy, the air turned icy and the atmosphere curdled. Wang Jing, Zhao Huan, and the Seventh Lord, Bai Wuchang, glided in, and I hurried to greet them with a welcoming nod. Brother Wang, Brother Zhao, Seventh Lord, you're here as well. Please, follow me to the third floor private room, I said, but Bai Wuchang gestured for me to hold. Brother Lin, tend to the food first. The Eighth Lord will join us momentarily. My hospitality was interrupted by a thundering, aggressive stomping outside the restaurant doors, and before I could turn, Ruan Haoshin burst in with his elite guard, his face a mask of primal fury. Lin Yi, you will die in this dirt today, he bellowed, marching straight for the center of the room, but his momentum shattered as he stopped dead, his eyes darting wildly to the shadowy, silent figures of the ghost guards flanking the room. I stepped out from behind the counter, a calm, chilling smile spreading across my face as I watched the color drain from his arrogant visage. To think the head of the Ruan family would travel all the way to Kunming just to hand-deliver his own demise, I murmured, my voice projecting clearly over the sudden, deathly silence of the restaurant. Lin Yi, you incinerated my ancestral estate and brazenly absconded with the Seven Fiends' coffins. Do you truly believe you can escape the consequences of such insolence, or is it finally time we settled this bloody score? Ruan Haoshin's voice cut through the air like a jagged blade of ice, his eyes burning with a venomous, suffocating aura that radiated from his very soul. Yet I only offered him a nonchalant shrug, my back pressed comfortably against my own counter as I met his glare with a composure that clearly infuriated him. Family head Ruan, I was simply reclaiming the just compensation I was owed, and perhaps collecting a modest amount of interest for the trouble. You may be a titan of terror in the backwoods of Shangxi, but here, in my domain? Hey, I wouldn't be so confident, I countered, my voice laced with a sharp, mocking bite that sent his face into a twitching, crimson rage. He took a predatory step forward, his knuckles white as he prepared to snap, but he froze abruptly as the ghost guards patrolling the restaurant floor, loyal to the underworld and indifferent to his mortal status, turned their hollow, predatory gazes upon him, their presence heavy enough to make the very floorboards groan under the weight of their spectral authority. Good, very good. You've got guts, Lin Ye, but I refuse to believe you'll cower behind these spirits in Kunming for the remainder of your wretched life, he hissed, spitting the words out like poison before turning on his heel to stomp out, his arrogance severely bruised. He marched toward the exit, his mind clearly still boiling with fantasies of revenge, when he collided violently with a figure entering the shop, causing him to shout, "Are you fucking blind?" But the words died in his throat, replaced by a ghastly, marble-white pallor, as the man he had struck stood immovable, draped in heavy, flowing black robes and sporting a tall, imposing hat inscribed with the chilling mandate, "Peace under heaven." It was He Wuchang, the Eighth Lord of the Underworld, his face a terrifying shade of abyssal ink, and his gaze slowly drifted down to meet Ruan Haoshin's crumbling resolve. "Am I blind?" the deity asked, his voice vibrating with the cold, resonant echo of the grave, and Ruan Haoshin immediately crumbled into a subservient, trembling wreck, bowing so low, his forehead nearly struck the floor. "So it is the Eighth Lord. My eyes are dimmed by my own ignorance, please. I beg for your divine forgiveness. May I humbly ask what pressing business brings the Eighth Lord to this mundane mortal realm?" He Wuchang didn't even break his stride, pushing past him with a disdainful glance. "Is this territory under your jurisdiction? No? Then refrain from prying into matters far beyond your meager station," he rumbled. But one of Ruan's arrogant lackeys, emboldened by panic and stupidity, muttered just loudly enough to be heard, "Just a stinking ghost guard, swaggering about in the living world. What's he so cocky for? Does he think he's still in the underworld?" The air in the restaurant instantly solidified, the temperature plummeting to a soul-freezing degree, as He Wuchang halted and tilted his head toward the speaker. "What is your name?" he inquired, his tone devoid of all warmth, and the subordinate stammered out, "Ruan, Ruan family, Ruan Maonan." A wicked, thin smile touched the deity's lips. "Ruan Maonan of the corpse-driving Ruan family. Very well. As a price for your insolence, I deduct 5 years from your mortal span." The man collapsed to his knees, his face turning gray as he felt his life force drain away, and as he began to wail, Ruan Haoshin slapped him hard across the face, barking, "Shut your mouth and move. We are leaving, now," and dragged his shivering lackey out into the night. I wasted no time navigating the crowd to reach He Wuchang, bowing deeply. "Eighth Lord," I greeted, and he looked me up and down, his gaze lingering with a strange, analytical curiosity. "My brother, the Seventh Lord, mentioned he wanted to introduce me to an interesting fledgling. You must be the one, he mused. But then his brow furrowed, a flicker of genuine bewilderment crossing his dark features as he stared into my chest. There is a profound anomaly in your vitality, an imbalance that shouldn't exist. My pulse quickened with a desperate hope. Eighth Lord, is there a path to a complete cure? He sighed, a sound like dry leaves skittering on stone. It is not technically difficult, but my solution requires you to retain the yin while shedding the yang entirely. It would prevent your inevitable transformation into a living corpse, but it would fundamentally strip away your humanity. Should you wish to abandon the world of the living and serve in the underworld as a guard, I could pull the necessary strings to accommodate you. I felt the weight of that choice crushing my chest, and I muttered, "Give me time to ponder the cost," before he swept past me into the third-floor private room. Through the crack in the door, I overheard him conferring with the shadows, his voice tight with an unprecedented unease. "Did you conclude the investigation I commissioned?" he asked the darkness, and upon hearing the response, his voice grew heavy with finality. "No results. This Linye's entry in the Book of Life and Death is baffling. His 3 ethereal souls are anchored against the heavens, and his 7 corporeal souls are barred from the earth. In all my ages of service, I have never witnessed such a broken, impossible destiny." Bai Wucheng tapped his fingers rhythmically against the table, his expression thoughtful as he glanced toward the private room door. "Little 8, tell me truthfully, do you think this kid, Lin Ye, could truly be the chosen one we've been searching for?" He Wucheng let out a scoff that sounded like grinding gravestones, his gaze fixed on nothingness as he replied, "Impossible, brother. We both stood witness to Li Xiaoyun's record in the Book of Life and Death. It was a masterpiece of the heavens, blessed by the Tao itself, with every golden stroke radiating celestial authority. But Lin Ye's entry? It is an anomaly of the darkest order. It is shrouded in a pitch-black abyss, and no matter how many times we attempt to alter or analyze the script, it reflexively reverts to those 3 chilling, indecipherable sentences. By the way, has King Yama found a suitable candidate for that sensitive matter he tasked you with overseeing?" He Wucheng shook his head with a grimace of frustration. "No. The orthodox Daoists are too shackled by their self-righteous pride to act, and the unorthodox factions are terrified of inviting a slaughter from the righteous sects. As for the pathetic small fry currently clawing at the fringes of power, none of them are worthy of a second glance." Bai Wucheng's lips curved into a sharp, knowing smile. "Little 8, if those are your requirements, what kind of candidate are you truly envisioning?" He Wucheng leaned back, his eyes flashing with a dangerous, dark light. "First, they must possess power that defies expectation. Second, they must be utterly ruthless, a soul bold enough to offend the heavens themselves. The more lawless and unhinged, the better." A silence stretched between them, heavy with implication, until He Wucheng added, "I have someone in mind." Just as I kicked the door open, my hands laden with steaming platters of thinly sliced meat and spicy, aromatic broth. "7th Lord, 8th Lord, Brother Zhao, Brother Wang, the feast is ready, please. Eat before it cools," I announced with a polite, practiced smile, oblivious to the weight of their conversation. He Wucheng tracked my movements with predatory intensity, then turned to his brother and grinned. "7th brother, you're referring to this kid, right?" I froze, the steam from the hot pot fogging my vision as a wave of bewilderment washed over me. What could possibly link me to their mysterious, high-stakes agenda? After I meticulously arranged the dishes, He Wucheng suddenly fixed me with an unnerving, piercing stare and demanded, "Lin Yi, tell me, are you arrogant?" My confusion spiked. The question felt like a trap designed to peel back the layers of my very soul. How would I ever dare to exhibit arrogance in the presence of the 8th Lord? I replied, my voice steady, though my heart raced. The warmth in He Wucheng's face vanished, replaced by a glacial, searching intensity as he repeated, "You are truly not arrogant." I found myself trapped in a bizarre mental paradox. Was this a test of character, or a bizarre interrogation? Should I admit to a hidden, burning pride, or remain the saltfish restaurant owner I pretended to be? Bai Wucheng, observing my hesitation, finally interjected with a sigh of weary patience. "Listen, Boss Lin, the mortal realm is suffering from a rot. Too many cultivators whose lifespans have long expired are lingering on, clinging to the world through forbidden, foul spells, and they are becoming increasingly rampant. The Underworld intends to purge this filth, but we are bound by celestial protocol and cannot interfere too overtly in mortal affairs. We need an agent, an outsider, to do what we cannot." The revelation struck me with the force of a thunderclap, the pieces falling into place as Bai Wucheng meticulously laid out the stakes, the dangers, and the potential fallout of such a crusade. "7th Lord, 8th Lord, this is a lot to digest," I managed to say, my throat dry. "Please, grant me a few days to consider the weight of this responsibility." Bai Wucheng nodded, his expression softening. "Take your time, there is no rush." He Wucheng, however, was already focused on the meal, his eyes widening with genuine delight as he took his first sip of the rich, boiling broth. "Oh, this tastes remarkably good, better than anything I've had in centuries." He snapped his fingers, gesturing to the spectral staff. "Tell the ghost envoys downstairs that the 8th Lord is in a jubilant mood tonight. Everything they order is on my account." The hours melted away in a blur of laughter, spicy vapor, and the bizarre camaraderie of the dead, until 4:30 inches the morning when He Wucheng finally leaned back with a satisfied, bone-shaking burp. "7th brother, what a hollow, miserable existence I was leading in the underworld before I tasted this, he lamented, and Bai Wuchang, smiling at his brother's rare moment of human-like indulgence, stood up. That is enough for tonight, let us depart. I stayed behind as they rose, my mind spinning with the implications of their offer. I'll finish the leftovers, you guys go ahead, I muttered, feeling the strange, lingering thrill of the encounter. As Bai Wuchang turned to leave, his parting words echoed in the quiet, spice-scented room. Kid Lin, deliberate carefully on our proposal. I make you this promise. Within the walls of this hotpot restaurant, no power in the mortal or spirit realms will be permitted to touch you, and should you accept, there will be rewards far beyond your wildest imaginings. Bai Wuchang leaned back, his white robes rustling like dry whispers in a graveyard, and fixed me with a gaze that felt as though he were reading the very lineage of my soul, his voice dropping into a cryptic, teasing cadence. You are a crafty young man, Lin Ye, a sharp blade hidden in a dull scabbard, so I trust you have the intellect to read between the lines and figure out exactly what the underworld requires of you. As he prepared to depart, Zhao Huan and Wang Jing hovered near the doorway, their faces glowing with a rare, unrestrained joy that transformed their usually grim envoy countenances into expressions of genuine relief. Brother Lin, we owe you a massive debt, Zhao Huan said, clapping a firm hand on my shoulder, his eyes bright. Because of tonight, we've climbed the ladder to become the Seventh Lord's favorite attendants. If you ever hit a wall or find yourself in a desperate spot, just summon us. Do not dare treat us like outsiders. I watched them vanish into the swirling mists of the night, feeling the heavy, expectant silence of the restaurant settle back over the room until the floorboards creaked under the approach of a much more volatile presence. He Wuchang descended the stairs with a heavy, deliberate thud, the air around him still charged with the lingering, savory scent of the feast, and I bowed with practiced reverence. Eighth Lord, I hope you found the hospitality and the cuisine to your satisfaction this evening, I asked, my nerves coiled tight. He gave a single, satisfied grunt, his dark eyes glinting with a rare flicker of contentment. Indeed, it was acceptable. I offered a conciliatory, businesslike smile. Shall I finalize the bill for you, Eighth Lord? I've taken the liberty of tallying the tabs for all the ghost envoys who joined your table tonight. He brushed the suggestion away with a wave of his black-sleeved hand. There is no need for such trivialities, it is my inaugural visit, after all, so consider the night's revelry my treat. My heart skipped a beat. While I wanted to honor his generosity, my pragmatism warred with my survival instincts if I didn't hold him accountable. The restaurant's delicate balance of finances would be shattered. I insist on calculating it, Eighth Lord. Otherwise, the peace of mind I've cultivated tonight will be ruined by the accounting, I pressed, motioning for Old Song to bring the ledger. He Wuchang watched with a narrowing of his eyes as Old Song tallied the items, the scratch of his pen sounding like a verdict in the quiet room. The total comes to 120,840 ghost coins, I announced, and I watched the Eighth Lord's drunken, jovial exterior evaporate, his face sobering instantly as if he'd been doused in ice water. How much did you say? He barked, his voice rising, and I quickly explained the discrepancy. Old Song, did you check the math? I asked, looking at the ledger. With 40 tables, each spending roughly 1,000, we should be at 40,000. But there was one ghost envoy who consumed over 30,000 coins of rare delicacies alone, and once the word spread that you were paying, he invited every soul in his circle to gorge themselves. He Wuchang's expression soured into a mask of pure, murderous regret, and I could hear him cursing his own foolishness under his breath, lamenting that he should have kept his brother, the Seventh Lord, behind to foot the bill. Trying to regain his composure, he shifted his focus, his gaze sharpening with a sudden, mysterious intent. Kid Lin, you cultivate the ghost path, correct? He asked, and I nodded, my interest piqued. In my early, volatile years as a mere soul reaper, I formed a bond with a mortal master who walked the same dark path. He had no heirs, so he entrusted me with his ultimate technique, waiting for a worthy successor. Given your affinity, I've decided to bequeath it to you. My pulse spiked with greedy excitement. Eighth Lord, I couldn't possibly, I started, but he let out a sharp, resonant laugh. A mortal cultivator once groveled at my feet, offering 50,000 ghost coins for a glimpse of these secrets, and I refused him without a second thought. I immediately understood the unspoken social dance. This was not an act of charity, but a transaction of status. It is the honor of a lifetime to receive such wisdom from you, Eighth Lord. How could I possibly accept your money for this meal? Please, allow me to cover the tab in exchange for this invaluable guidance. He bristled, his ego visibly bruising. What are you implying? Do you take me for a deity who cannot afford a simple meal? I leaned in, my tone apologetic and smooth. That is not it at all. Eighth Lord, my shop relies on your reputation and your patronage, and I would be devastated to see you pay when your very presence is a promotion for my business. He huffed, a grudging, shark-like grin spreading across his face. Sigh, I will grant you face this once. Listen well. This technique is the key consuming 3 yin, a palm style of terrifying, explosive lethality, but the toll on your dantian is catastrophic. The first strike drains 40% of your yin essence, the second takes 70, and the third demands your entire reserves. My mind reeled at the sheer audacity of the art's design. The genius who conceived such a suicidal, high-output technique must have been a monster of intellect. He tapped his finger against my forehead, a surge of cold, ancient knowledge searing itself into my mind, and as the energy settled, he leaned in close, his voice a low, gravelly promise. Comprehend that. And remember, if you agree to take up the Underworld's mantle, I cannot promise you an easy life, but I guarantee you will rule the shadows of the world below. Take care, Eighth Lord, and pray, do me the honor of visiting often whenever your duties permit. I called out with a wide, deceptively sycophantic grin, watching the dark, swirling mists of his departure swallow the figure of He Wuchang, but the moment he was out of earshot, the air suddenly erupted with his muffled, incandescent fury as he realized the sting of his empty purse. Good, very good. You sniveling little brats, playing your lord and master for a fool, forcing me to squander my own masterpiece to settle a dinner tab starting next month. Your workload is doubled, and may the 10 kings have mercy on your souls. I suppressed a chuckle, turning back to the quiet, lingering shadows of my restaurant, my mind already drifting toward the secrets he had left behind. I retreated to my private sanctuary, the silence of the night wrapping around me like a shroud as I unfurled the mental scrolls of the chi-consuming 3 yin, desperate to master its lethal cadence before the next inevitable conflict. The next day, the sun hung high and oppressive when my phone shrieked, shattering my focus. It was Huo Qiushan, his voice breathless with anticipation. Brother Lin, the 7 fiend coffins have finally been secured and transported to the warehouse here in Kunming. I wasted no time, calling Jiang Baofeng, whose presence was as reliable as the Northern Star, and together we raced to the rendezvous point where the dark, heavy aura of the coffins already pulsed with a rhythmic, sinister hum. Jiang's jaw dropped the moment we pried the seals open, the wood groaned, and inside, the occupants lay in a state of preserved, malevolent perfection. Brother Lin, you actually managed to pillage these from the Ruan family's inner sanctum. He stammered, his hand hovering over the gleaming, runic-etched armor of the occupant. These are golden armored fiend corpses. Their raw, unbridled combat strength is whispered to be on par with a flying zombie. A dark, predatory curiosity took hold of me. I ran my fingers over the cold metal of the coffins, sensing the dormant power waiting to be awakened. Interesting, I muttered, the gears in my mind shifting as I calculated the implications. Tell me, Jiang, what is the market value for such rarities in our circle? He stared at the corpses for a long moment, his brow furrowed in deep thought. It is nearly impossible to quantify. Only the Ruan clan possess these, and the art of refining them has been lost to the sands of time. These 7 are essentially one-of-a-kind artifacts of antiquity. They are functionally priceless. I let out a low, satisfied breath, the weight of the danger I'd faced in Shaanxi suddenly feeling like a small price to pay for such a bounty. If this was merely one of their peripheral dungeons, I could only imagine the subterranean vaults of treasure still hidden beneath their ancestral lands. Jiang pulled me back to the present with a change of tone. Brother Lin, I've accepted a contract for a ghost-clearing job for a major developer. They're offering 200,000 each for you. And Brother Huo, are you interested? I agreed without hesitation, and by the following day, we stood at the edge of a bleak, sprawling development zone in Wenshin City, the site of a series of grisly, unexplained deaths that had haunted the construction crews for weeks. The employer, a high-strung real estate tycoon named Gao Huajun, rushed to greet us, his hands trembling slightly as he gestured toward a nearby luxury banquet hall. Masters, you've finally arrived, thank the heavens. The feast is prepared, so please, let us sit for a simple meal to discuss the particulars, he pleaded, but I was in no mood for social niceties. We'll skip the banquet. Boss Gao, take us directly to the site of the incidents, I stated flatly, and his face instantly curdled into a mask of nervous, shifting hesitation. Master Zhang, there is a small complication. A business associate insisted on introducing a few other specialists to bolster our chances, and I found it impossible to refuse. Zhang's eyes narrowed, his righteous indignation flaring hot. Boss Gao, what is the meaning of this? Is our reputation insufficient, or do you doubt our capacity? The man looked ready to faint, his composure shattering. Master Zhang, I am truly in a bind. I apologize profusely. Regardless of who finishes the task or how it concludes, your payment is guaranteed, and will not be short a single cent. Zhang grunted, his anger mollified by the promise of coin, and we followed him toward a group of figures waiting near the excavation site, their whispers drifting toward us on the wind. I caught snippets of the conversation as we approached. Old Lu, who do you think Gao hired for this mess? Hard to say, but word is a savage new player has emerged in Yunnan, a man who dared to challenge the entire Ruan clan of Shaanxi single-handedly. You mean that unorthodox menace, old Demon Lin? Another man in the group leaned toward a companion named Wang Yu, his smile oily and cynical. Fellow Daoist Wang, haven't you crossed paths with this Ling Yi? Is he truly the demon the rumors suggest? I watched, hidden in the shadows of the machinery, as Wang Yu's face twisted into a mask of visceral, agonizing trauma, his eyes darting toward the coffins in the distance. Damn him. I saw the 7-nail-sealed coffin fail to contain that wretch. How he survived defies all logic. I only pray to the gods that he isn't the one walking through that gate today. I stepped forward into the harsh, clinical light of the construction site, my presence instantly silencing the hubbub of the crowd, and the moment my eyes locked onto Wang Yu, I saw the exact second his spirit broke. My eyes locked onto Wang Yu, and a cold, sharp sneer rippled across my face, Seeing him here felt like a stroke of twisted fate, and I felt the familiar, burning itch of unresolved vengeance. So, the little piece of trash from the Shengxiao sect decides to crawl out of the woodwork, I whispered to myself, my fingers twitching as I recalled the nightmare of the 7-nail-sealed coffin incident, feeling the phantom pressure of those nails still aching in my bones. Before I could cross the distance, Wang Yu's martial uncle, a man named Jiang Ping, stepped forward with a condescending, airy chuckle, his gaze drifting over to my companion Huo Qiushan, with a look of pointed disappointment. So this is the infamous Lin Yi, Jiang Ping mused, before turning his haughty attention to Huo. You, a disciple of Gezhou Mountain, one of the 3 mountains of talismans, how have you fallen so far as to be seen cavorting with unorthodox heretics? I felt the fire of irritation rise in my chest, my voice turning icy as I retorted, do you have a personal problem with my path, or are you just fond of the sound of your own arrogant voice? Tensions threatened to boil over until Jiang Baofeng stepped between us, his face a mask of practiced calm, urging us to prioritize the contract as night had already descended, and a sycophant behind Jiang Ping chimed in, eager to move on to the business of exorcism. As we split into groups, Jiang pulled me toward the heart of the development zone, whispering, Brother Lin, just leave it. Don't lower yourself to a cur like that, but his words were cut short by a sudden, unnatural drop in temperature, the air curdling into a frigid, suffocating shroud. An eerie, whistling wind began to shriek through the skeletal steel beams of the construction site, and Huo Qiushan's expression tightened into a mask of pure dread. What kind of monstrosity is this? He gasped, and as we turned, we saw a hunched, grotesque silhouette, the cat-faced old woman, her spine bent at an impossible angle as she cradled a wailing infant. Old Jiang, tell me exactly what we're dealing with, I demanded, sensing the ancient, corrupted bloodlust radiating from her, and Jiang's voice trembled with rare, genuine fear. It's a blood fiend, a fusion of a rotting corpse and a feline spirit. It's a demon and a ghost wrapped in one, an abomination of the highest order. Retreat, Lin, it is not worth dying for this. I spun on my heel to follow his command, but the ground beneath me solidified like lead, and I realized with a sickening jolt that I was paralyzed, locked in place by the infant's burning, crimson-eyed gaze. Panic, sharp and metallic, surged in my throat, but I forced my mind to clear, channeling my intent. Fire spirit, blind that little parasite, I commanded, and a gout of intense, searing flame erupted from my side, the fire spirit shrieking as it spat a molten fireball that slammed into the creature, forcing the crone to jerk her grandson away and breaking the red, paralyzing light. I stumbled forward, my mobility returning in a rush of adrenaline. We have to neutralize the brat, or we're nothing but sitting ducks for her claws, I shouted, but the crone recovered instantly, her eyes beginning to glow with that hypnotic, blood-red light once more. I didn't hesitate, ripping a skull from my satchel and casting it into the air. The world warped around us, the construction site dissolving into the fog of an ancient, ghostly street. A ghostly illusion, Huo Qiushan exclaimed, his eyes wide, and as the crone became disoriented by the shifting reality of the dream, I lunged forward with my blade, my strike landing true and shattering the infant's soul into jagged shards of shadow. A piercing, soul-rending shriek tore from the old woman's throat, and as the illusion buckled, Huo Qiushan desperately slapped 2 small, ornate flags into the dirt on either side of her. Young essence, he roared, and the energy coalesced into glowing, ethereal chains that bound the crone's thrashing form. Jiang Baofeng let out a triumphant laugh, his confidence returning in a heartbeat. Gezhou Mountain's 2 elements evil trapping array. I didn't think you'd actually mastered it, kid. I felt a surge of grim premonition. Experience had taught me that Jiang's praise was invariably the prelude to a disaster, and sure enough, the crone's body began to swell with dark, violet energy until the chains snapped like brittle glass. Give me back my grandson, she wailed, appearing directly in front of me in a blur of movement that defied physics. I felt the cold wind of her claws inches from my throat, and with no time to think, I drew every ounce of yin from my dantian, my palm glowing with a dark, necrotic light, chai consuming 3 yin. I roared, the air around my hand blackening as I unleashed the first palm strike with 40% of my total power.